I broke up with my girlfriend over text when her dad was dying and she just took her life. I knew my girlfriend had severe issues with depression and used to want to take her life in the past, but she was on meds and it seemed to be in the past. Her dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor and was told he has not long left to live. For 8 months he was in and out of the hospital as his health slowly faded. My girlfriend was under an enormous amount of stress, lost interest in intimacy and became emotionally distant and volatile. I realized I was no longer attracted to her and felt like I was a crappy person for that and would be even crappier if I broke up with her. She eventually went to stay with her mom and dad as his health failed. I stayed behind. I ended up cheating on her with a friend of mine who I had always thought was attractive. I felt like a total piece of crap. When her dad got into hospice care, she asked me to fly out to be by her side while he died. I told her I would, but right before I was about to buy a plane ticket I felt so overwhelmed with guilt over what I did that I couldn't do it. I stayed up all night feeling sick, knowing I needed to call her, but instead like a coward I texted her that I didn't think we should see each other anymore. I ignored all of her phone calls and texts and blocked her everywhere. I blocked all her friends on social media as well. My friend that I cheated on her with and I started dating shortly after. That was 3 months ago. I have ignored every attempt she's made to get in touch with me and filed a restraining order against her. Last week I got word that she took her life. She wrote a note for me and left it for me to read, and I can't bring myself to read it. I am in such shock that I don't think I'm capable of feeling anything. I think if I were to read her note I would dissociate completely. Am I the a-hole for refusing to take my 2 younger siblings with me who have always mistreated me? Growing up, I've always felt like the outcast in my family. My older sister, younger brother, and even my younger sister have all seemed to resent me. My parents have also played their part in making me feel unwanted. My father has expressed his dislike for me, making it clear that he doesn't consider me his daughter, while my mother constantly reminded me that I was an accident and a failure. Despite the challenging family dynamic, my younger brother has always been there for me. I have taken on a nurturing role in his life, as everyone else seemed to shower all their attention on my younger sister. Once I finished school, I made the decision to cut off contact with my family, with the exception of my younger brother. We remained close, exchanging cards and frequently talking on the phone. On my 19th birthday, my brother and I planned to have a special day together. We intentionally did not inform anyone else in the family about our plans, as we wanted to avoid any interference or negativity. I simply mentioned to the rest of my family that I was picking up my brother to spend time with him somewhere. When I arrived to pick up my brother, my parents asked for a private conversation. They led me to the kitchen, where my other 2 younger siblings were waiting, appearing ready to go out somewhere. Confused, I asked what they wanted. To my surprise, my mother requested that I take my younger siblings along with us, arguing that it wouldn't be fair to leave them at home. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I expressed my disbelief to my mother, reminding her of how they had never treated me like a true family member or a sister. I also pointed out that my younger siblings had similarly disregarded my presence in the family. I firmly made it clear that I would not be going anywhere with these 2 individuals who had always acted like spoiled brats. After my response, I headed to the door where my brother was waiting, and we left for our fantastic day together. 2 days later, I began receiving calls from various relatives, criticizing me for refusing to take my younger siblings with us and for the way I spoke to my parents. I explained to my relatives the unfair treatment I had experienced throughout my life and how my parents and siblings had always excluded me from everything. I firmly stood my ground, asserting that I had no obligation to do anything for them. Now, I am questioning whether my reaction was justified. Am I the asshole for speaking to my parents and siblings in the manner that I did? Lately, I have started to doubt if I am the one in the wrong.
My unhinged best friend slept with the groom and ruined my cousin's wedding. Then she trashed my apartment after I called her no better than her father's mistress. My cousins are getting married, both related to me. They are not related to each other. And Steve is bisexual and is getting married to Tom, who is gay. I live with Alice, who is my friend in this. Alice is incredibly flirty with almost anyone she sees, which is fine. I'm not judging her for that. She has flirted with both Steve and Tom at some point during the time they have known Alice. I came home one day to Alice, practically screaming. I asked what was wrong and she showed me her phone while still crying. On her phone, she had Facebook Messenger open and had a bunch of messages from Tom. Turns out Steve had slept with Alice and now the wedding is off. I was sure this was a misunderstanding because Steve was devoted to Tom, and I know what happened to Alice's family, so I calmed her down to get her side of the story. She told me that she was at a bar and saw Steve. They got talking over some drinks and she and him had intimacy in a hotel room. I was mad. I asked her why did she that and she said, "He is bi. Why are you surprised?" I went ballistic. I called her a homewrecker for sleeping with someone she knows is in a relationship. She went back to screaming and crying and said I was betraying her. I replied, "The only one here that is betrayed is Tom. You became no better than your father's side piece." She screamed some more and I left to go sleep with my parents. I woke up to so many messages, including Alice, saying I was in a hole for using Alice's trauma to hurt her badly. My parents are on my side. My mom said I should have known given how Alice acts around people, and I haven't heard from Steve or Tom at all. My neighbor across the hall came out when I was about to open the apartment and said she heard banging around, but assumed it was Alice having another argument like there was yesterday. I entered my apartment, and it was completely trashed. The TV had a hole in the center of it, plates smashed, furniture that was made of fabric had knives in it. My neighbor followed me in and quickly left at the state of the place. My bedroom was thankfully okay. A couple of weeks, and much cleaning later, I still hadn't heard from Tom or Steve and now Alice. When Steve's father came to my door, he told me we were going to Tom and Steve's place, and he didn't look happy. We got there and Tom and Steve were there, and both looked like a mess. Tom was crying and Steve was quiet, which is unheard of. They sat us down and said to me to just be quiet and listen to them both. Alice had called Tom early in the morning after and boasted about finally getting Steve and hung up before Tom could speak. She wouldn't answer, so Tom messaged her on Facebook about it. After Alice stopped answering, Tom tried to call Steve and there was also no answer. However, the local hospital called Tom as Steve's next of kin. Steve was found unresponsive in the hotel room by the cleaning staff. He woke up after some time in the hospital. He was found with substances in his system. Alice had doctor get him. I was asked about Alice, and I said I haven't seen or heard from her since the argument, which is the truth. Tom and Steve are still engaged but will be having a long engagement, while Steve goes through therapy. They stopped living together, for them both to heal. Nothing else really happened after that. Steve moved back into their home the day before Christmas Eve. Even though Alice never moved back, apparently her rent was still being paid. I rebuilt my apartment with non-destroyed stuff between discovering my apartment and Christmas. Alice's stuff was sent to her mother's. But something happened on New Year's though. Shortly after midnight, I received a Facebook message from Alice saying I just wanted to know why Kat, father's mistress, saw the appeal in ruining a family. I sent her a message asking why, and why my family? I didn't get an answer. I found out 2 days later, from her mother, who came to my apartment crying and to collect some things left behind, that Alice drove her car into the river after sending me that message. I'm sure you can guess what happened. I am not going to badmouth the dead. As much as this entire thing ruined my friendship with Alice permanently, I am destroyed that someone I grew up with did this. I'm close with her family. I respect her mother too much. Alice has died. I choose to end my thoughts on the matter. My girlfriend and I helped her mother find Alice's stuff. We did not speak about what happened, just offered a helping hand and was there for her family. Tom and Steve found out eventually. They chose to just focus on Steve's recovery. I am told that Alice's mother did reach out to them both on what happened. They expressed their condolences. There is no bad blood between our families, just a lot of hurt and sadness over one event.
My mother's criminal boyfriend is trying to ruin her financially and she is asking me to help, but I won't do it. My mother and stepfather divorced 2 years ago after he laid hands on her to within an inch of her life. He went to prison and my mother ended up getting the trailer he owned as well as the land near it. It's a very old single-wide trailer on a little less than an acre of land. I'm fairly confident the trailer should be condemned considering it has been used for dope cooking in the past and the few times I was at it I saw rats inside. She moved into about a year ago, had a very rough winter there and has since been investing money to try to make some improvements. Nowadays, she has an on-again off-again boyfriend we'll call Bobby. Bobby is a convicted felon, kinda ironic. Bobby was only recently re-released from jail for violating his parole. He was in for nearly a year. They have had a very toxic and semi-violent relationship. Not physically violent, but the last time they broke up he threatened to burn her house down. As you can tell, my mother does have the best taste in men. So a few months ago, when he was in jail again, she gave me the paperwork to put the trailers in my name. My mother is notoriously bad with money, terrible credit, a lot of debt. She ran up multiple accounts in mine and my siblings' name before we even turned 18, damaging our credit as well. She was arrested once or twice for bounced checks back in the day but nothing major. Bobby got out again recently, and they have since decided to just be friends, but he moved in with her because he didn't want to do his parole where his mother lives about an hour away. The past 2 weeks, they have been trying to work it out because now that they live together he doesn't worry about who she might have over when he isn't there. Since then, he has been making improvements to the trailer, and now they want to put the land up as collateral on a loan for a new trailer. They would move Bobby's mother in with them, and he expects life estate. I don't really care what they do to the house, or if they move a house in. However, I won't risk the land. She notoriously does not pay her debts. They have broken up more times than I can even recall, and the last time he threatened to burn the house down with her inside it. The trailer, as it stands, will not make it through much more. It would very likely be condemned. I know she needs a house, but I feel her boyfriend is trying to find a way to control the situation and the property. He's trying to make sure he always has some kind of claim on the land. If I get it in writing that he gets life estate, they get a new trailer in his mother's name, and then they break up. That leaves us in a very particular situation. I will not put my credit on the line for my mother to have a house because I am disabled. I cannot afford the payments if she doesn't make them. She expects that if she and Bobby do this and it doesn't work out that she can just come stay with me, indefinitely. Which is also not really an option. My mother-in-law replaced my things without my knowledge and my husband said I was ungrateful. My husband and I welcomed our first baby to the world a few months ago. Since our baby was born, my mother-in-law, who lives out of state, has been visiting us once a month to help out, allow my husband and me to have a small date night, etc. We don't live near any family, so her coming out has been helpful and we have felt incredibly supported throughout the transition to parenthood. When she left the last time she visited, I noticed that all our silverware, the silverware was a family heirloom from my grandma, was no longer in our drawer, and our bath towels were replaced with ones I did not purchase myself. When I asked my husband where the silverware went, and where the bath towels were, he said that his mom thought we needed new silverware and towels so she gifted us new ones. I got pretty upset, mostly about the silverware because it was from my grandma. He says I'm being ungrateful and that his mom was trying to help and give us nice things. It's not that I don't appreciate her kindness, but to go into my drawers and closet and replace things without me even knowing feels violating, and now I will never be able to pass my grandma's silverware onto my children. The silverware wasn't perfect but I would have liked to keep it. Even if just in storage and only use it for special events. I think if she wanted to give us a gift, she should have wrapped it and let us decide if I wanted to completely replace things or just add it to what we already had. Am I being ungrateful? Update, I confronted both my husband and mother-in-law. Told them they got rid of something very special to me. My husband still thinks I should express my gratitude for my mother-in-law getting us new silverware. In the past, my husband and I have discussed getting new silverware and he thinks his mom was just helping make that happen. However, he agreed to try to get my grandma's silverware back but thinks I should thank my mother-in-law for the new set. I told him it was not that I was not thankful for the gift, it was how she crossed a boundary that bothered me. As for my mother-in-law, I told her she needs to not get rid of my item, that in the future if she wants to give us a gift she can only give it to us and I will decide if I need to get rid of something. I told my husband he needs to set boundaries with his mom and he said he would try. We will see. Update 2. My husband was successfully able to get my silverware back. We had a lengthy discussion and I laid out my boundaries with his mom. I told my husband that now that he is married to me, my feelings have to be his priority. He admitted that in his culture his mom would be considered the matriarch of the family, so to go against something his mom did would be considered disrespectful and she had good intentions but poor execution. He understands now how inappropriate his mom's actions were and promised to never allow something like that to happen again. I told him I am grateful for his mom's help and appreciate the gifts she does give us, but next time she needs to just give it as a normal gift. He agreed. Only time will tell if he means it and if she will abide by my boundaries.
What was your scariest something's not right moment? I was about 13 or so years old and walking home from school along the railroad tracks. A police officer in an unmarked Crown Vic in a suit and tie stops on the adjoining road to yell and wave me down to him. Stupid kid me starts to comply with a cop. Next thing I know a real cop pulls up behind him, gets out and approaches the man. He speaks to him a second and tells me to go home. Looking back I was this close to becoming a child abduction case. I video called my sister an hour after she had a baby. She picked up and just said I don't feel good. But something was bone-chillingly off about it. An hour later she was hemorrhaging and all her stats were in a free fall. Turns out she had a major complication that the doctors missed. The scariest time of my life. She spent 3 weeks in ICU but eventually made a full recovery and the baby was healthy and is currently climbing on me as we enjoy Christmas together. That was 2 years ago but I still remember the exact look in her eye when she said I don't feel good. Gives me chills even today.
What's a question we should never ask? So am I better than your ex? Do you have a prettier sister? When are you two having kids? My wife can't have a baby. It's honestly like having someone rip my heart out of my chest whenever we're asked. When is the baby due? Are you in yet? Why are you single? Is your daughter seeing anyone? Are you depressed or just want attention? What, are you on your period or something? When are y'all gonna break up? Too soon to call dibs? What's the best, harmless prank you played on everyone in high school? On my last day of high school, I pretended I was a substitute teacher and taught a class. That entire semester had been so boring that I knew I had to do something to go out in style. But our school had a no-tolerance policy and I was worried that they might cancel my diploma or something. So I ended up choosing to just wear a suit as my going out in style act. Little did I know, this small decision would end up granting me a crazy opportunity. When I arrived, I got a few glances and grins, and then one of my friends asked if I was dressed as one of our teachers, one who was known for overdressing often. As he asked me this, it sparked an idea. If he thought I was trying to impersonate a teacher, I wonder if lower classmen would think the same. I wondered if I could pretend to be one. The wheels started turning. I looked the part, and I had enough confidence to pull it off. And if I walked into a class that was all freshmen, there was a high probability that I wouldn't be recognized as a senior, because our social circles didn't overlap much. So as the morning bell rang, I was decided. The only thing that was missing was a class with no teacher. As I was walking to my first class, I peered in every class, looking for one with students but to which the teacher was running late. I wouldn't be able to teach the whole period, obviously, but I could run out the game as long as the teacher was late. But time was of the essence. If I couldn't find a classroom quickly, I wouldn't get any teaching time as the teacher would walk in right after me. And if I made it to my first class before I found a teacherless classroom, I'd have to go in and sit down, thus missing my opportunity. 2 rooms before my class, I found it. A class with 25 students seated quietly, and no teacher in sight. I looked up and down the halls, and saw no sign of an educator coming. So I burst through the door and started talking. If everyone would please take their seats, I'd like to go ahead and take roll. There was silence. I glanced around and saw the teacher's nameplate on her desk. Mrs. T isn't feeling well today, so I'll be subbing for her. I understand you guys were told what you have to work on, but before we begin I'd like to take roll, so if someone could please show me where the class roster is. Out of nowhere, a student says, "Aren't you a student here?" Someone recognized me, but he was too late. If I played it confidently enough, then my character could never be questioned. So I stopped, took a moment to act offended and frustrated and continued. "Yeah, I get that a lot. I know I look young, but no, I am not a student, so I would appreciate it if you don't act rude to me. As punishment, please go stand outside for 10 minutes. The entire class believed, and shot the student angry glances for asking such a seemingly offensive question. That left the poor kid no choice but to comply with my orders. Once he was outside, I continued, "I understand you all have some projects you're finishing or that need to be turned in today, so I'll go ahead and let you work on those presently. If one of you could please let me know the name of the project so I can track, for Mrs. T, what you were working on, I would appreciate it." One of the overly eager students perked up and explained the project details to me. This is about 5 to 10 minutes in now, so I'm starting to wonder where the teacher is, and if I'm going to actually fill up a 90-minute period. Just then, I see her, through a window, Coming down the hall, I turned to the class. Students, if I can have your attention. They put their pencils down. I actually am a student. Today is my last day of high school, and you've been great. Thanks for letting me sub in. And I held the door for the teacher as she walked in. My entitled fiancée tried to steal the money I saved for the wedding, so I exposed her and called off the wedding, but now she's threatening to sue me. I have been dating my fiancée for 2 years now and proposed to her 4 months ago. Throughout our relationship, she always had a habit of spending without knowing how much money she had. She works and makes nearly the same as I do, but has no savings whatsoever. She gets takeout from Taco Bell daily even though I always cook food for her. If we go shopping, she will always buy new clothes and shoes, but then come home and realize that she bought copies of the same thing. However, she refused to return anything because returning something is a bad look, and she can just throw the old copy out. I have tried talking to her about this, explaining that savings aren't just for retirement. I tell her that our vacations only happen because I save money for them, and explain to her that small expenses add up faster than we think. But she refused to listen and yelled at me, saying, "You can't tell me how to spend money that I earned by myself." I agreed with her and backed off, because she only used her own account for those expenses. Unless of course, it's a gift for me or a vacation that we are going to together, which I deal with on my own. Anyway, as soon as I proposed, she was really happy and began planning the wedding straight away. We luckily found our dream venue, and since it wasn't that popular, we set our date 2 months from now. And because we already had an out date, we started reserving vendors and services. We were mostly going to split the bill for the wedding, but I had actually been saving for this moment. It was in the form of cash, so I was planning on using it for some luxuries to make the day even more special. Little did I know that telling my fiancée about it would prove to be a mistake. I decided to tell her when she came back from work a week ago, and her reaction was a bit suspicious. She was happy but not in the way I expected. She hugged me and thanked me for doing this for her, but I said that I did it for us, since it's a special day for both of us. She got startled and jumbled over her words, saying that wasn't what she meant and that she agreed with me. I didn't think much of it and just went to sleep. The next day, I took a day off and looked for luxurious wedding options, when I got the idea of renting a car. Driving away into the sunset with my now wife while all the guests cheered from behind would be magical, and a luxury car would make that the perfect moment. So I went to check how much cash I had exactly. To my absolute shock, I couldn't find a single trace of the money. I checked where I had put it and it wasn't there, so I searched the entire house, but I still had no luck. After an hour of searching, I decided to call my fiancée and ask her if she had seen the money. She said, "Oh yeah, I took that because my friends were having trouble affording my bachelorette party. I didn't have any money saved up, so I took yours." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I asked her, "What bachelorette party? You never told me you were having one." She started going on about how it was her dream to go to Las Vegas with her friends, and that this was the perfect opportunity. But once I realized what had just happened, I told her that she had just stolen my money without asking, and needed to return it immediately. That money was meant for our wedding, and she can't just give it away to her friends for a party. But she blew up on me and said, "You saved that money because you were going to buy luxuries for me anyway. So the money is actually being used for its intended purposes. I didn't steal anything, I just used what was already mine. And besides, I won't ask for anything after this trip, so just let it go." I tried explaining to her once again that the wedding was for us, not just her, and that she couldn't just steal something. She is the one who always insists on keeping our money separate, so she should respect that. However, she still didn't listen, accused me of being controlling, and said that I was overreacting. She said that I should be happy for her and wish her a safe journey. At that point, I was literally fuming, but I put the phone down instead of yelling at her. If she wasn't even acknowledging the fact that she literally stole from me, then there is no point in yelling at her. However, that didn't mean that I was going to let this slide. Not telling me about a trip right before our wedding, and using my money without asking were enough grounds for me to break up with her. Instead of texting her, I went on Facebook and made a long post, tagging both our parents. I explained the situation, about how I felt used and betrayed. I also told everyone what her reaction was after being confronted. I ended the post by saying, "I am certain that I don't want to get married to that kind of person, so I am calling off the wedding. I apologize to anyone who has bought any gifts, and hope that you were able to return them." My phone began blowing up with calls and texts from everyone, but I ignored it because I was tired and wanted to sleep. However, I did answer my ex-fiancée's call because I wanted to see if she was going to apologize. But she just yelled at me again and called me manipulated for exposing her actions to the public. She said that she was going to sue me for all the money she spent on her nails and hair in preparation for the wedding. I just laughed and replied, "Well, I wasn't planning on reporting my stolen money because I considered it a farewell gift. But it's a different story if you're planning on suing me. Hope that the police case doesn't prevent you from going to Viva Las Vegas."
A-hole brother abuses his wife, and ends up being abandoned with the cartels. When I was born, life was happy, good and easy. My brother was a good and working person, a college dropout, sure, but always very smart, or at least that's what we thought. My brother went out every night with his friends, which was nothing alarming but very weird. Time passed and I turned 10 years old. At this point my brother had a girlfriend, a son, and had already moved out. It was fun, until my brother moved back with me and my parents. Poop truly hit the fan there. The first day we noticed an instant change in both his personality and appearance. You see, he didn't move back in alone, he came with his son and girlfriend. We asked why he came back and he simply said they had a problem and this was temporary. For his girlfriend and son this was true, but he stayed for the rest of the story in our house. As soon as they left, she cut contacts with both our family and my brother, but occasionally asked for money. Don't tag her as bad just now because she had a very good motive. My brother after this became a piece of poop with everybody in the house. Turns out his friends were actually his substance dealers. Later we asked why they truly left the other house, and he just said, "I had a fight with her brother and dad." It was vague, but it was true. Sometime around 2018 when I turned 11 we occasionally went to visit Dee and her son. One of those times my mom asked why she cut contacts. The truth was that my brother was emotionally, physically, verbally and sexually abusing her. She didn't press charges, and still refuses to do so because of fear. My mom became enraged at him, but didn't do anything just yet. Years passed, my brother stayed in our house, fights between my brother and everybody here became more and more common. My brother smoked 420 all day with 2 kids in the effing house. I started showing signs of depression around those times. More time passed, it's now 2020 and his first fight with my dad just happened. My mom was leaving to go to Culiacan and right after the fight my brother asked if he could go. My sister offered to buy him a plane ticket. This is where the revenge starts. You see, my sister bought a ticket to go, but not to come back. Mom was the one to come up with this plan. My brother didn't know this at the time. Culiacan is a city known for being home to various substance cartels. It's pretty much horrible and even worse if you are like my brother. The day my mom returned was when I was notified about all of this. I was expecting my mom to come back with my brother, but she came home alone. My brother was left alone in a hotel, with no money, no family, nothing. He tried calling us multiple times through public phones but wasn't successful at all. Unless he gets a job in a house he's either going to die of starvation or is going to get killed by a substance cartel.
What is your nobody will ever believe this story? I once left my house in nothing but a t-shirt and sweatpants in a very dark and depressed state, bought a pack of cigarettes, and told the universe that if it couldn't give me a good reason not to end myself by the time I finished the pack, I'd do it. I ended up seeing Daniel Radcliffe smoking a rollie outside of a Starbucks. I offered him a real cigarette pretending to have no idea who he was. "Oh, no, thank you," he said. "I much prefer the ritual of rolling my own." What I could have said was, "Well yeah, that makes sense seeing as you're a wizard." What I did say was, "What's your name?" Given my pact, and with nothing to lose, I unloaded all my emotional baggage on him right there. We ended up talking on the curb for half an hour. He asked me about my tattoos and listened to me recite Shakespeare. Eventually he touched my shoulder, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I know there's no good way to say this, but please don't end it yourself." He asked me some reasons why I don't. Well, my cat, my mom, my brother, right? Well, I'm glad the cat came first. Totally charming. Finally he announced that he was going to wander off that way. I'd left my house without my phone due to the nature of my pact with the universe. Having nothing but the cigarettes on me to distract me from my angst was part of it, and so made no attempt to follow him or to get his number. I went back to that Starbucks several times over the coming weeks to no avail. Parents, what did you do to your child that they never forgave you for? I once punished my daughter for failing a class in high school. Now she is 25 and we haven't spoken in 8 years. My wife and I have always disagreed on how to raise our only daughter. She was a good kid but my wife never believed in punishment and I felt like we were spoiling her whenever she made mistakes and went completely unpunished. Some examples being, when she would come home past curfew, when she would dress inappropriately, or when she would take a long time to answer her phone or respond to our texts. Like I said, my daughter was always a pretty good kid, but every time she screwed up and I wanted to ground her and take away her privileges, my wife would always convince me not to. This led to never-ending arguments with my wife, and when I look back on our marriage I'm surprised we even managed to stay together this long since we used to fight over our parenting styles so much. I love my daughter and I only ever wanted the best for her. When she was 17 I finally punished her in a way that made up for her years of unchecked mistakes, and she never forgave me for it. She has not spoken a word to me since that day 8 years ago. She and my wife are still close but she has totally destroyed any relationship we once had. It happened during my daughter's junior year of high school. She was usually a straight A student, but I received a call one day informing me she was in trouble of failing her physics class. She had been turning in all her work on time but was still doing poorly on the exams. It came as a shock to me since my daughter had always gotten excellent grades. When she came home that day, I confronted her about her physics grade. To be fair, she was super busy her junior year and was often stressed since she had a loaded schedule with sports, clubs, and AP classes as well. So when she came home that day, I could tell she was in a tense mood but I knew I needed to address her failing the class before she actually did. As soon as she walked in I told her to sit down. She looked annoyed at me but took a seat at the table. When I started lecturing her about her physics grade she told me she was struggling in class but she was still trying her best. I told her that sometimes her best isn't good enough, and she needed to get her poop together and make sure she passed this class. She got angry with me for my response, and screamed at me to please get off her back. As I said before, we never really punished my daughter harshly while she was growing up, and when she raised her voice at me like that something inside me snapped and I realized she needed a reality check. My daughter had a part-time job for about a year at that point. She used her paychecks to buy her first car, a crappy little thing from Craigslist but she loved it. I didn't know much about my daughter's life, but I knew she cared about that car. So that's the route I used to punish her. As soon as she walked upstairs after yelling at me, I went online and got a quote for junking the car. I scheduled to have it picked up and junked that afternoon, and about 2 hours after my daughter's little outburst, she got to watch a tow truck pull her beloved car out of the driveway. I stood in the driveway while the truck hooked up my daughter's car, and after a second my daughter ran outside to the driveway and asked what the hell was going on. I told her the truth. I said that she had been messing up at school and she would be paying the price after evading punishment her entire life. She was just crying and begging the confused tow truck driver to leave her car, but I paid him extra to get it out of there faster. My daughter then called my wife, who was at work, but she had her phone off. After we watched her car get pulled out of the driveway, my daughter turned to me and said, "F you." Those were the last words she ever said to me, 8 years ago. My wife tore me a new one when she got home that day, and ended up undermining me by buying my daughter a new car in the same week. It was ridiculous. Anyways, I ultimately don't regret what I did, even if it cost me my relationship with my daughter. She had to learn about the real world someday, and I know I did the right thing by being the only person in her family to show her that actions had consequences. My Aunt Abigail was skinned and replaced. I was 5 when my parents split up, and they raised me and my siblings with the help of my Aunt Abby. I always remembered Aunt Abby to make strange, almost inhuman faces at me. To a 4-year-old, this left an imprint. It got to the point where I would sometimes go into tears from fear. Now, my brother and I switch with my sister for the summer and visit my mother and Aunt Abby, while my sister stays with my dad. I always hated going away for the summer, because I never got to spend time with my friends. Due to this, I spent most of my time indoors. But one night, at 10 p.m., Aunt Abby walked into the room in which my brother and I were sitting, and got our attention in a very unsettling tone. She proceeded to tell us some old, Texas urban legend about the people in the trees who steal the skin of the residents, then impersonate them. She went into detail about the ways they could twist and warp their features. I could tell she was just trying to scare my brother and I before we went to bed, so I told her off and tried to get to sleep. But during that night, I awoke to my brother weakly shaking me awake. "Look," he said in a barely audible voice. He pointed to the door, shaking so violently you could almost hear it. At first, I could see nothing. But then, I realized the door was slightly cracked open. I had left it shut. Through that crack, there was a single visible eye, almost drooping out of whatever socket it was in. I froze, for a solid minute, with the only audible noise being the crickets chirping through the closed window. Eventually though, I worked up enough courage to get out of my tiny sleeping bag and walk towards the door. As I stepped, ever so slowly, the eye grew wider, much past the point of any living being. When I finally reached the door, I almost fell to the ground when the figure peeking through the crack scurried quickly out of view and into the hall. I ran back to my sleeping bag, fighting off the urge to scream. My brother was frozen still by this point, and took a good 5 seconds before responding to my return. "Watch the window," I whimpered. "I'll look at the D." Just then, my brother let out a muffled scream through his blanket and pulled me to the window. To my horror, I saw the most mutilated creature I would witness in my lifetime. It quickly scurried into the woods, going out of view. Neither me nor my brother got any more sleep that night. The next day, Aunt Abby was not in the house. Mother called the police, but my brother and I sat on the couch eating waffles with a scarred expression. The police never did find Abby, not alive anyway. She was found unalived on a tree branch. The reason they never found it before now was because, strangely, it didn't emit smell. The police did notice something odd though. It wasn't new. In fact, the autopsy showed that it was at least 15 years old. Fairly aggressive girlfriend stole from my bank account, so I sent her academic career into a nosedive. I'm a senior at a large state university. This happened in the first semester of my freshman year. I was selected for an honors-type program that placed me in a co-ed dorm building with every other student in the program. As a dumb freshman, I rushed into a relationship with a freshman girl who lived right above me. We'll call her Megan. It was convenient for me to date someone who lived so close, but everyone else in our building hated Megan because she talked a lot, and almost exclusively about herself. She bragged often about being a fairly aggressive person, but somehow I overlooked that mile-wide red flag. Right after Thanksgiving break, at the end of an evening class, I got a call from my mom, who noticed some unusual activity on my checking account. Back then I had no credit card, so this account/debit card was my only access to my savings while I lived on campus. I rarely needed to buy anything during the semester, so I was puzzled to find that $104.29 had left my bank account over 2 weeks, in the form of 6 Grubhub food orders. At this point, I trusted Megan, but I decided to ask her about the money right away. She denied any involvement and suggested that I cancel my debit card. After a really long phone call to the bank, I did just that. Next, I reached out to Grubhub customer service on Twitter. "Hey, my card was stolen and used for food orders on these dates. Can I have the receipts?" They sent me the first and last receipts, but they had to redact the personal info of the account holder. I say redact in quotes because they just used the Snapchat draw tool, and Megan's name was still clearly visible on both receipts. What's more, the most recent receipt was only 2 hours old. She was probably still eating when I chopped up my debit card. It's worth noting that she and I both had unlimited dining plans, paid for by our respective parents, and we lived 500 feet from the nearest dining hall. She didn't need to order food, and she definitely didn't need my money to do it. So I texted her again. "I have the receipts from Grubhub. Are you sure you didn't make those orders?" Her reply: "Fuck you for suspecting me." Fairly aggressive, wouldn't you say? I hatched a plan to collect security camera footage of her picking up the order from that evening. However, by midnight, Megan arrived at my door in tears and confessed to everything, plus she admitted to being a serial shoplifter. Exhausted, I sent her away and decided to deal with everything in the morning. By the next day, everyone in our building seemed to know what was going down, probably because Megan had already begun broadcasting her version of the story. I sent Megan a breakup text and decided that the $104.29 was a loss. At least I escaped unscathed, right? Well, Less than 2 days later, she entered my room when I wasn't looking. I was sitting at my desk when I noticed her standing silently behind me. "Megan, give me my stuff." "Where's my stuff?" "Me, what stuff?" "Megan, you know." I did not know. She tore through the room, looking for something that she refused to identify. Just as quick as she came, she was gone, and I locked the door because obviously this wasn't over yet. Within a minute, she was back. She stood outside my door, knocking and demanding I let her back inside. The knocking quickly got more violent. She started shouting, "I know you're ing in there," and opened the mother ing door. Mind that we lived in this building with students in our program who all know each other, and all of them could hear her. Pretty quickly, Megan was rattling the handle of my door. Next, she began throwing herself at it, shoulder first, trying to break it down. I lived next door to my RA, but judging by the lack of any intervention, he was elsewhere, so I whipped out my phone and texted him to send backup. Meanwhile, I saw my heavy wooden door bending and buckling. I even heard it crack a bit. My RA was on duty in another building, so he sent 3 of his colleagues to de-escalate the situation. They brought Megan downstairs, where she revealed that the stuff she wanted was just the t-shirt and keychain that she gave me for my birthday. Whatever, I let her have those. I still just wanted this to be over. However, once I shared my story with the resident life staff, they filed university paperwork to place a no-contact order between me and Megan. They also recommended I contact the campus police, who then told me I should get my stolen money back in small claims court. I couldn't even get there without a car or money to pay for an Uber. Sorry, Judge Judy. At the request of the campus police, I also contacted the Title IX office at my school, sending them the story of everything you've read so far. They were interested, to say the least, although I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted a clean breakup and a fresh start. But a Title IX representative informed me that they were bringing 3 misconduct charges against Megan: theft, threatening/violent behavior, and inciting an intervention by university staff. The representative asked me to serve as a witness in Megan's disciplinary hearing the next semester. I tentatively agreed, right before the representative set the hearing date for February 14th, Valentine's Day. I thought it was a joke, but they really did that. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, the no-contact order was still in effect, but a few of my friends had kept tabs on Megan. For starters, she failed all of her classes in the fall. Someone in my math course confessed that Megan had tried to sleep with him while she was dating me, and he had to repeatedly tell her no. Even worse, Megan kept telling a twisted version of the whole story to try and turn my friends against me. So when I found out that she had found a new boyfriend, it felt good to know that the V-Day disciplinary hearing ruined whatever evening plans they might have made. I arrived alone at the disciplinary board office, unsure what to expect. The board consisted of grad students, and the hearing was expected to run into the night. Unlike me, Megan did not come alone. She brought both of her parents as character witnesses. That wasn't even a thing here. This wasn't a real courtroom, as you'll soon see. And that's not all. Megan's parents also paid a lawyer to defend her against the charges. The board knew that was unnecessary, but Megan's parents believed so strongly in their daughter's innocence that they had already paid this 3-piece suit make her case. In the name of fairness, the board members offered me pro bono legal representation, a junior economics major, who we'll call Jimmy. Jimmy had already read my account of the events from the fall, and thanks to my screenshots of Grubhub receipts, he said there was an okay shot of the charges sticking. Then I told him something I'd kept secret for months. When Megan tried to break down my door and I whipped out my phone to text my RA, I also filmed the whole thing. Jimmy couldn't get enough of the video. There was Megan, kicking and screaming and clearly trying to break into my dorm room. It was all the evidence I needed, and no one saw it coming. In the hearing, when the time came for me to make the case against Megan, Jimmy played the video on a big screen in front of everyone. The room went insane. In that instant, I realized that Megan really had convinced everyone I was the liar. In her version of the story, I gave her permission to buy food using my account. She told her parents that she'd asked me politely for her belongings, which I'd rudely hidden from her in my dorm room. In Megan's story, I was the sociopath trying to ruin her reputation. Before I unveiled the video, it was her word against mine. I still didn't want revenge, even after finding out that Megan tried to cheat on me. But when I saw her parents flipping out at the video, "Why didn't you tell us you did this?" And her lawyer raising hell, this evidence was not provided in pretrial disclosure. And a board member standing over him, "Sir, this is not a court of law. Please return to your seat," and him shouting objection. And her replying, "We don't have objections, this isn't a court of law," and Jimmy, my new best friend, just trying not to laugh out loud. That's when I realized how good revenge can feel when it's fair and deserved. The board found Megan responsible on all 3 charges. My side of the bench recommended the university terminate her housing contact and force her to pay restitution. Her side recommended only restitution and a reprimand. The board compromised. Her family paid back most of the money she stole, most because 2 of the 6 orders had the same price, and the lawyer convinced the board I had duplicated an order, and Megan was forced to move into a different dorm building. This probably would have helped her anyway because every student in our program's building knew everything she'd done and lied about. They wouldn't speak to her, and no one wanted to be her roommate. By the time she had to move buildings, she'd already failed all of her courses again. Having paid for her tuition, her unused dining plan, her lawyer, and her restitution, Megan's parents finally pulled her out of school. Where are they now? Last I heard, Megan returned as a part-time student, but I never saw her again because the no contact order still stands. I'm now Facebook friends with the guy Megan tried to seduce. Oh, and Jimmy and I connected on LinkedIn. As for me, well, I no longer date fairly aggressive people. I effed up my marriage and it is killing me. My wife and I have been married for 13 years, and together for 15. We have 2 kids together and 3 from a previous marriage. Our marriage has been wonderful, and we have both been incredibly happy. Obviously there are bumps and obstacles, but we managed to get through it. Much of our marital success has been through communication and culpability. We own our mistakes and know when to apologize. I couldn't ask for a better partner or best friend. She's all I want. About 4 years ago we started getting a little more kinky in the bedroom. It led to us involving fantasies of other people being with each other. The fantasies, roleplay, and kinks grew and we eventually started getting comfortable with the idea of swinging. We perused the lifestyle in different mediums and played out different scenarios, but never did anything because we weren't comfortable starting this new lifestyle until my wife was happier with her weight. Over those 4 years our fantasies expanded into ideas about more poly relationship stuff. In my head I was having no issues and felt comfortable, turned on to it, and excited at the prospect of my wife being with someone else sexually. In my head, we talked a lot over this time frame to make sure we were both okay with it. She was not quite comfortable with me being with someone else, but I told her that was okay and that she could feel differently after she hooked up for the first time. We knew she would be the first because I was too exhausted to really consider putting any effort into an additional relationship on my end. So I reassured her that I was okay with her finding someone. I told her all I wanted was for her to send me pics and videos and I would be happy. I was 100% convinced I was okay. Recently she and I agreed she could start talking to guys and see where things go. Randomly, while she was wading through men on our different platforms, she was messaged by a guy she knew when we originally met. Prior to her meeting me they had hooked up. Didn't bother me. They started talking and then she asked if he could be the guy. I told her it was absolutely fine. Again, in my head it was. They made a plan for an overnight stay and things were then in the works. The day came and she went to his place where she spent all day and night and the following morning having intimacy. There was a point after she started having intimacy with him that she sent me a message excited to tell me she wrote him. Because she was partly doing this for me. She knew I had wanted this and was so happy to finally tell me it had happened. It hit me at the moment I read that message that I had made a deadly error. That I hadn't in fact wanted her to do this without me being there the first time. My heart sank. My mind went numb. And I no longer knew how to feel. To me it was like I missed something important, and not only that, but because I wasn't there I had allowed a disconnect to occur between us. I was not in the lifestyle, she was without me. I did not know how to respond to her but felt it was selfish of me to reverse everything we had been leading up to and telling her I didn't want it this way. But it was too late. Even if I had told her to come home, she had already had intimacy with him. The rest of the night into the next day was filled with fluctuating high panic attacks, anxiety, depression, numbness, and disappointment in myself. I have been angry at things I've done, but this was one of my biggest regrets. I am so angry at what I allowed and fooling myself into thinking I was okay with her doing this without me. I couldn't hide my feelings. How the F could I? They were far too heavy to pretend like they didn't exist. She felt it. With my single word responses and attempts to avoid an explanation of how I was doing, I knew she could feel the vibe had changed. I raged at myself for being such a pathetic effing insecure selfish brat. She was doing it for me. I gave her 100% confidence in what she was doing. She came home the next day and I told her. We both felt broken by this. Confused. Shaken. I hate myself because this is not how I wanted her to feel. I told her nothing she did was wrong. I don't blame her and I hold no ill will towards the guy she slept with. I don't. I am furious at myself for not recognizing what would be an issue before it was too late. She was in tears because she knew I wasn't looking at her the same way anymore, and that now she doesn't know what to do. And I told her I don't know either. It feels like the kind of heartbreak that may be akin to missing your child's first steps because they were at daycare. But it was more than that, because it began feeding into other things. My insecurities blew the F up. My paranoia jumped. My fears over losing her grew exponentially. Now I know she will start resenting me because I can't handle her doing it again unless I was there with her. But that to her is constraining now that we've been so accepting of a poly lifestyle for so long. She likes him. He made her feel good. They took pics and videos for me, which I have watched, but she wanted that other thing outside of us. Initially when she came home I didn't want to be touched, but over a few hours it was hard for me to see her in tears and I did my best to turn the switch and see if I could reverse my mentality. I held her for a while, and then I decided I was comfortable reclaiming her, which she was afraid I wouldn't want. After we had intimacy, which was amazing, I felt a little more comfortable with things and told her I was trying to figure poop out, but that I didn't want my F up to deter us from our plans, and that this issue mainly came down to me not being there the first time. It truly made me feel like my wife was in another life altogether without me. I told her it was okay to keep talking to him, but any future experiences should be done together. I could see that bothered her and I understood why. Eventually last night we got into another discussion about how distant this all made me feel from her. She asked if I wanted her to step back, but as much as I want her to, I truly don't because it's what she wants and I do my best to make her happy. I didn't want this to feel like a trap. I didn't want it to come off like manipulation. I 100% thought I was okay. That it's what we both wanted. Why the F did my imagination have to be such a powerful potent form of confidence building that I relied on it to tell me how I would actually feel? Why didn't we agree to take our initial experiences slowly and as a couple? Now every day I have a panic attack thinking about it. I didn't mean for this and I don't want it. My mom constantly disrespects me and willfully crosses my boundaries. My mom has no respect for me. When I ask her questions, she just ignores me. For example, she came into my room asking for my laptop. I was using it and asked why since she has her own. She just grabbed it and walked out. I followed behind her asking why she needed it. She continued to ignore me. She locked herself into my parents' room. No explanation. After school, I could ask her what's for dinner. She'll just ignore me. When I'm in the car with her, she makes no effort to ask about my friends, my interests or anything. She just talks about my sister. When I try to tell her something, she doesn't interact with my story / gets on her phone or she'll interrupt interrupt me. My mom also does not respect any boundary that I try to set with her. 3 years ago, I was in therapy. My mom hated the fact that I was in therapy. The therapy session was over Zoom. She'd sit outside my room and listen to everything I said. If I said something about her or something she didn't like, she'd get mad afterwards. I would ask her how she knew what I said, and she'd deny listening to my conversations. She eventually pulled me out of therapy because she hated it. And it was the worst timing because I was extremely depressed. When I was 16, I got a part-time job to save up for a car, and I don't spend the little money I earn. Ever since I got that job, I've had to pay for my own necessities. Things that your parents typically provide, such as underwear, bras and shampoo/lotion. It was to the point where I only owned 2 bras and maybe 5 pairs of underwear that were too small. I had to beg for weeks for my parents to give me money to buy some undergarments because they aren't cheap at all, especially bras. Another thing, I have a skin condition that causes my skin to be extremely dry and flaky. So I ended up buying a pretty expensive lotion online that ended up working great for my skin. On multiple occasions, I've caught her going into my room in the mornings after her shower to use my lotion on her own skin. It's not like she takes a little bit either. She will apply it on her legs, arms and face. I've told her numerous times that it's expensive and I don't want her using it since she has her own lotion. This morning, she did it again. I was asleep and I woke up to her in my room. She was rubbing my lotion on her legs, and once again, I asked her to stop using it. She started laughing and said she'd continue to use it as long as she wanted. And I told her to stop again and she said, "No, I'll continue to use it." When I buy a product with my own money, she acts like it's automatically hers to use or accessible for the entire family. For example, I bought a whitening toothpaste online because I haven't been to a dentist since I was a child. I really wanted to brighten my teeth. I was away for a weekend for an activity. When I came back, I found out that my mom ran out of her own toothpaste, so she took the new brightening one from my room. She and my 3 younger siblings used it while I was gone. I was upset because I bought it for myself and she argued that I was being selfish. I thought it wasn't fair because my 3 younger siblings who currently have a dentist, but I haven't had one for years. Their dentist doesn't take older teenage clients, therefore I can't go there. And my parents have made no efforts to find me a dentist. While my younger siblings are able to get braces to fix their teeth, I've gone through middle and high school with crooked teeth. When I bring up how unfair it is for me to be the only one without a dentist, my parents yell at me and say they're too busy to actively look for a dentist for me. I haven't been to a dentist since I was in the 5th grade. I'm a rising senior now. All of my friends' parents, especially their moms, are extremely involved in their lives. For example, my mom refused to go prom dress shopping with me. She didn't directly say it, but she implied that she had better things to do. I ended up shopping alone or with my aunt. When it was time to pick out my shoes, my mom was annoyed that she had to come with me. She didn't even pretend to be interested. She sat on a chair in the corner of the store while I tried on different shoes and FaceTimed my friends for their opinions. Since I'm going to graduate next year, I've started looking at different colleges. My mom doesn't ask about my future plans or act interested when I talk about college. Even when she's available, she doesn't join my dad and I to visit colleges. She has shown no interest whatsoever in my future, college plans or anything regarding future careers. It could go on with the examples. I can't help but feel like she doesn't love me. At least not as much as she loves my siblings. She doesn't treat them the way she treats me. I've never given her a reason to hate her. I don't get in trouble at school. I get good grades and I rarely ever go out. She's very involved in my siblings' lives, but does the bare minimum in mine. Honestly, it hurts my feelings a lot. I know I probably sound like a dumb teen, but I honestly don't know how else to turn to. It just hurts a lot. I'm sorry if I come across as dramatic.
I kicked my mother-in-law out of the delivery room. For the past 3 months it's been a very well-known plan that when I, 30F, went into labor, my husband was going to drive me to the hospital and my mother-in-law was going to pick up my mother, my kids and my grandmother, all from one house. Both my mother-in-law and my mom were supposed to be in the delivery room. My gran was to watch my 2 kids in the waiting room. Everyone was in agreement with the plan. Now, my husband and I have 2 sons already, and for both births, my mother was present. She helped me through so much of the mental anguish and panic, especially after my last, whom literally almost killed me. I was bleeding out on the table and my mom was the only one able to keep me calm. I needed her to be with me with this baby too, mentally. So we worked this plan out months in advance and everyone was on the same page. However, I go into labor. We make the phone calls to mother-in-law and my mom, telling my mom to be ready and my mother-in-law to go get my mother. An hour and 15 minutes later, mother-in-law shows up at the hospital without my mom, my kids or my grandmother. She said, "Well, it's late so we need to just let everyone sleep." It was 9:30 p.m., and then sat her ass down on the chair in the delivery room and jumped on her phone. I told her in a pissed off tone to go get my mom. That was the plan. I needed my mom, etc., and she just wouldn't. At one point saying that she didn't feel up to driving that much. My mom lives 20 minutes from her house, an hour away. So, I told her to get the F out of the room and that she was dead to me. The amount of resentment and disgust that I felt toward her in this moment is honestly not something I feel I will overcome in any time soon. She was pissed, saying that my mom got to experience 2 births already and how she didn't do anything wrong and she was just being respectful of people's sleep, and where she wasn't leaving, she was actually escorted out. Now, my mom was able to make it to the hospital literally just as I was giving birth. My kids and my grandmother weren't able to make it, which bothers me a great deal. We promised our kids they would be the first to meet their sister, outside of us and Grammy. I cannot forgive my mother-in-law for this at all. I honestly feel like I hate her with every fiber of my being. But I'm being told I'm taking this too far and that it wasn't that big of a deal.
I did it. 7 years ago, when I was 24, My wife was ended in a horrible car accident, leaving me, in complete shock and grief, as a single father to our 2 kids. At the time they were 1 and 3 years old. I didn't have any post-high school education and was working as a construction worker. Before my wife passed away, we both worked full-time and were able to rent a small but nice house. But as a single working parent, I could hardly make ends meet and had to move into a tiny apartment. That Christmas, when I didn't have enough money left over to get my kids the gifts they deserved, I really knew I had to do something. I started taking college classes at night while working 2 jobs, and after 5 long years, I graduated with a BS in mechanical engineering and got a job making 6 figures. I bought a nice house with a huge yard for my kids to play in, built them a treehouse, and have enough time off to spend plenty of time with them. Last week, I took them on a camping trip in the mountains. It's not until now that I really let myself believe that I actually did it. What is something you've overheard while pretending to sleep that you wish you didn't? My very conservative family is big on going on family vacations. My parents never liked to spend a lot of money though. So for 1 week during the summer, my sister and I found ourselves in a cheap far away from civilization. One year, my ultra-conservative parents allowed my sister to bring her boyfriend to the 2-bedroom cottage for a few days. My parents slept in 1 bedroom, and of course, they demanded that I be a gentleman and let my sister sleep in the 1 remaining bedroom. Whatever. I'm pretty laid back. But the fold-out couch sagged something fierce, so when I centered myself on the bed, the sides were practically encompassing me. My conservative parents, of course, were not about to let my sister's boyfriend sleep in the bedroom with my sister. Oh no. He was fortunate enough to get a tiny old rusty cot, which my parents set up right next to me by my luxurious fold-out couch. We had electricity and we had running water, but that was about it. There was never that much of anything to do. But I enjoy reading, so I didn't mind family vacations. One night I was on the fold-out couch reading a particularly good book. It was around 1 a.m. when I finally turned off the lamp and decided to get some sleep. So I turn off the lamp, put my head down on the pillow, and then a few seconds later, I hear the slider door open. Apparently, my sister and her boyfriend were outside drinking by the campfire. They were both giggling as they came into the cottage, and by their failed attempts at whispering, I could tell that they were both at least a little intoxicated. Not my business. I didn't want to make things awkward for them, so I pretended to be asleep. I had my eyes closed and was keeping my breathing even. A few seconds later, I heard them kiss goodnight and they went their separate ways. My sister went to the bedroom, and my sister's boyfriend plopped on the cot right next to where I was pretending to be asleep. So not even a minute later, I'm half drifting off to sleep, and I start hearing noises in the direction of the cot. It sounded like fapping. Very cautious fapping. I was around 18 years old at this point. I've been around the block. I know how to recognize the telltale sounds of fapping when I hear them. So, yeah, my now brother-in-law was on the cot right next to me, smacking his meat to images of my sister. The cot was really effing small. I'm pretty sure my sister's boyfriend's legs were dangling off the edge of the cot. But in any case, the entire cot would shift and squeak every couple of seconds. That he was doing the dirty. I didn't want to make things awkward and interrupt the guy, so I made the ultimate bro sacrifice. I kept my breathing even and let the guy finish. Looking back, it was kind of funny, because occasionally he would get carried away and realize that he had made too much noise. He would pause to listen and see if I had woken up. But I kept my breathing sort of heavy and even throughout the ordeal, so he eventually would get confident and keep going. Towards the end, the cot was practically like, hopping up and down. And then things finally grew silent. I knew he had finished. And sure enough, a few seconds later, he made the rookie mistake of accidentally letting go of his sweatpants, and I heard the classic flop as they came back to his stomach. So, yeah, I had a hard time looking my sister's boyfriend in the eye the next morning. Hey man, you still have the MacBook Pro? Yeah. What's the lowest you'll take? Lowest I'll go is $700. $200? Sure, why not? Okay, where do you want to meet? 101 Main in Burlington in about 10 minutes? Sounds good. Hey, I'm here. Cool. Head inside. Into the comedy club? Yeah. Then head up on the stage and tell your jokes to somebody else. What is your most this is not happening moment? It was a hot July afternoon in 2017. I was getting ready to jump in the shower to go work for a few hours when I heard a knock on the door. I had a pair of gym shorts on, so I went and answered it, and to my amazement, there were a bunch of cops outside. They told me they had had a complaint of loud noise and possibly domestic violence. I just laughed and said no, that's not here as I live alone, and they said well, that's okay. One of them asked me if I had any ID on me so they could go about their business, and I said sure. My wallet was on the wall right by the door, and so I pulled my ID out and handed it to one of the officers. He looked at it and asked me if I could step outside. Again I kind of chuckled and said yeah, no problem. As soon as I stepped out of the door of my house, the other officer said turn around, put your hands behind your back. I looked at him kind of funny and I said what for? He said turn around. So I turned around. I put my hands behind my back. Suddenly I felt handcuffs. As they set me down in front of the house on my bench, I asked one of the other officers what this was all about. He said there's a warrant out for your arrest. Now mind you, I have never been in any kind of trouble at all in my life, and so again I kind of chuckled. I said what kind of warrant? The officer said I don't know, it's from out of state. Now I'm starting to get a little freaked out. So the officer leads me into the car. All I have is my gym shorts and flip-flops and my cell phone. That of course was taken from me. As we're driving to the jail about 45 minutes later, I asked the officer what this is all about. He said I really don't know, It's an out-of-state warrant and we've got to take you to jail. And it looks like there's a no bond clause on this warrant, which means until I figure out what this is I'm stuck there. I was put into a holding cell with about 15 gangbangers in Fort Lauderdale Broward County Jail. About 11 that night was transferred to a holding jail. Given a 2-inch mattress and a blanket and told to go to sleep on the floor. At this point I've asked probably 4 or 5 officers what's going on and nobody seems to know. I haven't seen an attorney and I don't have any telephone numbers memorized. Stupid smartphones. So the next day I ask an officer again what's going on and how do I find out. He comes back and simply says it's an out-of-state warrant, you'll have to wait to see the judge. I said I want to access my cell phone so I can find some numbers and call somebody. At that point they told me they won't let me unless there's a court order. Here's where it gets really bad, as if it wasn't bad enough already. I don't see a judge for 8 days. Yep, you read that right, I'm 8 days in jail not having any idea why, not seeing an attorney and having no access to call anyone. I finally see a judge on the 8th day and he tells me it's an out-of-state warrant and again he doesn't know what it's for and I have a choice, I can fight extradition or I can concede to extradition. If I fight I'm going to probably be there for 60 days minimum and possibly be let out. If I concede I could be there another 45 days before they take me to the other state. So I conceded and I asked him for the court order to access my phone. The judge says he's never heard of having to have a court order to access a cell phone but reluctantly gives one. On the 9th day as I asked to again access my phone I'm told that they're not going to allow me to access my phone even though they have a court order because the phone battery is dead. Now I don't know what to do. This is the 9th day and it turns into the 10th and 11th and 12th etc. On the 23rd day, no one in the world knows where I am. I'm assuming my kids probably think I'm dead, as they live in another state. North Carolina shows up to extradite me on the 23rd day. During this 48-hour trip where I'm shackled hand and foot in the back of a van, I finally convinced one of the officers that is driving to access their Facebook account and message a friend of mine to try to get a phone number. They do that and of course my friend thinks it's a scam. Finally I gave him information that only I would know and I get a phone number. On the 25th day in North Carolina I finally found out what the charge is. Former client of mine from 4 years prior in a business that I had had and signed over to another partner have accused me of taking $20,000 and fleeing the state. I laughed again. But not real hard this time because this was getting real. As I'm booked into their jail I'm trying to figure out what to do. The next day I finally saw an attorney. He doesn't have too much information for me but tells me what the charge entails and what the possibilities are for sentencing and things like that. A few days later he comes back with what they call discovery, which is evidence on me from the district attorney side. As we went through that I found no evidence at all pointing any kind of criminal activity to me, which of course I knew because I hadn't done anything. However, I did find a receipt from an unknown company that was in my former partner's handwriting and had his home address as the address for the unknown company. The amount receipted was $12,000. I told my attorney what I found and then was escorted back to my cell. Days and weeks go by. No news at all. The total amount of time I spent in this jail was 52 more days. They demanded $25,000 in cash in order to release me or I was just stuck there. I had access to no money at all. However, I had finally called my buddy who had gotten in touch with my sister and they had let my kids know what was going on. On about the 44th day I had woken up with some pain. Looks like I had caught an infection and it was in my right ball. Had no way to contact a nurse except to put it on a message board requesting medical. There was no medical that day, there was no medical the next day, even though I requested it again. 6 days later I finally had seen a nurse after I told them through the message that it has gone into my ear. She gave me one antibiotic pill that day and told me I would get another the next day. On the 51st day I saw my attorney and my attorney had told me at this point the DA is not going to offer a plea bargain because the evidence against you doesn't make sense. However, there is a possibility that there will be a plea bargain offer but it probably won't be for about 6 months. If at that point I plead not guilty it may be another 6 months to a year before there is a trial. At this point I just tell my attorney that we need to speak to the DA. He says he doesn't have time to do that and I said no problem. Give me the name of the DA and the telephone number and I'll have my sister three-way me and we'll call him ourselves. Something amazing happened at that point. The next morning my attorney arrived and told me I was getting out that day. The state released me on my signature with no money involved. So I left North Carolina on a Thursday evening and had to take a train back to South Florida. I got home Friday night. Fortunately through this time I've spoken to my landlady, even though I had been evicted because she didn't know where I was, she let me stay. My car had been repoed, the companies that I have done business with had cancelled contracts, and one had even charged me back almost $75,000. But at least I had a place to stay. So I begin to regroup the next afternoon and I noticed that my eye's hurting. By that night I couldn't see from my right eye and it was in so much pain that I had to call an ambulance. Long story short, I ended up staying the night in the hospital with an infection that had gone into my eye behind my eye and was in the process of getting ready to attack my brain. I lost sight in my right eye that day. Ended up several months later having to have a cornea transplant. The transplant was a year and a half ago, and I still can't see very well out of the eye. Today is July 22nd, almost 2 years from the arrest and the case still hasn't been closed. I've been told over and over that they're going to dismiss the charges but they haven't done that as of yet. So that's my answer to the day I said, is this really happening?
Have you ever gotten a teacher fired? She was a sub, but her contract with the district got cancelled after this day. I was 17. The day was the 1-year anniversary of the death by suicide of my best friend. The SS teacher was out that day, but some of us had presentations. She recorded them so that the actual teacher could grade, but the timeline remained the same. One of the presentations was on teenage suicide. The agreement with my actual teacher is that I would be excused before they brought their material up. The sub did not follow the directions. When I got up to exit, the sub yelled at me to sit down. When I went to her to explain, she told me to sit the fuck down and shut up. I was not allowed to leave, and my pathetic attempts to explain why I were not acceptable to her. I was in tears, of course. I left the class anyway. Followed by half the class, directly to the office. My counselor went to the classroom, interrupted the presentation, had her collect her belongings, and escorted her to the office, to be dismissed. It was a rough day for me.
What's your best walk of shame story? In college, one of the bigger sororities had almost weekly socials at their sorority house. These socials were just formal spring and summer parties. These girls were wild. Their brother fraternity, who was always there, was just as wild. To say that these parties were fun would be a deep understatement. My roommate at the time was dating the vice president of the sorority, so he went to these socials every weekend, and by proxy, I was always invited. I was single at the time, so I was always game to party with these girls. There was one caveat: this sorority had a strict no guys sleeping over policy. This created an interesting problem. If you met one of the sisters that you had a rapport with, hooking up at the sorority house was not an option. Furthermore, pledges were not allowed to sleep anywhere else but the sorority house, thus making it impossible to hook up with a freshman or new pledge. The sorority's president, we are going to call her B, had achieved legendary beach status. If rumors were to be believed, she would crucify and steal all of the future children of any pledge that broke the rules. It was known, especially among the fraternities, that B was not to be effed with. She could put a man in his place with so much as a stare. Despite this, she was very attractive. Tall, former volleyball player, pale-skinned brunette. Heaven help any young fraternity pledge that made a pass at her or behaved in any sort of chauvinistic manner in her presence. At best, she would destroy their masculinity with her words; at worst, she could get them blackballed. Have I painted a clear enough picture of B? Stick with me, these details are important for the climax. Oh yeah, small but important detail, B was also my roommate's girlfriend's best friend. Let's get to the night of my story. It was a humid Saturday night in late June. My roommate's girlfriend invites me to her sorority social that evening, but throws me a curveball. She tells me that I have to keep B company. Now, up until now, I've been to 5 or 6 of these socials and only had minimal interaction with B. Frankly, the stories of her righteous beach hammer scared me enough that I would consciously make myself scarce if I ran into B in the sorority house. My roommate's girlfriend must have sensed my uneasiness, and immediately assures me that she's actually pretty awesome if you get to know her, and that she only has that reputation because she's protective, and finally that B is totally crushing on me. I reluctantly agreed to keeping B company, fully expecting to leave the social that night with one less ball sack than I currently have. Since this is already running long, I'll skip the finer details of that night and give the cliff notes. Scared as I was, B was surprisingly sweet to me. She drank a little more than I recall her doing in the past, and got very touchy with me. She fed me drinks well into the wee hours. Not being much of a drinker myself, this got me absolutely tossed. At some point we went to her room and proceeded to hook up, and did so quite loudly for a few hours. Here is the turning point in the story: she told me to stay with her. Remember how I said guys were not allowed to stay the night? The sorority president was breaking her own rule. Now comes the shame. Around 8 a.m. the following morning, my roommate's girlfriend, along with 5 other sisters, entered B's room. B and I are both naked as jaybirds, under the sheets thankfully, when they enter. My roommate's girlfriend and the other sisters proceed to read the riot act to be about breaking the rules and allowing a guy to stay the night, and how unfair it is that their boyfriends are not allowed. B is silently listening to their concerns. While this is going on, I am nervously trying to grab my boxers off of the floor with my toes. I manage to get them, and slide them on under the covers. I stand up out of the bed and grab my clothes to make my hasty retreat. Out the door. Roomie's girlfriend stops me. Atlantic Fit, sit down, you are the evidence. At this point, I decided silence and complacency is my best course of action until this spat reaches its conclusion. After a few minutes of back and forth, B relents, and agrees to change the rules to allow a guy to stay one night a week. It was at this juncture that I got the feeling that this was a setup by my roommate's girlfriend, as she was always complaining about how he could never stay with her because of the house rules. I slowly began to suspect that she had planned this with the other sisters and that I was just the catalyst to make this change. When the other girls left the room, I quickly dressed, assured B that I would call her, and left the room. The front door was on the other side of a breakfast nook that I had to walk through to leave. The entire sorority is sitting in this breakfast nook, discussing what just went down in B's room. As I pass through, they all fall silent, staring at me. My roommate's girlfriend says, "Thanks for your help, Atlantic Fit." As I shut the front door, I hear 30 sorority girls burst into laughter like a coven of witches. To this day, I have never felt so used. What does your pet do that is really stupid? My partner and I have 2 cats, Carl and Lucy. I've had Carl for much longer. He's my bro. Always follows me, sleeps on my face every night, massages my scalp when he's hungry in the early morning. I love the little guy more than anything. But Lucy has made me realize over the last few months that either Carl is an idiot or Lucy is brilliant. Lucy nudges not quite closed doors open with her head. Carl tries and usually fails to wrench them open by putting his paws under the crack and prying or pushing, often opening and closing the door multiple times as he tries to figure it out. Lucy watches patiently as I poo, knowing she'll get her cuddle soon. Carl jumps on my lap, assuming it's belly rub time. Lucy slices open thin food liners, potato chip bags, mostly, and feasts. Carl gets his head stuck inside the bag and stumbles around the apartment completely blind. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten home from work to find him with an empty bag of Doritos on his head. Lucy hangs out and watches the waterfall during showers. Carl hops in and gets soaked for a brief moment before realizing his error and bolting. Almost every morning, Lucy watches birds and rabbits from the window. Carl pounces at them, straight into the window. Lucy naps on my lap, knowing she'll get some loving. Carl naps on my neck, apparently not knowing he'll get removed. Lucy toys with the Christmas ornaments. Carl gets trapped inside the tree for several hours at a time. Lucy drinks from the toilet if left open. Carl falls into the toilet if left open. Lucy got fixed last week and has a cone. Carl somehow managed to get it off of her and stuck on his own head, backwards. I found out that my wife let her sister and her boyfriend stay at my late wife's cabin, so I lost it and told them to move out. I lost my late wife to brain cancer. All her life, she has lived healthy and always loved spending time traveling and going on road trips. She was always an outdoor person, although she had a demanding career. She had a high-paying job while I was earning money that barely paid for bills. We were married for 5 years. We bought a cabin together that we used for holidays and weekends. After her passing, I couldn't set foot in it for a whole year. Everything was the way she left it. I don't go there often, but only on big occasions when I need to feel closer to her. My family suggested I sell it, but I couldn't bring myself. The idea of selling it makes me feel like I was losing her all over again. So I left it as it is. I married my now wife 6 months ago. I have 2 step-kids filling my days with joy and comfort. Lately, my in-laws have been having issues, specifically my sister-in-law. She lost her job, and her boyfriend had nowhere to live. We invited them to our place for 2 months, and my brother-in-law took them in. My wife days ago told me my brother-in-law had an argument with his sister and kicked her and her boyfriend out. I asked when that happened, and she told me about 2 weeks ago. I then asked where her sister and her boyfriend were staying, and she took the time to answer. I wondered what was wrong, and she flat out told me that her sister's been staying at my late wife's cabin for 2 weeks. I was stunned when I heard her, so I asked her for more clarification. She said she gave her sister a copy of the cabin key so she could stay there until she found a job. Then she said she didn't tell me because it wasn't a huge deal. I couldn't help but lose my temper. I told her she had no right to hide this from me and let her sister into the cabin, knowing how I'd feel about it. She said my reaction was precisely why she hid it from me. I called her selfish and inconsiderate of my feelings, but she argued about wanting to help her younger sister and said I was greedy for not supporting the family during tough times. The kids walked into the kitchen, and I just stopped arguing and walked out. My wife followed me. I demanded that she call her sister and tell her to move out and hand over the key. My wife looked shocked, saying she expected me to react this way but did not go as far as to demand that her sister move out and called me cruel for making her look destructive to her family. We kept arguing till her sister moved out and brought the key. My wife packed her things and went to stay with her parents. She told me that my late wife was obviously more important to me than my family and that she wouldn't come home till I got my priorities straight. I haven't visited the cabin after her sister left. I haven't been feeling well these days and I'm not ready to see how the place looks now. I just need time to calm myself down to be able to go there. My wife is taking the kids with her to her parents' house. I miss the kids, and she won't let me speak to them. This is another problem because my heart feels heavy when I'm away from them. I miss them and can't stand the house without them there. Pawn shop workers, what is the weirdest customer encounters you've had? Once we had a very large woman bring in this bizarre looking machine with some white liquid inside of it. She sets it on the counter and says, I want $500 for it. We're just staring at the machine and then looking at her, and finally, the pawnbroker goes, what is it? It was a homemade breast pump. This woman made her own breast pump, used it, and thought she would get $500 for it. So weird and gross. Many people trying to bring in their tattoo guns and equipment. I don't know if other pawn shops take stuff like this, but any in my area is a hard pass due to bodily fluid. And some of these people get pissed when you tell them no. Screaming about how they spent $6,000 on it. We had this guy who would dig through garbage cans and try to bring us stuff to sell. Not uncommon, but it was very obvious that this shit was straight up from a dumpster and he dug it out like 10 minutes before he walked in the store. One time we had to kick him out because he was losing his mind over the fact we wouldn't give him $15 for a desk lamp that had a broken bendy neck. Despite the fact the pawnbroker pulled up the exact lamp on Target's website selling for $10 not broken. This guy just did not get it and was calling us all bitches and cunts over it. One of my favorites is the lady who called asking if we take books. We told her we'll consider collector item books, but before we could explain, she got all excited and said that's exactly what she had. Then she hung up. Now when I say collector's items, I mean like first editions or one of those special edition books. This lady proceeds to come and ask for help carrying in 10 totes of collector books. These collector books were 10-cent romance novels that you can buy in bulk from any thrift store. The conversation was the following. Pawnbroker, ma'am, these are not collector's items. We can't give you anything for them. Lady, what do you mean? They are collector's items. They are all from the same publisher and everything. Pawnbroker, yeah, that's not what makes them collector's items. I'm sorry, we will not take these items. You could consider donating them to a thrift store. Lady, are you kidding me? Do you know how many years I've spent cherishing these? They are collector's items. I am a collector, and I collected these. Pawnbroker, I'm sorry ma'am. Lady, I will not be leaving this store until I get at least $300 for my collection. We ended up having to call the police because she sat on the floor of the store 5 hours ranting and raving about us and how we were a scam. She basically held up all our business that day. The last straw for my boss was when she opened the door and screamed at the top of her lungs like a 5-year-old and then slammed the door so hard that the glass shattered. What's the most ridiculous rule in your place of work? I once needed a pen. Figured this was a reasonable ask. Went to the supply closet on my floor, which was locked. Asked the floor's admin. She told me to go to the main supply room in the basement. Went to the basement and explained my situation of needing a pen. They told me all requests for supplies must be approved by my department head. Problem is, being new, I'd never met my department head. She also worked in San Francisco, I worked in Milwaukee, so I needed to send an email both introducing myself and asking her if I had permission to get a pen from the supply closet. Ended up asking my buddy, who gave me a handful of them from a box of pens he bought. 2 weeks after I left my previous job, a memo went round saying people aren't allowed to look out of the windows at work anymore. I work in a huge glass building. I used to work for Amazon in Ireland and their toilet breaks were crazy. Maximum of 10 minutes a day but also a max of 20 minutes per week. You had to change the status on your computer so everything was recorded, and some managers would call you out on it and even go as far as threaten your job. I had an understanding with my manager and told him if I need to take a dump then I'm going for it. Like any good manager, he just told me that as long as I give him the numbers he wants then I could do whatever I want. When I was in the military, I saw a buddy of mine sitting outside crying. I went and consoled him best as I could. Apparently he was just depressed and unhappy. After he was feeling a bit better, I went to go and find someone to tell them what was happening. They knew. In fact, he had been crying so much lately that they had instituted a no crying at your desk policy, which is why he was outside. Fireman. Our risk management department decided long ago that poles were too risky for us, so we use the stairs. We have poles, just can't use them. Anyway, now the newest rule is no free weights, as in no free weights to work out and stay fit. Run into burning high-rise buildings by all means, but walk around the station carrying 40-pound dumbbells. Too risky. No accusing other staff members of being witches. Yeah, it happened, so we had to make a rule. I run a hostel in Uganda. I found out I am not the father, Maury style. My for the streets wife cheated on me for all of our marriage, and has the audacity to act like the tests were faked. I met my wife when we were in high school and we married in college. We have 5 beautiful children together, and up until a couple of weeks ago I thought that we had the perfect marriage. We were typical high school sweethearts. We go out together, we never fight. I feel like I've done everything a loving husband should do. Never in a million years would I ever have suspected my wife of being disloyal. She's always done everything she could to support me and take care of our children. Now, my eldest daughter recently had an ancestry test done. And the results of the ancestry test said I was not the father. I could hear Maury music in the background. She confided this to me privately, showing me the results, and I could tell she was visibly upset by this. Of course, the first thing I did was reassure her that no matter what, she's my daughter and I'll always love her unconditionally. But secondly, the two of us decided to get an official paternity test since the ancestry tests are not completely reliable. It comes back and I am indeed not her biological father. This news really broke me. I'm ashamed to say I broke down in tears in front of my daughter. The combination of finding out about my wife's infidelity and how upset I was making my daughter by how I was reacting. I really wish I had kept it in for her sake, but I didn't. Following this, I asked my other children, except my youngest, to come and see me. I wanted to know the extent of my wife's infidelity. If it was a one-off, I could maybe work past it, especially given how long ago it would be. However, I didn't want to tell my youngest as she is still in school, a teenager, and really I didn't think it was appropriate to tell her yet. We told the other 3 what has happened. I reassure them that I love them unconditionally and that I'll always be their dad, but that I need to know how long this has been going on. God, I can't begin to explain how touching their reaction was. They didn't care I wasn't their biological father, they were just upset at how heartbroken I was. I feel like the only thing that has kept me going these last couple of weeks is their unwavering support. So we have paternity tests for each of the 3 done. Not only are none of them my biological children, together 4 of my children have 3 different fathers. Which somehow made it worse. It's like, she wasn't just having an ongoing affair, she was having multiple? I can't explain how this make it worse, but it just does. I feel like the woman I loved was just a for the streets woman. So I confront my wife with this, expecting her to confess and beg for forgiveness. She doesn't confess. She doesn't even take it seriously. She says the tests must be flawed. All 4? How the hell am I supposed to take that seriously? I keep bringing it up and she keeps brushing it off, getting progressively more annoyed at me. When I bring it up, she will try and guilt trip me. We've been together since high school, do you seriously not trust me? Etc. She even tried to suggest that I must have faked the results so that I could get a hall pass out of the relationship. But how am I supposed to trust her in the face of such overwhelming evidence? My wife wants a threesome for her birthday. My 26 wife, 29, and I have been married for about a year now. She is turning 30 soon, and as she and I were discussing what she wanted for her birthday, she said that she wanted a threesome. She said she wants to try adding another partner into the mix. I'm not gonna lie, I was taken aback and my gut reaction was to feel a little hurt, as if all the work and effort I put in to please my wife in the bedroom isn't good enough. I think she saw that, and was very quick to clarify that she still loves being intimate with me, and loves my body, but that she wants to explore her sexuality and try having intimacy with a girl. She said that she's bi-curious, which is a phrase I've never heard before. She said she has someone in mind that she's discussed being bi with, and who has suggested maybe trying a threesome to explore this aspect of herself. When she said that kind of felt like a betrayal, like she's been flirting with and talking to someone else about potentially having intimacy with them. I just would never flirt with anyone outside of our marriage, or talk to anyone else about having intimacy with them. I felt kind of hurt in that moment, and I told her I would think about it, and we haven't talked about it since, but things have been super awkward. I love my wife very dearly. I like to think that I'm the kind of guy that would climb into the sky and tear a star down for her if she asked for it, and my feelings for her would not change if she came to the conclusion that she really is bisexual and came out as such. And a very horny part of me honestly does think it would be super hot to watch her with a girl, and I understand that she's not doing this to try to hurt me, or hurt our marriage, but rather to try to get to know herself better. But I just am not sure I want to open our bedroom to a third partner. I don't think that it's right for our relationship. I feel like intimacy is a really sacred, intimate part of our relationship that is just for her and me. I don't want to add another partner. I like monogamy. I'm probably the only straight guy in the world who doesn't want to have a threesome with his wife and another woman. Again, the horny part of me thinks it would be hot, but my brain and my heart are telling me that I should say no, even if it's what my wife really wants. She and I talked about this today. I asked who the girl was, and it's my absolute least favorite of all her work friends here, which confirms my theories that her friend, who now is just a video star, she makes enough money on Only Servants to pay all her bills now, is just a predator trying to pick apart our relationship. I don't even want to be around this woman even with clothes on, and I especially don't want to be in an intimate situation with her. I told her that I don't want to open our bedroom to a third party. She pouted for a while, but she agreed that if that's what I think is best for our marriage that she'll drop it. We'll find other ways to explore her sexuality together. I think the idea turned her on, but she wasn't too committed to it actually coming true. I hate being the guy that has to keep telling her no to some of these wilder intimacy ideas though. I honestly feel kind of bad, because I told her we shouldn't post our intimacy tape, which was a turn on for her, and now I'm telling her no on this. I don't want her to feel like I'm restricting her, and I don't want to restrict her. I just want to maintain good boundaries for our marriage. We talked about the emotional cheating aspect, and how I wasn't comfortable with her talking to her friend about it first, and she gave me more details and let me read the texts. 100% it was her friend goading her and egging her on, which is a relief, and I feel dumb for ever doubting my wife's loyalty. This is only an idea that her friend has brought up in the last few weeks, so she's been pretty quick in bringing the idea up to me. My brother's perfect wife and I had an affair, and her dying wish was for me to tell her husband about the affair. I don't know whether I should tell him. My brother Richard's wife Sarah recently passed away from cancer and he's absolutely devastated. At the moment, he doesn't want to see or speak to anyone, only his daughters. He has twin daughters that are 12 years old and they're absolutely wonderful girls. The thing is, I'm actually the true biological father of those girls. Sarah had an affair with me shortly after they had gotten married. This lasted 4 months and I'll even say those months with Sarah were amazing. My brother Richard, who now owns his own sports bar, was helping his best friend with his own bar at the time. While Richard was away, Sarah and I became much more closer and comfortable together. We went to Vegas for the first time, traveled everywhere together and cared for each other in ways we never expected. There was plenty of unprotected intimacy with her during these 4 months, which obviously led to the twins being born. Sarah was a beautiful, sweet and incredible person. So silly and hilarious, someone you really wanted to spend time with. She'll light an entire room up with her smile alone. I'm not sure why we did what we did, but what's done is done. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, because I loved the time I spent with her. We just so happened to be alone for a certain time at that moment. We became friendly and very close, things happened unexpectedly. I'm not going to debate with you all if Sarah and I are assholes for having an affair. We know what we did was wrong, but at the time it felt absolutely right and we didn't care about the consequences. Eventually she did get pregnant and around the same time Richard returned. I got DNA tested to see if I was the father, which I obviously was, and everything came back positive. But what happened next was unbelievable. My brother's perfect wife and I had an affair, and her dying wish was for me to tell her husband about the affair. I don't know whether I should tell him. So Sarah used the time my brother returned back home as the reason she got pregnant. I assumed they had intimacy and Sarah used that as the reason for her pregnancy. We had a mutual agreement that we were never going to tell Richard what happened as it would devastate him. As the twins grew up, they began to look more and more like me. I don't think Richard ever clued in. Richard loves the twins so much, it's beautiful to see. He actually teared up when Sarah announced she was pregnant. He really wanted to be a father so badly and he finally was. He's a wonderful father and the twins are very attached to him. I don't blame them, he's a really fun and sweet man and I'm sure the two girls feel very loved and safe with him. When Sarah got cancer, Richard was obviously devastated. Near the end of her illness, Sarah told me that eventually she would like Richard and the girls to know what happened between us. She made me promise to tell them. I promised her that I would just to give her some peace. She passed away last month. I still have not told Richard and I don't think I ever will. He has been hyper-depressed since Sarah died and telling him this would just devastate him, let alone ruin our relationship. His daughters are the only people that are with him, they're super strong girls loving and are comforting their father through all of this. For 12-year-olds, they're very strong and it definitely shows how strong the bond is between the three of them. For all practical reasons, the twins are his daughters. He is the one that has raised them and neither of them know any different. Especially since Sarah died, I think it would just be cruel to tell him that his daughter's not even biologically his. On the other hand, I did promise Sarah that I would tell him the truth. I know I personally would want to know the truth if I was in Richard's position. But that's just me. I wouldn't want to break his heart again. He's gone through so much. I don't know if it would be better for this to be out in the open or not. A Rican beauty. Heck, I remember quite vividly how she used a machete as a tool of all trades in the garden and told me she used it for therapy when she was whacking out roots. She would imagine people who had pissed her off or hurt the people she loved and just go all in. Anyway, at 9:17 p.m. she takes her last breath. She tells me she waited a good 15 minutes, just in case. I know it is not supposed to be funny, but it is kind of hilarious at the same time. I don't know. So this third go-round and all the tears are spent and we just sort of stand there quietly moaning while also wondering WTF just happened over the last 3 hours. What's the most disrespectful thing a doctor/nurse did to you or your newborn after you gave birth? I was scheduled for a C-section on a Tuesday morning, but went into labor on Saturday. I'd had 2 previous cesareans and the contractions I was experiencing that day were alarming. Very late on Saturday night, I opted to go to the hospital because I was afraid of a uterine rupture or any of the other horrors the doctor had told me about when she denied my VBAC request. The nurses at the hospital said I was fine and planned to send me home until my scheduled delivery on Tuesday. I expressed concern about the intensity of what was happening, but they dismissed my fears entirely and gave me a shot of morphine before sending me back home. Things continued as they had been, but the intensity was manageable, so I showed up Tuesday morning as instructed and the delivery went great. Baby and I were healthy and all was well. On Thursday morning, they said that we would be discharged that day, but hours passed with no update or discharge. Finally, I asked my nurse what was up and she tells me that turns out they can't discharge us because my delivery day blood test showed opiates in my system. So the safety of my child was in question and I would be visited by a social worker. Given that I do not use opioids, I was horrified and confused. It took me another hour to calm down enough to realize that morphine is one such drug and the nurses in this very ward had shot me up with it roughly 50 hours before my delivery day blood test. So I called my nurse back and told her what had happened over the weekend. She went to check my records and sure enough, the note was right there that the opiate in my system was given to me by her own coworkers. We were discharged within 2 hours of that conversation, but the complete incompetency of the doctor and L&D team at that hospital cemented my decision to never seek care at that facility again. Note that I am answering only the question of disrespect at the time of giving birth. You would be shocked at the things this doctor had said to me during my regular prenatal visits. She is an absolutely horrible woman. Horrible.
Life advice can just fuck off. Cheaters never prosper. Yes, they fucking do. Ignore the bullying and it will go away. Like WTF is that logic? If you are actively letting bullying happen to you, it will only get worse. Money doesn't bring happiness. Maybe not, but with it I can pursue the things that make me happy. Love your family no matter what. Nah mate, some people have families that are just cancer. Kill them with kindness. Fuck that. Sometimes a person needs to be told what's up. Anything involving the idea of soulmates can really set you up for a big fall. Don't be depressed, there are other people doing worse than you. Thanks, I know that and try to help them sometimes. But that won't help my depression leave just because I compare myself to other people having a worse life than me. Everything happens for a reason. Tell that to a mother who lost her son to a drunk driver. That going to college will guarantee you a high-paying job. I heard that shit all my childhood and it just absolutely is not always true. Trade school degrees that are way cheaper can pay more and give you a better chance at a job. Wish someone would have told me this 15 years ago.
People who have found a dead body, what's your story? I was on a project in Georgia for several months in the early 90s. I was taking a worker to the hospital to get something removed from his eye. On the way to the hospital we drove up to a horrific accident. It must have happened only seconds before we pulled up. It was a late 80s Firebird with 3 women, one of them very pregnant, and an infant. The other vehicle was a large dump truck. I rushed to the car and tried to open the passenger door, but it was too mangled. I ended up removing the remaining glass from the back and diving headfirst into the car. The infant was on the floor of the front passenger side, lifeless. I wriggled through everything and picked it up as carefully as I could and yelled for someone to pull me out. I then handed the baby over to a woman who said she was a nurse. I went back into the car and took the pulse of the driver. She was the very pregnant one and was basically crushed at the waist, nothing. The woman in the back seat started moaning and I did my best to keep her from moving around, so I just spoke with her and held her head still. The woman in the passenger seat was unconscious but breathing, barely. About that time the first responders showed up and I asked me to stay where I was if I could while they removed the mangled metal around us. I was also applying pressure to a bad laceration on the woman. Those guys were really good at their jobs and had the top and passenger door off in minutes. They replaced my shaking hands with a backboard, etc., and then I was picked up and moved out of the way. About the time I got sat down exhausted I got word that the infant had started breathing, thanks to that awesome nurse, and was being life-flighted to Atlanta. Since I was originally taking a worker to the hospital, we continued on our original mission. At the hospital I told one of the ER doctors what we had just left and that they should expect some major trauma shortly. 15 minutes later they brought in the woman from the back seat. She lived as far as I know. The 2 women in the front and the unborn child were brought in by ambulance but were never unloaded. The doctor just went into the ambulance and pronounced them dead. Two things that stay with me from that are 1. I will never forget the smell of that much blood for the rest of my life, and 2. I will never forget the sound of the dump truck driver crying on the side of the road. He just kept saying that they pulled out right in front of him and there was nothing he could do, and never stopped asking if they were dead or not. I told my fiancée that I didn't want to take care of her children. I was gutted when I returned home and learned that they moved out. I have been with my fiancée Tina for 9 years now. She has 2 sons with her ex. One is 14, and the other is 12. Both are good kids. I've always been there for them with 0 issues. Tina has always provided for the kids financially and hardly asked me anything. Money was never an issue. The issue is time. Well, she just gave birth to my baby 8 months ago, a perfect baby girl who is the absolute apple of my eye. I didn't know I could love this much. The problem is that it's grown increasingly apparent that I just want to spend time with my daughter. I'm barely home, I work 6 days a week, and Tina works from home. When I'm home, I just want to hang out with my daughter because I'm barely able to. I work at 5 a.m. and don't get home until 4:30 to 5 p.m. I only get 4-ish hours to hang out a day. I want to scoop my daughter up and just hang out with her. That's it. That's all I want. I'm already missing so much. But Tina's 2 sons, every single day, are asking me to hang out with them as soon as I get home, to play pass with them, to go to the park with them, to go swimming or fishing or whatever else. I keep getting irritated because dividing my time and not spending that time with my daughter is physically paining me. Tina asked me last night what was happening because she said she could no longer ignore that I was acting like I hated her sons. I told her that I didn't hate them at all. I love them a great deal, but I can't ignore the fact that I have 0 desire to divide my time between them and our daughter, considering our daughter is growing like a weed, and I'm already missing everything. She looked highly hurt and said that her sons kept asking why I didn't like them anymore, and she asked that I talk to them. I told her I would eventually speak to them, but it would be nice if she could explain to them that I'm trying to be a dad. She said, yeah, well, you seem to be forgetting that you played dad for 9 years before you had a baby, and now you're pushing them away like last week's garbage. She was getting snippy with me and visibly irritated at this point, so I just snapped and said, I don't want to effing take care of your kids right now. She starts crying and walks away. I tried apologizing later, but she wouldn't speak to me. I tried hugging her, but she asked me not to touch her. She slept in the nursery. I went to work this morning. I just got home, and they are gone. Most of their stuff is gone. There's a note on the table that says, I will not jeopardize my older kids' mental health for the sake of your feelings. I will bring our daughter to see you once daily, give you time with her, and then leave again. We can work out a custody agreement when she's no longer breastfed. I wish you the best. I'm gutted. I called my buddy just to vent and cry or whatever. He said, well, isn't this what you wanted? Now you get time with your kid without distractions from kids that aren't yours. I don't know how to feel. I didn't mean I wanted them to leave, and I didn't imply that I didn't love them anymore. She won't speak to me. Said, I will not be answering texts unless they are about our daughter, and has not returned my numerous phone calls to fix this. Am I the a-hole? What obvious hints have you missed from a woman? 1. One time, I was on a dinner date with a woman. We went back to her place after dinner. She tells me she baked a cake, and it just needs to have some icing put on it. She grabs a big bowl of icing and slathers it all over the cake. After icing the cake, she says, oh look, there's still some leftover icing left in the bowl. She puts her finger in the bowl, covers it in icing, looks me dead in the eye, sticks her whole finger in her mouth, and slowly licks all the icing off her finger. I have a piece of cake, thanked her for a lovely evening, and left. That night, I woke up at about 3 a.m. and screamed into my pillow. I still cringe about that encounter when I think about it. 2. She wanted to show me how cold she was, so she grabbed my hand and put it on her nipple. I walked home that night thinking it was cool to have touched a honker. I hate me, so you don't have to. 3. In a college, a girl and I worked together for about a year, usually late nights in a campus food court that was relatively quiet. Over time, we became better friends. A week later, I said one sentence, complaining about my dorm's laundry being in the basement and not working well. She mentioned I should come to do laundry at her house instead and that her mom is gone for the weekend, so that she wouldn't mind. I brush it off, but she keeps bringing it up and saying there's a movie on Netflix she'd like to see that weekend. 2. 19-year-old me is thinking, why would driving my laundry to your house be less annoying than taking it to my building's basement? I just keep changing the subject. It took me about 6 years to realize that one. 4. I hate how much I see myself here. I was friends with this banging girl, and we used to go to the gym together when we lived on the same street. One cold night after the gym, we walked home, and she mentioned that she couldn't wait to take a warm shower when she got home. I told her I forgot to turn on the hot water at my place, so I'd have to wait around in my sweat. She said I should just come inside and shower at her place instead, adding that her roommate was gone for the night. I said showering there would defeat the purpose because I just get cold again on my way home. She started speaking but cut herself off and just wished me good night. I realized it months later only when she told me. 5. We were chatting at a bar, and it was getting late. I asked her if I could get her something, and she said, nothing now, but you can buy me breakfast in the morning. I asked her if she wanted to meet somewhere for breakfast. I'm embarrassed just thinking about it. 6. Went to a dance with this little smoke show. I thought we were going as friends. After parties were held at a hotel, so we each got a room. I walked her back to hers, and she asked me for more drinks. We chatted, she unzipped her dress, rolled over, and asked me for a back rub. She wasn't wearing any underwear or bra. What did I do? I gave her a back rub. She made no move on her at all. I thought nothing about it until 30 years later when I was like, oh, she was coming on to me. Update 2. I left a party after a stupid prank, and it tore my family apart. The family pranks I described had seemingly stopped, but some of them slowly resumed. However, they were only harmless little things that just gave me chuckles. The only person that they refused to prank at all was me, due to previous events. Of course, that didn't stop their entitlement. The 7-year-old son of one of my cousins stole my phone during a family birthday party at my parents' house and intentionally broke it rather than return it. His parents were already going through a rough patch. My cousin's father was constantly clashing with his wife over how to parent their child. His now ex-wife was a bad enabler of their son. She's also terrible with money, and has a very her way or the highway attitude, and she doesn't like to back down when wrong. She was one of the more outspoken people that hated me bringing my own chair and never sharing it, although she never got physical about it. She once confronted me and said that if I was going to bring my own chair, it should be something nice and made of wood that doesn't fold. I told her I was not going to lug around a dining room chair wherever I go when a folding chair takes up only a little space in my trunk. She argued with me about it more, and got nowhere. None of the family events were at her house, and she does not dictate my life. She gave me death glares for months but otherwise left me alone. The night her son stole my phone, he'd already been grounded from electronics by his father. The kid took my phone when I set it down on a table to eat some cake, and he ran off with it when I wasn't looking. He holed himself up in the master bedroom closet and was trying to install new gaming apps on my phone. That closet had a lock on the door and the key was lost years ago. The brat refused to come out or return the phone. His mother kept telling us all to just leave him alone and let him game on it. But I refused and said my phone was not his toy. The brat was told several times to open the door and he refused. All the while his mother kept contradicting everything said. My cousin got fed up and started forcing the old door open. It's an old manufactured home, and that door was pretty flimsy. Just as he was making headway, we heard loud banging sounds from inside the closet. The brat had started banging my phone against the nearest hard object he could find. The brat let out some loud screams as his dad pulled him out of the closet. The screen on my phone was nearly destroyed. Thankfully the rest of it was protected by the case. My cousin's wife tried to blame it on me, and said it was my fault her baby broke the phone because I wouldn't let him game on it. Everyone in the room turned on her and she shut up out of cowardice. It cost around $300 to repair my phone and I had to use a temporary one till mine was fixed. Thankfully, my cousin paid for the repairs. Well, the rest of the family knew about my cousin's wife's disdain for folding chairs like the one I keep in my car. And they decided to pull a prank on her because of her attitude after the incident with her son stealing my phone. I would like to be clear that I was not involved in this in any way, nor did I really condone doing it. But the entire thing was out of my hands. My cousins got together and decided to prank that girl and got their hands on a whole bunch of folding chairs. Then they removed every chair and seat in her house and replaced them with the folding chairs. Folding chairs at the dining table, folding chairs at the counter, folding chairs in place of the living room furniture, and more were strategically placed around the house. Even the chairs on the porch were replaced with them. When my cousin's wife came home, her reaction went far beyond what anyone thought. Their plan was to just record her having a tantrum and get a laugh. But she ended up going insane on the spot and tried to get a knife from the kitchen to attack her husband with. When she couldn't get the knife, she pulled out pepper spray from her purse and used it on everybody. Then she attacked her husband with her long fake nails. She probably would have tried to claw his eyes out or something, but thankfully one of the other guys there kicked her off him. I couldn't believe this poop happened all because of folding chairs. I feel like the root cause since I'm the one who was always bringing my own chair to family events since there was never enough seating and people kept taking the places I was sitting. And it escalated far beyond me. Police were obviously called, the wife got arrested, all the guys there had to go to the hospital because of the pepper spray in their eyes, and my cousin had to get all the scratches to his face treated. He looked like a bobcat attacked him. He filed for an immediate order of protection against his wife. They'd recorded everything, like her trying to get the knife and screaming she'd stab somebody. She had to go stay with her sister after spending some time in jail, and her sister I hear is as narcissistic as she is. My cousin obviously filed for divorce, and his wife later spent some more time in jail after pleading guilty for the assault. She wasn't allowed near her son for a while and tried to take it out on my cousin in court during the divorce. That did not go in her favor because he was easily able to prove how unhinged she is. My cousin got primary custody of his son and his ex got only supervised visitation since she was so mentally unstable. She's pretty much abandoned her son, and has shacked up with some fat older man, gotten a serious tan and bleached her hair. I guess she'd rather live the life of a sugar baby caked in makeup. My cousin's son was put through counseling and listens to his father more now. The kid has to be babysat a lot since my cousin has to work. The last time I babysat him, he took my phone again but didn't end up smashing it. That's progress.
I went through my boyfriend's phone and found hundreds of photos of my best friend. Please help. Let me just start off by saying that as awful as it sounds, I still love my boyfriend with all my heart and I want to do everything I can to be able to work through this with him. My best friend has always been much more attractive than me and the guys I get involved with always seem to be attracted to her to some level. Honestly, after years of this happening over and over again, I just begin to expect that the guy I'm with is going to crush on my best friend at some point after he meets her. This is why I will usually wait a long time to introduce my boyfriend to my best friend since I know that they will probably get fixated on her just like all my other boyfriends in the past. For context, my best friend is extremely beautiful, like supermodel level beauty, and it's not a mystery why every guy that she interacts with gets so entranced. Anyway, I have been dating my current boyfriend for about 10 months now and I really believe that he is the love of my life. I've never had someone be so kind and attentive and loving to me, and after almost dating for a year I figured I trusted him enough to introduce him to my best friend. I should have assumed that all men are the same and I don't even know why I'm surprised after finding out what I did. We went to dinner with a bunch of my friends and I introduced my boyfriend and my best friend for the first time. His eyes got wide and he made a comment to me that my best friend was really pretty. I just said yeah and rolled my eyes, but ever since that night he began being really secretive with his phone and I started to get suspicious. I wasn't suspicious that he was talking to my best friend since she would never do that to me, but I was feeling insecure with his behavior either way. I thought he might have realized that he could do better than me and he was trying to cheat on me, maybe on dating apps. All of these anxieties just got to me, and the other night I went through his phone while he slept. I had learned his passcode by looking over his shoulder, and what I found in his phone was truly disturbing. I opened his photos to find literally hundreds of photos of my best friend. There were so many screenshots from her Instagram as well as secret photos that he had taken of her from far away at the dinner where he met her. I thought that things couldn't get weirder until I found photos that had only been on my phone, meaning that he had gone into my phone just to find extra photos of her. It stung so bad to see that he had sent himself photos of me and her from my phone and cropped me out of them just to get a better look at her. Like I said, this kind of thing has happened to me before in the past, but never to this level. But I just can't bring myself to want to break up with him. Even though I know that this is some really sickening behavior, it doesn't change how I feel about him, and I'm not ready to give him up even after discovering this. What I do need advice on is how to deal with this within my relationship. I know I have to confront him on this, but I just want it to be as healthy of a conversation as possible and I have no idea where to start.
I am going to ghost my cheating girlfriend. I am moving back to my home country and she doesn't know, lol. She thinks it's an official trip for a couple of days, but I am gone forever. The cheating incident and its aftermath made me realize how important it is to have your family near you. I used to cry in the middle of night with no one but her to console, so of course I cried silently. To see your girlfriend on your bed with another guy, him being her best friend, yeah, that does a number on you. I was sure we will get married, but maybe life has better plans for me than a cheater. She still maintains that it was a one-time drunken mistake and will never happen again. She has cut him off and has joined therapy and also given up drinking, and I have given her absolutely no indication that I have gotten a job back home. The salary is not what I get right now, but the cost of living is not as high and family is there. Just one more week, so please wish me luck that I can keep up the charade till then. And any advice for me? We dated for 4 years before she cheated on me. Those were 4 happy years.
My fiancé gave her ex one last gift before he died. His name is Tom, age 34. He passed away a month ago. They had a long-term relationship that lasted for 6 years. She was the one who ended it and I met her 2 years later. When I heard of his passing I was shocked as I didn't even know he was sick. And my fiancé never mentioned it, though she had a habit of bringing him up once in a while. After the funeral I noticed that she became distant and quiet. She'd refused to even make contact with me. I kept thinking she must be in the midst of heavy grief but still felt something was not right. I tried asking her to open up and she refused and sort of shut me out for a while. Yesterday I came home and found her crying. She refused to let me sit next to her or comfort her in any way, even refused to let me talk to her. I didn't know what to do other than to wait till she'd calm down. She then told me she had something to tell me. She started talking about Tom and his illness and who was there for him / who wasn't, etc. She then told me she was contacted by him 3 weeks before his death asking to see her. She said she felt hesitant but then went. What she said next shook me. She said he told her about stopping his treatment for a while and how he felt alone and discouraged. He proceeded to ask if she could spend one night with him as his final wish before he passed on. She said she thought about it a lot and felt conflicted but eventually agreed. They spent the night together, I know what night it was now, and ended up having intercourse. She started crying again, swearing that didn't feel anything that night nor afterwards, and swore that she did this out of guilt towards him. Now she's feeling 10 times more guilty. I'm in an utter shock. I have no idea how to react or what to say. She keeps pleading with me to be understanding of the position she was put in and not wanting to dismiss his request in his last days. I still don't think it's an excuse to do what she did. She said it wasn't about her or how she felt but about Tom. I still feel like she's wronged me and betrayed my trust and damaged the bond we have together. She hasn't stopped begging me to understand and forgive so we could move past this, but I feel like I'm not the same after I found out about what she did. Regardless of her intentions and the fact that he's not around anymore.
Have you ever falsely accused someone? My boyfriend and I planned a movie night yesterday. Today I went out and bought a lot of snacks and even made some at home, but then after I finished preparing everything I sat down waiting for him. He said he'll be home by 10 but he just never showed up. I blew up his phone with calls and text messages at the time, and I was so worried that I even thought of calling the emergencies, but then at 3:40 in the morning, he enters the house. I could see his eyes were soulless and he reeked of booze. I lost my mind when I saw him like that. I lashed out at him saying that whatever excuse he comes up with, it's not gonna clear up the booze and returning home at 4 in the morning. I told him, were you at the bar? Or at a club with some girls? Or maybe you were with some friends completely forgetting about me and that's why you came home late. I also said, you were probably drinking with some girls perhaps? Because that's totally what you were doing. And I cannot believe I waited for you when you were at some club. He just sat emotionlessly on the couch. Then dropped the bombshell. He said that his little brother had just got in an accident, and that he was with him the whole night in the hospital until he passed away an hour ago. I was speechless. I couldn't do anything but get on my knees and beg for his forgiveness. I could have even kissed his feet if he hadn't stopped me, so I ended up holding him in my arms, and listening to him spill his feelings out. In his own words, he called me yesterday, telling me about how he just got his first girlfriend. He was happy and we talked for 4 hours straight. He was telling me how he got a gym subscription because he wanted to be strong like Big Bro. He kept asking for advice. We laughed, and we talked seriously, and we even mocked and joked about each other. I can't believe my baby brother is gone. Afterwards we got into bed, and I gave him some immaculate neck to cheer him up.
A conversation with a stranger on the bus. Huh? I asked, pulling off one side of my headphones. I said I like your boots. The man repeated, oh, thank you. I had a bunch of pairs exactly like them for years and years. A good working boot, you know? They definitely are. I use them every day on the job. Where's that at? Turner Construction. Ah, yes. You're building that big old thing up on East Avenue, ain't ya? Yes, sir. It's going to be one of the biggest in the city, so it seems. I used to do construction too, you know? That was way back in the day. I started back when your mama was probably a toddler. Oh, yeah? With a company, or freelance, or, my papa had a small construction and carpentry business. He hired me on when I was, maybe 15 or so. That was all the way back in 1962. We built houses, mostly, a couple small apartment complexes. Nothing as big as what you're working on. Did you like it? Boy, you bet your ass I did. Working all day was a free gym membership. Ha! Plus, all the perks that came with it. Perks? He smiled. Can you keep a secret, boy? Yes, sir. You ever play in a construction site as a child? When I was a lil one, me and my buddies would sneak into houses being built and explore them. Maybe break a couple bottles here and there. Yeah. My neighbors and I used to do that when I was a kid. My house was one of the first built in our neighborhood, then the rest came later. We probably explored every house on the block before they were finished, when they were just wood skeletons, maybe breaking a couple bottles too, to tell you the truth. Of course you did. Who wouldn't, given the opportunity? But that's all the childish stuff. The real perks came later in life, when I was an adult. Oh yes, boy. Imagine this. The year is 1980 with no cell phones in sight. You talk up a pretty lady at the local bar and hit it off. You tell her about your new construction project, and she wants to go see it. Aha, well then you take her there. You and her all alone in a skeleton of a home, as you said. Wouldn't it be a little more private back at your own house? More private, sure, maybe. But much messier. I paused. How so? Well, you don't just take a girlie down to a construction site at night just to get your diddly fiddled with. You take her for, no, I don't know. For the easy disposal, boy. Disposal? You cut the girlie up, or do whatever your preference is. You do whatever you want to do with her, and you put her under the house. You bury her in your stained clothes under there too. Once the job's done, no one will ever see that stuff again. It's gone. Eventually, a brand new house is sitting on top of your deed. The bus rolled to a stop. Well, this is my stop. He stood, patted my shoulder, and I recoiled. He walked off the bus. The only thing running through my mind was a memory. I was a kid, no older than 6. My friends and I were playing hide and seek. I hid in the crawl space under my front porch, and when I was hiding, I found a pair of boots half buried in the dirt. The exact same type of boots I was wearing then, on the bus. The exact same type of boots we'd found in the crawl spaces of every house in our neighborhood.
I sued my ableist teacher and it made my family rich. I have a weird medical condition that most people have not heard about. It's simple really. I have an overactive bladder due to nerve damage, but I never thought it would make me rich. Ever since I was a child, I have had to go to the bathroom to urinate about every hour or two. It's honestly a very difficult condition to live with. My life is constantly being interrupted. I can't sit and watch long movies. I have to always know where the nearest bathroom is and it keeps me from doing a lot of the things I want to do. I'm only 18 now, but I often find myself worrying about how the rest of my life will be so different from others because of my condition. I was diagnosed when I was 13 and ever since then I've had accommodations at school so I can use the bathroom whenever I need to. I was given a permanent bathroom pass. Every teacher I've had since my diagnosis has known about my condition and been very understanding. I've never had a teacher tell any other students about why I was able to leave class often, and I like having privacy around my condition. I never had any issues with my teachers when it came to my medical condition. That was until I started my sophomore year. I had this old teacher named Mrs. Hannigan. She was generally unpleasant and would go on long rants about complaining about my generation and how we got handed everything we needed. She would go on and on about how us kids didn't want to work hard and got participation awards for everything we did. She was annoying and no one in my class liked her. I had only been in her class for about a week until she decided to publicly humiliate me. I had been using my bathroom pass like normal and I just assumed that she had been told about my condition and why I needed to leave so often. Mrs. Hannigan's class was about an hour and a half long, so I typically used the bathroom at least once, maybe twice during her class. This day, I needed to use it. Twice during class time, but when I stood up to leave the room the second time, Mrs. Hannigan decided to call me out in front of everyone. I started to walk out the door and she said, loudly, "Wow, you really can't hold it at your age? You need to get your act together, young lady." A bunch of my classmates started giggling. I felt so embarrassed and I wanted to sit right back down even though I really did need to go. I looked at the floor and told her that I was sorry but I really needed to go. She looked back down at her computer and said, "Once during my class is enough, you can certainly hold it until after class. Now sit back down and finish your work." I wanted to cry. She wasn't giving me a chance to explain and I didn't feel comfortable telling her about my condition in front of the whole class. I ended up sinking back down into my seat and fighting for my life as I tried my best to hold my pee until her class finally ended. By the time I got to the bathroom, I was bursting and I was in a lot of pain. It was awful and I cried out of humiliation in the bathroom. It also hurt to urinate after I had been forced to hold it. I was dreading the next day, since I knew she might say something again if I tried to use the bathroom during her class. Sure enough, the day came, and even though I had used the bathroom right before her class, I had to pee 2 more times while I was sitting in her classroom. The second time I was dreading getting up. I just knew she was going to call me out. I was appalled when I started to leave the room and I heard her say, in an extremely loud voice, "Well, if it isn't the PP princess strolling off whenever she pleases again." This time the entire class started laughing. I just froze. Mrs. Hannigan walked over to me and began speaking in a low voice. She said, "I don't know how you managed to fool all your teachers before me, but I won't be playing this childish little game with you. You are a young, healthy-looking lady, and I see no reason why you're unable to wait to urinate after my class. Your days of walking out of your classes whenever you feel like it are over, and I advise you to use the toilet before my class, because I won't have you coming and going wherever you please." I had never been spoken to like this by an adult. By the way, she spoke. I assumed that yes, she had been informed about my condition, but she simply didn't believe it. I had no idea what to do, and I just felt like a scared, nervous little kid in that moment. She told me to sit back down, and I did. As soon as I sat back down, I knew what was coming. I could only hold my urine for about 10 more minutes before I felt my bladder give up. There was still 20 minutes left in the class, and I had to sit in piss-soaked pants for that entire time. Afterward, I tried my best to cover it up, even though a couple of other kids noticed, and I heard whispers as everyone exited the classroom. Either Mrs. Hannigan hadn't noticed or didn't care that I had soiled myself, so I went straight to the office after class and asked to call my mom so she could bring me clothes. I told the secretary everything that had happened with Mrs. Hannigan so far, and she looked concerned. She ended up going to the guidance counselor and the principal and informing them both of the situation. When my mom showed up with my clean clothes, I broke down and told her everything that happened as well. I have never seen my mom so angry. She went into my principal's office and they stayed in there talking for a long time before I started to hear my mom raise her voice. When I got home that night, I overheard my parents talking about the situation. That was when I found out that they planned to sue Mrs. Hannigan and the school for not reprimanding her. Apparently, in the office that day, my mom demanded she be punished or put on leave, but all they said was that she was from a different time and she didn't mean to harm me. My mom told them that she had already harmed me, and that our family wouldn't stand for this. After that day, Mrs. Hannigan continued to treat me horribly, but she never commented on my bathroom use again. It took my parents about 2 years, but by the time I was graduating they had won their case against the school. Apparently, since it was a disability-related suit and I was a minor, the settlement the school paid out was extremely high. My family ended up making enough money that both my parents quit their jobs and we ended up moving into a much nicer house. When I think back to that awful day when I had the accident in Mrs. Hannigan's class, I don't want to cry anymore. I just smile thinking about how my parents and I ended up getting the last laugh and Mrs. Hannigan learned not to discriminate against her students' disabilities. I want to call off my wedding because my husband is embarrassed about my culture. I'm 26 years old and am getting married to my husband, 28. I'm from a small village, and moved to the US 5 years ago. That's important because in such a short amount of time, I'm not assimilated to the US culture and am still very involved in mine. When I met my husband, a few weeks into our dating, he told me he was going to marry me as a joke, but I told him how marriage works in my culture and he praised how beautiful it was. Fast forward now. We agreed on doing 2 weddings, one of my culture and the other an American wedding. In my village, when you get married, both spouses get a gold bangle, sort of like a wedding ring. There is a ceremony and party for that as well. It's molded on your wrist and can't come off unless you use it like a saw or something like that. During my traditional wedding I received a gift of these fruits I ate back home and are truly my favorite but haven't been able to be found in the US. My husband jokes about how he was not looking forward to smelling that every day. Which is fine because I hate the smell of sausage, but it's something he loves. I stayed back home for a week because I had missed it and my husband came home early to prepare for the American wedding. I came home Monday but didn't see my husband since he had work and by the time he finished I was sleeping. We had dinner last night and I saw that he didn't have his bangle and he told me he thought it was just for the party. I explained to him again how important it is to me. And he said that I couldn't seriously expect him to wear it all the time. I asked him why not and he told me it made him look unprofessional. I got upset with him and left. He ended up calling me to explain how it holds no cultural significance to him, so I told him. I rebutted asking him if he was fine with me not wearing a wedding ring as it holds no cultural significance to me. He got a bit upset and gave me a lecture on how if we were in my country he'd wear it. I feel so turned off and uninterested in this relationship that I am thinking of calling off the wedding. I ended up texting him that morning that I was ready to talk and he came to my hotel a few minutes later. I explained to him how I felt about him cutting off his bangle without talking to me and especially after he told me he would wear it. I don't remember if I explained this earlier, but in my culture, parents cut off pieces of theirs to mold together for children. This bangle gets reshaped for my husband, so it's generations and generations that got passed down to mine that is now destroyed. I explained if I knew he didn't plan to wear it, we could have bought him new gold instead of using mine so I could keep it intact and be able to give it to my children, or we could have made one that can come off and such, and if he told me that there was no way he'd ever wear it in any occasion, then we could have gone our separate ways. He apologized and explained that he didn't think he would have to wear it every day, and when I reminded him that he knew this for years. And also reminded him the countless times I've reassured him it was fine if he didn't want to, and yet he told me he would. I'd like to note here, he got to design his and we made it really thin and small where he could wear his watches and it wouldn't show. I asked him to show me the bangle, so we ended up going to his house. I don't know if the person he went to was bad at his job or what. They literally melted it. It was cut in several different pieces, so my original design is completely ruined. It probably doesn't make sense to you guys, but that is really upsetting to me. I did entertain the idea of maybe he was teased or something, but he assured me it wasn't that and he just didn't think it was that serious. I explained that he was basically divorcing me and he said that I don't have to wear mine either. He got angry with me and kept insisting I was making a big deal out of nothing. I explained to how the bangle aside, he lied to me about something for 4 years and then undermined me right after we got married. He failed to communicate to me something so important and doesn't see how hurtful that is to me. He ended up going on a tangent about how unprofessional it looks when I reminded that he's been in the same job this whole time and it's something he never brought, also not to mention he works from home and only has biannual in-person meetings where obviously it's format so it wouldn't be seen in the first place. There was a lot of back and forth. He got angry with me and kept insisting I was making a big deal out of nothing. I ended up taking an Uber home and the same day I went and got mine removed. I returned it to him since he bought it along with his ring and took my bangle with me. I called my parents to see if they could make me another one. My dad called my husband and wanted an explanation for what he'd done. I guess the conversation didn't go well because my father immediately started mourning my marriage with my mother and agreed to send me a new one. I told him for us to pause on the American wedding, which after trying to change my mind he did give in. Because I wanted to talk more about what other things he thinks aren't serious. I left to go back to my house. I live in a different state only 4 hours away. He was supposed to take me, but wouldn't respond to my texts all of the night before, and since I needed to be home for work I called his friend. He couldn't get in contact with him either, so he ended up buying me a ticket home and drove me to the airport the next day. He drove over to my house 2 nights ago. And he kept apologizing for everything. He told me that he would re-wear it and get it fixed. But honestly all of the designs are ruined, and if he wore it now won't really change the fact that I know how he truly feels about it, so I can't even enjoy it anymore. I had a list of things that we talked about in the past and agreed to and just wanted to revisit them. And I asked for full honesty, and we did end up taking some things off that he agreed to in the past and admitted to not fully agreeing to. Which just didn't make me feel better like I hoped it would, because now I'm rethinking our whole relationship as if everything else has been a lie. He has insisted that he's not going back home until we fix this, but I'm not optimistic. I feel I've said everything I needed to say and now I have nothing else to say. He's staying at a hotel nearby and has been coming down every day and trying to talk, but he's not really saying anything new and just keeps repeating the same thing. My dad posted pictures of me with my old bangle and implying that I was single. He has been sending me numbers of men he wants me to talk to. I have removed pictures of my traditional wedding from all of my social media. I don't expect people to understand, but I did receive some good feedback, and writing this makes me feel a bit better since there isn't really anyone I can talk about this to. Also, just like if he had a problem and waited this long and then tried to secretly remove it without talking to me. Imagine he had a big problem with me in the future and then lied to me that everything is fine only to randomly get divorced, even though I didn't know there was an issue to begin with up until then.
Pet owners, what is the biggest flex your pet attempted? I found Wade for sale at a pet store. He's a beautiful brown cat, with classic brown and black striping, and a pretty big boy all things considered, real pair of mittens on him. I knew that we were meant to be when I opened his cage, and the first thing he did was headbutt me. I bring him home, and we get acquainted over time. I learn that he's incredibly loving and chatty. He loves following me around and wants as much attention as possible. I also learn that he's sneezy to the point I go get him checked out. One vet visit later, and I find out he's got feline herpes. Honestly, not that big of a deal, he's just more prone to respiratory infections and is always going to be kinda sneezy. The vet told me to give him a lysine powder twice a day with some wet food, which will help mitigate the symptoms. No problem, I'm happy to spoil my sweet boy as much as he wants. I keep up on it, and we move in with a couple of my friends whom I live with for the next 4 years. They adore Wade as well, and he quickly becomes our little sneezy mascot for the house, constantly being showered in attention by either his dad or one of his uncles. Now, even with the powder treatment, Wade is a sneezy boy. The worst part is feeling awful for him when he's sneezing, knowing how uncomfortable he must be. Part of our coping mechanism for his sneezing, outside of constant petting, wet food, and adoration, is making fun of Wade for being adorable and useless. We would regularly hold conversations with Wade, responding to his meows in outrage at how offensive he could be, and reminding him that he'd never survive out in the wild with nobody to make his wet food for him. So, one afternoon, I'm sitting on our screen porch having a beer with one of my roommates while Wade keeps us company. As we're talking, there's a moth flying around our heads that Wade is watching intently. We're sitting in lawn chairs, so the moth is probably only 4 feet off the ground or so. As we sit and drink, we're joking around and berating Wade for being so lazy as this moth flits about without a care in the world. We joke and joke, as Wade sits there, receiving head scratches and watching the moth. After about 10 minutes of goofery, the moth dips slightly lower than it had before, and Wade launches off the ground, and in one motion catches the moth between his paws and brings it down to the ground and then eats it in front of us.
My husband kept asking me to PG him. But what I found out was worse. I was hesitant but willing to try it because I loved him. But then he kept asking for it, even after I told him that it wasn't my cup of tea. Eventually, I admitted that it made me uncomfortable. He would sometimes randomly ask to go to the intimacy shop. I'd always get excited at the idea of spicing things up a bit, only to immediately be disappointed upon realizing he only wanted to go for stuff to indulge in his own KNKS. The same ones I had made clear to him that made me uncomfortable. But that's not the worst. I started finding gay adult films on his phone and computer. I realize I should not have gone through his phone, and I feel really bad for doing it, but I knew something was up. Honestly, I thought he was simply cheating, and truthfully, that might have been easier for me to process. When I first found it, I didn't say anything for months. I honestly think I was afraid of the answer he was going to give me when I asked him about his sexuality. I also stopped sleeping with him. It just really messed with me. When I finally asked, his excuse was that he had been molested as a child, which was something I had never heard before. I thought we knew everything about each other. I don't know if it was true or not, but either way, I couldn't wrap my head around why those two things might be connected. He promised he would stop, and I believe he did for a while, but a few months later, he started acting weird again. What I found out was shocking for me. I snooped and found trans adult films and just lost it. My fiancé made me get plastic surgery just to get engaged. Now I want to call off the wedding. I, 26 female, have been engaged to my fiancé, 37 male, for 6 months now, and we're getting married next spring. Our relationship has not been easy and we dated for 2 years before getting engaged, and he broke up with me once in between for 5 months. Right now I am so conflicted. There was a time I was so eager to be engaged to him and now I'm lost. First off, I kind of had to give an ultimatum to get engaged, to which he responded he has not proposed all this time because of something in my looks that he's not attracted to. He asked me to get a specific plastic surgery to correct this issue and that he would pay for it, and only then he's willing to get engaged. So, I went ahead and got the surgery. Anyways, we get engaged and I can still tell he's not that attracted to me because the surgery didn't really make a big difference. He doesn't compliment me, doesn't really touch me or initiate things with me. He doesn't complain or bash my looks but doesn't rave about it either. But this isn't the worst of it. I'm currently in grad school and he works full-time and makes over $500,000 a year. He is paying for the wedding, and has rubbed it in my face on 2 occasions how I contribute nothing, and that I basically never have the right to complain about anything ever because he works so hard to pay for things. I complained once that I feel we don't spend enough quality time together. I just don't know if I'm making a huge mistake getting married to him. I don't want to be miserable. I am so anxious. I don't feel like he loves me. He pushes me away when he's having a bad day and doesn't talk to me. I just feel kind of neglected in the relationship, but I also don't want to be a victim and consider maybe he's right about some things. Breaking an engagement off is so embarrassing, and this would be his second broken engagement, and I don't want to do that to him. I just feel really lost. How do I go about this? Edit to add, the surgery I got was liposuction of my legs from thighs to ankles. I've always carried weight in my lower body. He says financially successful men don't like thick women and goes on to list all the successful men he knows and uses their women as a reference. I figured he was right about this and got the surgery, and I'm still trying to lose weight because the lipo didn't make a huge difference. Also, to those that ask what good qualities he has. I initially thought he was very kind, helps the poor and goes on medical mission trips. He's a doctor, he is funny and we actually get along really well when things are good. And I love his parents so much and I really feel for them. They are older and want grandkids, and want to see their son married. I don't think they realize how mean he can be. I'm not going to pretend his money is not appealing. I didn't grow up with a lot of money and watch my parents struggle as immigrants. I always wanted to make sure my kids will grow up in a financially stable environment. It's not really gold digging because I'm not a materialistic person. I don't care for expensive things. I just don't want to struggle like my parents did. To those who think I can get a prenup or divorce, our culture and community is very strict. I probably should have mentioned we are Middle Eastern, not Muslims. We don't get divorced, it's not an option in our church. He ended his first engagement, not her. He said she became too obsessed with the wedding planning and felt like a different personality of her had come out after she secured the ring. Update, so we broke up today. 48 hours after my initial post and over 1,000 people begging me not to get married. The wedding is off. This is how it went. He picked me up because we had our engagement photo shoot today. He has been depressed for over a month now over a real estate lawsuit that he started. He has already been putting me on the back burner because of this lawsuit and gives me zero attention, acts like I am an added stressor in his life. So I'm already fed up with a mopey attitude. He starts going off about how he's not in the mood to take pictures today and that it's hard for him to smile, how drained and unhappy he feels over the house. I literally exploded. With everything that's happened I couldn't take it anymore. I told him I've never met such a literal man-child in my life. For him to break down over a lawsuit he started, he is not fit to ever be the man, the sole provider of a family, to face real troubles of life. He has never had any real issues in his life. He is a literal man-child. I told him he never acknowledged how insane it is that I went and got surgery just for him to find me more attractive. He never recognized the care and sacrifices I've made for him. I did take ownership for letting this relationship drag out as far as an engagement, after he showed me time after time how unfit he is to be a life partner. It is my fault. I ignored the red flags, and I kept having hope he would change one day. Maybe if I brought him a child he would start to appreciate me more, maybe seeing me as a mother he would start to love me. I'm so glad it didn't last long enough to find out. We didn't make it to the shoot obviously, he ended up driving me back home. Sadly we wasted the poor photographer's time. His reaction throughout all of this was very minimal, so cold, he would look down and look sad but it looked like he was pretending. He said he was sorry and he thought I deserved better than him. He said his emotional battery had run out. This was the end of it. I gave him the ring back and told him we're never speaking again. I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. I read every single one. I can't express how much it helped me finally come to this decision today. You guys actually saved my life. I'm not even sad, I am so relieved, I feel lighter. Thank you all so much.
What did you do intoxicated that sober you really appreciated? We booked out a hotel room and got trashed before going out. Think 6 guys chugging on a ton of beer and eating snacks for about 5 hours. There was a lot of stuff strewn around the room, topped off by a few smashed bottles in the bathroom because my friend thought the bath was full of cold water, but it was actually empty. I ended up coming back before everybody else and fell asleep when I woke up in the morning. The room was spotless. My friend who was sharing the room with me told me he came home to find all the empty cans crushed and bagged up with all the snack rubbish in the bin. I'd even gone into the bathroom and picked up every shards of glass and made sure I'd washed the small shards out of the bathtub with the shower. I'd even cleaned the surfaces. The maid service would have had literally nothing to do other than make the beds. Meant that when we woke up the next morning feeling worse for wear, we had absolutely nothing to tidy. When we went to our friend's room, which we hadn't spent any time in, they'd absolutely trashed it in between getting home and falling asleep. I don't think my friend had ever loved me more than he did that morning.
If every man suddenly disappeared, what would happen to the world? 98% of crew on cargo ships are men, so you could basically wave goodbye to the global supply chain. Subaru stock skyrockets. Toilet seats would stay down. Approximately half of the vehicles on the road would suddenly crash. Same thing as what would happen if we disappeared every woman in the world, civilization would collapse within a few months. Women would start exercising at night with earbuds in. Millions of sad moms. Given that the vast majority of blue-collar work is done by men, 93.8% in construction for example, infrastructure would be devastated. Electrical work, plumbing, mechanics, you name it. Almost everything that requires maintenance would degrade rapidly.
Am I the jerk for breaking my promise and ruining my kids' relationship with their dad? I have 2 kids, 18 female and 15 male, with my ex-husband, 46 male. We got divorced over 10 years ago after I found out he was cheating and got his mistress pregnant. This so profoundly hurt me. It took me a long time to put myself together again. After our divorce was finalized, he got married to his mistress. They have 2 daughters 10 and 7. Despite him being opposed to me, he was and still is a great father to our kids, and to not potentially ruin their relationship, I agreed not to tell them about the affair after he begged me not to say anything and that he would tell them when the time is right. We share 50-50 custody, though since they are older, they now decide when they go where and for how long. I have been as civil as I could with the situation for our kids' well-being, and put clear boundaries in place, like there's no way on earth I would babysit their kids after they asked me once. 2 years after the divorce I started dating a woman 43 female, we're now married. Ex told me he felt like I never loved him since it turns out I'm into women, even though I told him I'm bi. The kids love her, she shares some interests with both of the kids, and we all do our annual Star Wars marathon on winter break. Back in January, I started to feel like they were pulling away from us. At first I thought it was nothing, just kids being kids, but then they began to spend less and less time with us and more with their dad. I was a bit jealous, I'll admit, but I was also getting worried because they were not communicating with me at all, and when they did speak to me, they were just snapping at my wife or at me, rolling their eyes, etc. It was clear they were mad at us. So in mid-April when my wife was out of the house, I sat them down and asked them what was going on and if they were okay. My daughter got really mad at me and started yelling that she was not okay because I led their dad on. I lied to him, I hurt him, and how could I be such a monster to play with a good man's heart? And she stormed off to the room. I was perplexed, so I asked my son who was quite what her sister meant. He said their dad told them that we got divorced after I came out and that I told him marrying him was the biggest mistake of my life. He started crying and asking why I would do and say such things and that I didn't just hurt their father but them and our family. Needless to say, I was furious. I told him to come with me, and we went to his sister's room. I knocked on her door and begged her to let me in and let me say something, and she eventually opened the door. We sat on her bed and told them that what their father said was not true. She tried to argue, but I stopped her and asked her to let me talk. I asked them to think a bit and do some math regarding their sister's birthday. They didn't get it, so I asked them her birth date. They told me, and I tell them that 6 months prior, We'd been in Disneyland having the time our lives, they said they remember, so I asked them when did their father move out? About a month after that trip. And when was their sister born? About 5 months after. They started to get it, and my daughter asked me if I was implying their father cheated on me. I said yes. She then grabbed her phone and called her aunt, ex's sister, and asked her if it was confirmed her dad cheated on her. She had to beg her for an answer, and her aunt finally said yes. She called other family members to approve. They both apologized to me and to my wife when she came home for how they had been treating us. They went to their dad's the following day and called us to ask if they could move all the things they had there to our house. Soon I had my ex on my door, yelling that I broke my promise and that I sabotaged his relationship with our kids. He didn't leave until I called the police. Our kids have since gone low contact with him and his wife. They only go over there to pick up their sisters to hang out with them. My daughter disinvited them from her graduation. My son is no longer going on the boys' camping trip with his dad, his 2 brothers, and his cousins. I've been getting texts and calls and voicemails from him and his family calling me an off for ruining their relationship. And I've been starting to feel guilty because he is a good dad, and I did break my promise. My wife says he crossed the line first. Am I the a-hole?
So you want to know what I'm doing every minute? One time my husband was recovering from surgery for a few days, and I wanted to avoid using too much of my time off to care for him and our toddler, so I asked permission to work from home. This was way before the virus, and work from home was generally forbidden, but because this was a special circumstance and the alternative was me not working at all for a while, they agreed. When we agreed on it, I made it very clear to my boss that I wouldn't be working standard hours and I wouldn't be available at the drop of a hat, but I'd be sure to get in my 40 hours for the week one way or another. I had to do most of my work during naps or after 8 p.m. when she was in bed, because watching a toddler is a full-time job. Sometimes I might be able to get some work in while she was occupied, but I had to be ready to drop what I was doing at a moment's notice and go pull her down from the curtains or something. On one of my first days out, boss asked me to jump on a call with an important customer. I told him that wasn't a good idea, as I might have to drop the call to go rescue a toddler and that wasn't professional, so I delegated the call to a trusted subordinate. That did not go over well with the boss. The sub handled the call perfectly, but boss didn't like it that I couldn't do it myself. He yelled at me over email, "What are you doing at home all day if you can't take one phone call?" Luckily, I was prepared. You see, I had an Excel spreadsheet where I tracked all of my working time to the minute. It had blanks in it where I was doing things for my toddler or my recovering husband, some of them only a few minutes long, some hours, but every minute I spent on work was accounted for, and it added up to the requisite hours. Boss shut up after that. However, I was never allowed to work from home again. Not until the virus, at least, and I vowed never to do something like that again. I think I quit after 2 days and took the rest of hubby's recovery period as PTO. I drove myself insane trying to watch a toddler all day and still get in 8 hours of work while keeping meticulous track of what I did each minute. I reported being bullied at work and my boss demoted me. I'm a general manager. I heard people engaging in gossip about me, and the head person engaging in it was someone that works directly under me. She's been gunning for my position for a while. She wants me out. She was making up lies about me. She was telling staff that I wanted to fire someone, but she didn't want the person fired, which is a blatant lie. She's taking jokes that her and I had together and making them really serious and blowing them out of proportion. Every sentence that came out of her mouth was about me. It was obsessive and so mean. She was celebrating me going on vacation with the staff. I was taking time off for the anniversary of my son's death. A while back my boss admitted that she asked my boss what would happen if I ever left the company, and my boss told her that she would get promoted. Ever since then it's been horrible working with her. He initially admitted that was a grave mistake telling her that, but then he took it back. My boss has been on me lately because I'm doing it with every metric. We're swimming in revenue. We're off the charts with all of my metrics, but the staff allegedly don't respect me. I reported this gossip and bullying to my boss, and told him that this girl under me is coming for my job, that she's tarnishing my reputation, and making my life miserable. I told him I feel uncomfortable coming into work sometimes because I know that I'm going to be gossiped about. It's hard when it's all the time. I cried to him and opened up. He told me that he sees my point of view and that he's going to take care of this. He said while I'm on vacation, he's going to interview the staff and get their opinion on me. If they have a negative view of me, I'm getting demoted. If not, I will keep my position. I feel this is unfair since I've been lied about to the staff. The day before I come back, my boss asks me out to lunch. I'm thinking this is positive since it's my day off, and we're going to lunch. This man demotes me, then has a list of things people said about me, most of the things being total lies that I completely disproved. He reads the list to me in public. It's humiliating. One of the things was that I showed people too many photos of my puppy. He said the girl under me isn't coming for my job. He said he's taking over because I can't manage her. I told him if it were up to me she would be fired. He said he'll fire her if she talks poop on him, but otherwise she's not getting fired. I literally heard her say that she wants to be the general manager. I told him I'm being retaliated against for reporting something. He got quiet and stared, then said, "What do you want me to do? I literally don't know what to do here." He was very clear that I'm being demoted. I got quiet and said okay. He said he doesn't want me to leave. He can't run this place without me. I just placated him until I ate my lunch and left. I met this dude on Tinder and asked what his last name was. He told me, then replied, "You doing a little background check? You might find out I'm a murderer, just ignore that." Okay, so a good sense of humor. Well, I googled him and he... What is the one thing you most hate about beaches? I used to love the beach, the sun, the surf, the sand between my toes, all of it. But that was before the incident. The incident that changed my life forever. It all started when my girlfriend at the time, let's call her web_site poor devil, convinced me to take a romantic weekend trip to the beach. I was hesitant at first, but she promised me it would be great and I stupidly believed her. We arrived at the beach and it was packed. The sand was hot as balls and it was impossible to find a spot to lay our towels without being surrounded by screaming children and obnoxious tourists. And don't even get me started on the effing seagulls. But the real kicker came when web_site poor devil decided to go for a swim. She was a strong swimmer, but the waves that day were huge and relentless. I was already feeling uncomfortable watching her swim out farther than I thought was safe when suddenly, I saw her go under. I ran into the water, heart pounding, and started frantically searching for her. It felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, before I finally spotted her limp body floating towards me. I dragged her to shore and tried to revive her, but it was too late. Web_site poor devil was gone. Ever since then, I can't stand the thought of beaches. The sand reminds me of the feel of her lifeless body, the sun only reminds me of the funeral, and the waves. Well, let's just say they give me effing nightmares. So there you have it, folks. That's why I hate beaches with a fiery passion. It's not the crowds or the sand in my crack, it's the memories of watching the love of my life drown in front of me. But what if there was more to the story? What if there was something lurking beneath the surface of the waves that day? Something that could have saved web_site poor devil from her watery grave? I can't help but wonder if there was something more that I didn't see, something that could have saved her life. Beaches can go F themselves, but I'll never stop searching for the truth. My golden child brother stole my new car and my parents told me to forgive him, but I wasn't going to let that slide. And now he's in jail. Ever since my brother was born, my parents treated him like he was made of glass. My mom was actually told that she could never conceive after she had me. So when she got pregnant again, everyone called it a miracle child, and they made sure to spoil him after he was born. I was told to not go near him because I could hurt him. They went on a vacation to Bali with my brother, but left me with my grandparents, even though I begged them to take me along. On my 10th birthday, all I wanted was to go to the playground for a while and enjoy myself, but they decided that it was more important to go and buy new clothes for their other child. As my brother grew up, he realized that he could ask for literally anything, and my parents would never say no. He would ask to play with my toys and suddenly they would become his forever. Because I always spoke up about how unfair my parents were treating us. He took offense to that. He would break things around the house like a flower pot or a beer glass and then blame it on me. And of course my parents had to take his side. In fact, they even asked him how he wanted me to be punished. To which he would say, grounded for a whole week. Since he did that so often, my parents considered me a problem child and refused to celebrate my birthdays. When I was 13, I asked them why they treated us so differently. And their reply was, your brother was a gift from God. And looking at how much trouble you have been causing recently, we are glad we have another child to rely on for the future. I was so distraught over my parents not loving me that I cried myself to sleep that night. I was even bullied at school because I didn't have any stuff while my brother had all the new gadgets. But I didn't fall into depression and instead decided to prove to them that I'm not a useless son. I graduated from high school as a valedictorian and thought that they would praise me. But my brother didn't like that the spotlight was on me and decided to throw a tantrum about not getting enough attention. So instead of going to my graduation party, my parents took him to his favorite restaurant and treated him to a giant meal. That day onwards, I decided to just keep to myself. I was still living under their roof, but I hardly talked to anyone and only went down for lunch and dinner. It wasn't easy to do that as they were always worried about my brother and what he was doing anyway. I got a full scholarship to the college of my choice and began focusing on my studies. I impressed one of my freshman professors and got hired as his assistant the following year. When my brother turned 18, our parents bought him a brand new car even though he hadn't even applied for any colleges. And he made sure to flaunt it in my face by saying, why don't you go out with friends on car trips like I do? Oops, I forgot that you don't have a car in the first place. That lit another fire inside me and I began working on buying my own car. But I didn't just want to settle for a cheap model and wanted to outdo him. After all, buying something more expensive than his car with my own money would be the perfect revenge in my opinion. So I got a job and started saving up money. I had to live with my parents so I could save up on rent, but I tolerated their abuse for the sake of my goal. One of my friends told me that his dad owned a car dealership and could help me out. So I went over with all the money I had at the moment in the hopes of securing a car. To my surprise, my friend had already told his dad about my situation and he agreed to lend me a second-hand Dodge Challenger if I paid him a certain amount every month. I asked him why he was doing this for a stranger, but he just laughed and said that if his son praised me, then I must be a good person. I am successful enough to not worry about my finances and the thing that matters to me the most is my son's happiness. That is what he told me and I was absolutely elated because I love the car. I immediately drove it around for a bit, but had to go home because I was getting sleepy. I had already decided to begin looking for an apartment at that point, but never would I have guessed that my brother would do something terrible. He saw my car parked in the driveway and threw a tantrum to our parents about how it was unfair that my car was better than his. But since I had bought it with my own money, there was nothing they could do for him. Thinking that I had finally gotten some payback, I went to sleep and put my car keys on my desk. But when I woke up the next day, I noticed that the keys were gone. I rushed outside and was shocked to see that the car was also missing, and so was my brother. I asked my parents about what was going on, and they said they had no idea. I waited for a few minutes and called some of my friends, but no one knew where the car was. I was getting really anxious about the whole situation, and that's when my brother pulled up into our driveway, only that he was in my car, and not his. Both the front and back bumper on my car were missing, and the driver's window was slightly cracked. I ran out shouting, "What did you do to my car?" But he just shrugged his shoulders and laughed. Well, I decided to take it for a spin because this baby deserves a good driver, but turns out that it's actually a piece of trash and just fell apart on its own. Looks like you got scammed on this one. My eyes actually began to fill up with tears as I saw how he had wrecked my car and was clearly lying about it. I screamed at him, "You stole my car and crashed it just because you were jealous." But at this point, my parents decided to step in and once again, take his side. My mother hugged him and asked if he was alright, while my dad said, "You can't accuse someone like that. He wouldn't lie about crashing your car, and you need to believe your family's words." When I pointed out that he had literally stolen my car, they said that he only borrowed it and that I should just let it go. They didn't even wait for my response and just began walking back inside. But little did they know, I had a trick up my sleeve. You see, I already knew that the golden child was going to try something like this and prepared for it by installing a camera inside my car. I immediately called the cops and explained the situation and showed them the clip as proof. They knocked on my door into the absolute horror of my parents, arrested my brother for stealing my car. Thanks for watching. Who is the worst boss you ever had? I used to work for an employer, and he employed a lot of foreign workers including illegal immigrants and made them stay on site because he knew they couldn't go to the authorities without being deported. They were living in caravans made for 2 to 4 and having 12 people in them with no running water or washing facilities on purpose, I think, and of course he underpaid them. He would regularly walk around with his trophy wife I'm pretty sure he bought online insulting people, saying how they were scum of the earth and dumb cunts. When he found out I was English he said he didn't like me because I was smarter than the foreigners and not a robot like them, which means I probably had a small dick, really random. Thing is he never worked a day in his life, he inherited all his money from daddy. I saw him regularly threaten to fire people for getting a drink in the hot weather. Some people had passed out before and he just stepped over them like they weren't there. When his wife wasn't with him he would regularly sexually harass the female workers who didn't speak English, leering and making comments as well as standing literally touching their backs and would scream and shout at them if they stopped working. I did report him but it wasn't until about 5 years after I left I saw on TV he had been investigated and fined for what he was doing. Am I the jerk for running away? I, 20, used to live with my mom, stepdad and stepsister who is the same age as me. When my mom married my stepdad and moved them and I was 12, and from the get-go it was obvious that there was something wrong with my stepsister. I won't even attempt to speculate at a diagnosis but she got really clingy, would throw tantrums and pee herself if she didn't get her way. Also she couldn't regulate her voice and would just blurt whatever she was thinking and touch or take whatever she wanted. Basically she has zero self-control or awareness. I talked with the parents about getting her into therapy and getting her a diagnosis and I was scolded and grounded for bullying her, because that counted as bullying for them, so I never brought it up again. But she latched on me and it ruined my life. Refused her own room, was put in every one of my classes. If I talked with someone else she would throw a tantrum and pee herself at school, and I would end up having to take care of her. If I was invited somewhere and she wasn't I wasn't allowed to go. The only thing I had was swim team because the coach took pity on me and allowed her to join so I could participate. When I was a junior I turned 18 and got access to some money left to me by my dad and grandparents. That's when I made a plan. I got a P.O. box and didn't tell the parents. They told me that I will be going to the same college as my sister and I didn't argue, and used the P.O. box to apply to other colleges. I got into the farthest one I could get into. Last summer after graduation I bailed in the middle of the night, only took sentimental things and left everything including my phone. I left a letter and another with the neighbors so they wouldn't file a missing persons report. It has been almost a year and I just checked up on them, stalked them online, for the first time. Apparently my stepsister is committed and the parents are no longer living together. And while I feel vindicated when it comes to the parents I feel like a jerk towards stepsister. I know that it wasn't her fault and with me there she could live more or less normally. Now she is in a facility and all her support system vanished. So am I the jerk? I forced my husband at gunpoint to sign at divorce papers. To begin with I was a small town girl brought up in a conservative family. I completed my graduation in engineering but didn't go for campus placement because my parents felt that would be an obstacle to get me married to a traditional and decent man. So despite protesting I gave up to the emotional trauma given to me by parents and enrolled myself in MTech course. Knowing my parents' attitude towards life, they always felt that only few professions like teaching were meant for girls. I worked hard for GATE exam and my marks were enough to get me into the nearest NIT from my hometown. And mind you, I had literally tried everything, pleaded, begged, cried to let me continue my studies with the promise that I would marry the person of their choice without any demands and even leave studies if the groom's family didn't consider it appropriate. I had no other choice. My desire to study and complete post-graduation was making me do anything and everything. By God's grace I could complete my post-graduation and even start teaching as an assistant professor in a private college while my elder sister and brother got married. I still remember it was the month of July, 5 years back when my mother finally bought the unfortunate and wretched news. You will get to know why I call it unfortunate and wretched, of finding a suitable match for me. The guy was a manager in a steel factory. Moreover, the factory was owned by his family. I wasn't allowed to talk to him. According to my parents, they couldn't find someone better for me. I wish they could judge better. I got married in a traditional style. I had read about finding love or at least friendship after marriage, but I missed the initial gestures of both from my husband's side. I thought lovemaking would be when both of us were comfortable, but the first night itself I was forced to have intercourse. When I tried to show discomfort, he bluntly said that it was my virtue as a wife to satisfy his intimate needs. And I had to accept it as destiny. The next morning I woke up still hopeful of a happy married life, trying to convince myself it is the initial phase and I would soon be comfortable and happy. The first 3 months of marriage were weird. He would use me like a sex doll at night but did not even talk to me for any other reason except doing odd chores for him. Whenever I would try to initiate a conversation, He would ignore me and simply move to the other room. Although my mother-in-law visited us twice a month, she understood that everything wasn't right. Her loving attitude made me confess to her on how my efforts on trying to know him more go in vain. She requested me not to discuss it with my family as it would give them unnecessary tension and told me that it was normal in the beginning of arranged marriages. I was an optimist and despite him going for 2 trips with his friends but not taking me to honeymoon, thought maybe he would open up in a few months. He would be aggressive during sex, although I did show discomfort, but the day I protested, I was hurt verbally. He cleared to me that all he wanted from me was sex, and when I raised the issue of opening up and being friends, he simply told me about his philosophy for his wife. Wife are meant to do household chores and satisfy husbands without expecting anything in return. I was shocked out of my wits. I tried to explain to him how we could lead a happy life by being more open to each other, but he rather told me not to try to interfere in his life. Days went by. Months too. I was sad and depressed but still hoped that someday he would pay attention to my emotional needs. He didn't allow me to work, to meet my friends, leave alone making friends, and the worst was locking me inside the flat for a week when he would go with his friends for trips. Once when I tried to request him not to lock me up, he rather called me a characterless girl who wanted to meet men in absence of her husband. He would not let me meet my own family, saying my absence disturbs his schedule. Tired of all this, I tried to ask for help from my mother, but alas, she only said one thing: after marriage a girl must abide by her husband's needs and desires. I knew nothing that could make the situation better, but all I wanted was this marriage should work. Once, one of my school friends found my husband with someone else in a party who he said was his wife. My friend forwarded me the picture. I was so scared. I just prayed to Lord that this must not be his other wife. By this you can realize how much I wanted this marriage hoax to work, because I knew I would be held as culprit by everyone if it didn't. The night that followed showed me true colors of my husband. On showing him the photo and asking, he replied by hitting me and warning me never ever to spy on him. This incident made me want to run away, but all I could do was to cry. When I finally tried to talk to my elder sister, she was although concerned about me but did inform me how I would be disowned by my own family after separating from this man just to prevent the dishonor I would bring to the family. And guess what? Expect worse. I was caught by my husband telling about how I was physically abused after marriage, to my sister, and this time when he tried to beat me, I protested, and as a result of which he broke my phone, my only link with the outside world, and pushed me hard, just to make me bang my head on the table, the severity of which made me unconscious. He was kind enough to take me to the hospital, although later I realized it was not kind, but an obvious thing which anyone would have done. I got stitches. MRI reports showed clots on the right side. That's why I said it was obvious to take me to the hospital. And out of human nature I thought maybe now he would start caring for me, but I was wrong. But now after 5 years I feel grateful of him to not leave me to die, but take me to the hospital. There he simply told me, "See, I don't want to hit you. But if you don't obey, this is what you will get. All I want from you is to be like the way I want, and we will have a nice life." This was indeed the first time I lost all hope, and considering this as my fate, started behaving accordingly. So the 9th month of my marriage went smoothly. Taking advantage of his good mood one night, while he was busy satisfying himself with my body, I requested him to allow me to work as a professor. And to make my idea more lucrative to him, I told him that this could reduce the expenditure he has to do on my basic needs and he could go to foreign trips with his friends. This sounded good to him, and fortunately in a month's time full of interviews and written tests I started teaching in an institute. This was my escape from the harsh reality of my married life where I was just used as a maid and a prostitute. In 5 months' time I started getting the emotional affection and companionship I expected from my husband from the hot. Please don't mistake this as falling in love. I found a friend who I could trust, talk to and expect from. After a month more, I started trusting him more, and finally he became the first person to know in detail what all I had gone through in nearly a year and more of marriage. I would often ask him as to what I should do to make my husband more affectionate to me, and one day we finally concluded that a baby might change everything. I just didn't mention that once before this I had tried to discuss this matter with my husband, to which he replied he was already burdened by me so he doesn't want a baby. And one fine day I decided to try my luck, and guess what, I got pregnant. I kept this news from my husband till 8 weeks, but he came to know this, and in rage of betraying him, he didn't want a baby, he hit me again, despite pleading that it was his own child, and sadly I had a miscarriage. This was basically the first time. The pain and agony of losing my first baby made me determined to get out of this hell. I just took a week leave from work. It was during this time that my absence for so long made my colleague cum best friend realize his love for me. Now let us call him X, because most of the latter part would be about him. Out of care for me and knowing how my husband was, X reached my house and was in utter disbelief to see me in this pathetic state. I had wounds all over, my body was weak and my eyes were swollen. For the first time in a year and a half I saw my pain in someone else's eyes. He hugged me for the first time, confessed his love for me and promised me to get me out of this place at any cost. What followed for the next 3 months was, shifting to his home and being lovingly accepted by his mother, being disowned by my family, getting abused by my husband on being a whore, frequent visits to police station, lawyers and court. But believe me, at this time of turmoil I was happy, at peace, and felt as if something beautiful was to happen. First time in nearly 2 years. During these days, once when my husband started filing false cases against me, like harassing his old parents, having extramarital affairs, being a worker of a SX racket gang, yes, you read it right, he just wanted to pull me down anyhow. X and me found our law system incapable of differentiating between wrong and right. We made up a plan. As per the plan, We kidnapped him and made him sign a divorce papers at gunpoint, and used the property papers. He was given a large amount of ancestral property by his parents, as a bait to make him accept all his deeds, domestic violence and sex abuse, and also filing false cases against me, in court. Finally the paradise of my life began. I married X. We shifted along with his mother to other city. We started working in a new institute again. It has been 3 years and life has been simply a bliss. God has blessed me with a son who is going to turn 2 this June. Maybe God is paying me back for all the pains I suffered, in the form of a beautiful life unfolding every day. Time has indeed healed all my wounds. I was and will always be grateful to X for being a guardian angel and the biggest blessing in disguise.
Am I the jerk for donating my deceased daughter's college fund to a charity instead of giving it to my estranged son? I lost my daughter last year to a rare medical condition. She was in college, and we had saved up a substantial amount for her studies. The fund has around $120,000 left. My wife passed away 5 years ago, so it's just been the two of us for a while. My son and I have had a strained relationship for the past 6 years. He got caught up with the law, joined a problematic crowd, and has committed many crimes. When he turned 18, after multiple attempts to help him, I had to kick him out of the house. It was the hardest decision I've ever made. Recently, he's cleaned up his act, or so he says, and wants to go to college. He reached out to me, asking if he could use his sister's college fund. However, my daughter, in her last days, expressed a desire for the money to go to a specific charity that supports research into her condition. It was her wish, and I decided to honor it. I donated the entire fund to that charity 2 weeks ago. When I informed my son of this decision, he was livid. He claims that I've chosen a dead daughter over him and that I never cared about him at all. My relatives are divided. Some say I did the right thing honoring my daughter's last wish, while others believe I should have given my son a second chance. I am tormented. Did I make the wrong choice? Fooled my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife into thinking I was cheating, then ghosted her. Part 1. I hope you've got some time and a snack, because this one is going to be super long, as the events that follow span from late 2019 to last week. My soon-to-be ex-wife was my high school sweetheart. We started dating in 1992 when we were both 17. We're both 45 now, and have been together ever since. She's the only woman I've ever been with my entire life. We married 5 years later at 22, fresh out of college. A year later, we had our first of 2 children, both boys. 23 years I gave to her. Built her a house, worked my ass off to give her the life she wanted. Sure, we had rough patches, but what marriage doesn't? Even in the worst of times, we found a way to pull through and come out the other side better, which made the discovery of her affair that much more jarring. Flashback to March 2020, when I first got the feeling something was off. For a good 2 months prior, we were in a funk. I was on the mend from reconstructive knee surgery but still lacking in movement. At the time I only had about 50% range of motion on my knee. This took a toll on quite a lot in the house. I was out on workers' comp, as I had been injured on the job, and I was unable to do my usual household duties, so a lot got backed up. My sons would do what they could, but tasks only I was capable of doing had to be put on the back burner, or my wife had to do, which she wasn't pleased with. Things also crawled to a standstill in the bedroom between us. It had already slowed down prior to my injury, but in the state I was in at the time it completely stopped. During these months, my wife was spending more time hanging out with co-workers after work. Between November 2019 to March 2020 it was a regular occurrence for her. Naturally, I thought nothing of it. I've never in the 23 years had any reason to worry or not trust her. She has her friends, I have mine, and we have mutual. I'd go hang out with my friends all the time and there was no issue. It was all above board. It was around January of this year that I noticed something odd. She started getting noticeably distant with me. Sure, we were in a funk, but she'd never deny me affection to that point. The usual hugs and kisses she'd give me came to a halt. Her phone was attached to her hand long before my suspicion grew, but she'd always share and show me things she'd discovered on the web, DIY ideas and recipes on Pinterest, memes, all kinds of stuff. But she was now being guarded about her phone. Even her interactions with me became more snippy, as if she couldn't be bothered. So we're now in March. COVID has arrived and New York City is locked down. Our chosen careers fall under the essential designation, so neither of us have to work from home. I'd just been recently cleared to return to work after 5 months on the shelf, and I was eager to get back after it. As 5 months on my ass rehabbing my knee and not being able to do physical stuff drove me nuts. Within a week or two of the lockdown, my wife alerts me that she's going to have to start putting in extra hours. Again, I think nothing of this because of her field. Of course, I was under the assumption it'd be occasionally, but no, it was every day. And not just an hour or two. She'd come home 3 or more hours later, and go straight to the shower, spend a little time with me, a little time with our sons and then go to bed. As I'm able to support myself on my knee better, we started getting intimate again, but as you'd probably guess she wasn't mentally or emotionally present for it, which I noticed quickly. So by early April, the picture started getting clearer to me. All of the signs were pointing to the idea that she was having an affair. That's when I decided I needed to find answers. So I scoured the internet on things I should be looking for, signs of infidelity in one's partner, and sure enough she was pretty much ticking all of the boxes on such behavior. So then my search inquiry advanced to how do I find proof. I started with her social media. Looking at her Facebook entries from months prior, it's pretty much the usual. Pics of us and our sons, pics with her and her friends, and more than a few pics of her nights out with co-workers. In these pics, it's a mixed bag of her closest friends from work, and a couple folk I've never met from her work. but I see one recurring thing in a number of these pics. One guy, in every picture he's in, he's rather uncomfortably close to her. His arm is around her shoulder, or his hand on her lower back. Way too close for a guy I've never personally met. Needless to say, that put a sour taste in my mouth. But that wasn't the worst of it. No. The worst was the fact that apparently, this dude is a friend of hers on Facebook and follows her on Instagram. So I go to look up his Facebook account and wouldn't you know it, I'm blocked. Why the hell am I blocked from seeing this guy's Facebook account? But he's friends with her on Facebook. Yep. Now I'm in Batman detective mode. At that point, I wasn't even trying to deny it. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy. My mission was to find out for how long, and over the course of April and May. That's what I did. You know, I never had any clue the depth of info you could secure from phone, text and email records up until then. We have a family plan cell phone package, and I was able to pull up quite a bit of data. My wife's data history was telling. The two most frequent numbers she had interacted with from October 2019 to April 2020 was my own, and a number I'd never seen before. Take a wild guess whose number it was? A quick check on Google and I confirmed it was the dude from the photos who blocked me on Facebook. Again, the picture becomes even clearer at this point, but a lot of their messages and texts were disjointed, which meant she was deleting a lot of them. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy, but nothing in the data could serve as a smoking gun. I needed more evidence.
What is your worst experience of waking up after a one-night stand? In 2004 I was following a band that had a rather large fan base. Several hundreds of us were part of the band's forum and decided to all rent out a hotel the night before their show. A lot of us traveled there, including myself. It was about a 14-hour drive. I arrived there much later than everyone else. The hotel was packed and everyone was partying. I had a huge bottle of Captain Morgan and started pounding it right away. I made my way down to the pool where a lot of people were hanging out and one thing led to another with a girl there shortly after getting in. She invited me up to her room. We get to her room and we are making out with our clothes removed. She stops me. It's been a while and it's kind of rough down there. Do you want me to shave? I say sure. She gets up and goes to the shower and I continue to drink. About 2 minutes later she falls down in the shower. I hear a loud bang. I'm like, oh crap. She jumps up, I'm okay. She fell down again, I heard a loud bang once again. I'm like, what the heck, and go into the bathroom. She invites me in the shower and she continues to shave. When she's done she asks if I want to shave mine too. I don't see why not, so I proceed. About halfway through people start coming into the room. We all had 6 to 8 people in our hotel rooms. The rest of her crew finally came back up from the pool. One girl busts into the bathroom. The girl screams, what the heck? What the heck are you all doing? Get the heck out. I'm like, oh god, what a crazy lady, but okay, I'll leave. I grab a towel and head into the room to get my clothes. This guy immediately goes, dude, you got hair all over my towel. I mean, there's really nothing I can do at this point. I just drop the towel, grab my clothes and hurry up to the elevator. I'm getting dressed in the elevator when I realize that I don't have my wallet, so I head back up to their room. I knock on the door and she answers with my wallet. She still wants to hook up, so we go back to my room. My room is totally packed. Nowhere to lay at all. So, we decided to just wing it and see if we can find a place near the pool or outside. We both head to the front desk and request some extra pillows and a blanket and then head outside. The pool area is way too lit up to pull it off there, so we began walking around the parking lot looking for something else. We found it. Made a little bed, did our thing and passed out. I was extremely hungover the next morning. The fact that I was riding around in the back of a U-Haul did not help. I grabbed my clothes and opened the door. There I am standing with the left side of my downstairs hair removed for all of those in traffic to see. I jumped out, ran and never saw her again. As I was unable to cover myself, I was arrested for being exposed in public despite my attempt to explain it was not my fault. The police officers were not buying it. This was summer of 2004 in Atlanta. I left the forum shortly after. My mother is blaming me for my sister's attempt to take her life. My sister cheated on her fiancé of 3 years with a man in his 60s while on a cruise that I was also on. While on the cruise, I caught her cheating and she begged me to stay quiet about it. I eventually told 2 of my friends because I couldn't hold it in any longer. Long story short, her fiancé ended up finding out because of me. We had a family dinner with my parents, my sister, and her fiancé at a small restaurant. While waiting for our food, I went to use the restroom and I ran into one of my friends in the bathroom. We talked for a while, and coming out of the bathroom, she asked me if it was awkward between my sister and I. We exited the bathroom into the small hallway. I said, yes, I feel like I have to be loyal to her because she's my sister, but I also feel like a terrible person for not telling him that she cheated. Turns out, my sister's fiancé overheard our conversation. When I came out of the hallway, I saw him talking on the phone in the waiting area, but thought nothing of it at the time. Long story short, he broke up with my sister that same day. He accused her of cheating on him and mentioned what he overheard me say. In a desperate attempt to salvage their relationship, my mom drove my sister and I to his apartment. At his place, my mom explained to him that I lied for attention and she asked me to apologize. I did apologize, but then he asked me if I lied about the cheating. I wanted to say yes to save my sister's relationship, but he honestly looked so hurt already. I just couldn't bring myself to lie to him. I stayed silent and shook my head a little. There was a huge argument and he called the cops on us. Up until this morning, My sister and my mom refused to even look at me. They had not spoken to me since the whole incident. My dad was the only one who didn't blame me for everything. I know that I should have kept quiet about it and I feel guilty for ruining their relationship. I feel really bad because he actually made my sister happy. This morning around 1 a.m., my dad woke me up and he was crying. All I remember hearing was my mom sobbing from across the hallway. Everything from that point was just traumatic. When I entered my sister's old bedroom, she was just lying on the floor. My mom was crying while on the phone with 911 and she was yelling incoherent sentences. My sister attempted to take her life. To make matters worse, while we were at the hospital, I accidentally ticked my mom off. I told my dad that I was thirsty and he was going to help me find some water. But my mom got really mad. She exploded on both of us, but mainly me. She basically blamed me for everything. She said if my sister doesn't make it then her blood is on my hands. And she also said that she wished it was me instead of my sister. My dad cut her off and yelled at her for saying those things, but she just argued back defending herself.
What is the biggest red flag in a relationship you've ever seen that wasn't your own? I regret seeing this red flag and doing nothing about it. Many years ago when I was in my mid-20s, a high school friend and I were still fairly close, along with her husband. Sometimes when he'd been drinking he would kind of come on to me but I figured he was just uninhibited from the drink and I rebuffed him. Then one time, totally sober now, he made a clear pass for me. I said, first of all, I would crawl naked through broken glass before I would betray a friend. What the hell do you think of me? Second, do you think she's a moron, that she'd never figure it out? He was rebuffed and a little embarrassed and he let it go. I didn't tell her, because I knew it would wreck her, and because the three of us were close, and spent a lot of time together. And I knew it would wreck everything for me and her and for us as a group as well. I really thought hard on this but I could not find one positive reason to actually say something about it, assuming she'd even believe me. And if she did, what then? She had no money, no job, no skills. Several years later she was planning their 10-year anniversary coming up shortly. She had gone to a school and become a chef and worked hard. As usual, he didn't. Anyway, so just before the date arrives, completely blindsiding her, he tells her that he's done. He doesn't love her, never did, in fact hates her, and he's leaving, and he does. She has no idea what's going on but she's devastated, loses a ton of weight fast, can't eat, she's so upset. A few months later he returns suddenly and says he's so sorry, don't know what came over him, he wants to try again. Well, it was a decade of marriage, and she was willing to forego her pride and the pain and give it a chance. And not very long later, he tells her that it turns out, he'd been having an affair with her college friend all this time, and the friend was pregnant. So he was leaving her again to go have a kid with this woman, after a dozen years of insisting to her that he didn't want children. Now she was 35 or so and childless, and had accepted this, and he had left her for one of former best friends who was having a kid, and come to find out he'd made passes at others of her friends over time. But nobody had ever told her about it. I understood then that I should have, all those years prior. I should have been willing to hurt her, hurt myself, and our friendship, whatever. No, it would not have solved anything then. But maybe, years later but prior to all this happening, she would have been wiser about him, about the situation, and seen the signs sooner. I feel like, him betraying her is one thing and his own thing, but her friends like me who truly loved her and knew his nature, not telling her about it, must have felt like 10x the stab in the back. I feel guilty for what I didn't say. I was not trying to keep it from her, but in the end, my motives don't matter. The only defense I could have given her was a clue, but I held back for seemingly good reasons. And it was the wrong decision, but I guess we have to get a lot older before we realize these things.
Have you ever stood up to your narcissistic parents? Recently, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. She had surgery last year, but her follow-up scans showed that the cancer was regrowing, so she needs radiation. I offered for her to stay with me and get the radiation treatment and recover. Big mistake. First red flag, she booked the appointments without even running the dates by me. She booked them all on different days of the week in different locations. Maximum inconvenience to me and my work schedule. She also booked flights without checking with me, assuming I will pick her up and drop her off any time of the day or night. I pushed back on all these bookings, informing her of my availability. She threw a fit that these are cancer treatments and they were very hard to schedule. I said, well, if they're so hard to schedule, wouldn't you want to verify the person who you need to drive you is available? She throws a screaming fit. After arriving here, she immediately overtakes the house as if it's her own. She's loud, stomps around, screams on her phone constantly. Interrupts me constantly while I'm working over stupid non-urgent things. Chews with her mouth open, talks while eating, spitting food everywhere and smacking her mouth. Bugging me constantly for stupid stuff, like why are there no Q-tips in my bathroom? You know I need Q-tips. Why do you hate me? When she doesn't like something, instead of saying so, she just makes cartoonish sad faces, stomps her feet and expects me to appease her. I feel like I'm going nuts trying to interact with her like an adult. But I drove her to all her appointments anyways. The day of her big radiation treatment was a disaster. She's been minimally loud and disruptive the past few days because she's been down recovering from the treatment. This morning, she was clearly feeling better, because she decided to FaceTime someone on full volume at 6 a.m., and due to her usual screaming voice, she woke me up. I texted her to stop immediately, that she woke me up and was being extremely loud. She texted back saying no. So I went to her door and told her to get off the phone right now. That this is insane behavior when staying as a guest in someone's home. She told me to F off and put in earplugs if I'm so sensitive. She did end the call because I would not leave until she did. I went back to bed for a little while, and when I got up and came downstairs for breakfast, she was waiting for me with an evil grin, ready to start a fight. She started shouting at me, "How dare you interrupt my call with my mother? I must call her every morning or she worries." I told her I had no interest in her reasoning, it's my home and she needs to respect it. Making screaming FaceTime calls when she knows people are sleeping is not acceptable and she may not behave this way here. This unraveled into an argument where after declaring what an evil daughter she has, and how it's my fault my dad laid hands on her and left her. As a kid, I remember dad literally chasing her around the house with a knife when he discovered she had cheated on him with 8 different men. It left me with some trauma. Either way, she declared she would rather stay at a hotel the rest of her visit, since I am such a horrible mean daughter, while still screaming like a banshee. This was in my response to asking her to please respect me in my home or she may not be invited back. I said cool, go to a hotel. Honestly, it sounded like a good solution given that she wasn't backing down. She then sat down at the kitchen table with a creepy grin on her face and said, "You'll have to call the cops to get me to go away." Nope. F this. Not playing this game any longer with those kinds of threats. I went upstairs and started packing up her stuff and bringing it down onto the porch. She wailed and wailed about how mean I am. How she can't understand how I can be so cruel. At no point did she apologize or ask to stay. I told her to hand over the keys. I then showed her out onto the porch. She stood on the porch wailing for about an hour. Then she went down to the street and sat there and wailed on the phone for another hour. She got another person to call me, although she hadn't called me herself at all, hadn't knocked on the door, hadn't at any point said that she would like to stay with me. Because she couldn't possibly admit that she needs or wants my help. The person who called said that she sounded faint on the phone and that she was out on the street. I said okay, I will bring her a cup of water. I brought her the water, she drank it and said nothing but, "Karen is sad. Karen is sad," referring to herself in the third person, and crying big crocodile tears. She finished the water and I took the cup and left. She didn't look faint, she looked completely fine. She made noises outside for another hour or so and then finally went to a hotel. I guess she didn't think I'd actually kick her butt out and not cave when she tried to manipulate her way back in.
What are the most horrifying 911 calls you have received? Got called to do backup for a gunshot wound initially. I worked EMS while my friend was dispatched for this call. I was second so I never got to interact with the person in question, but I listened to the 911 recording after. It was at farm out about 20 to 30 minutes outside of town. Turned out to be a father who recently lost both his parents within the month and didn't want his family to go through with such loss. Decided to unalive his family to spare them that same fate. The father unalived the mom and 2 kids. We get a call from the daughter who's about 13. She's been shot in the head but is still alive and conscious. The call was about 30 minutes long, but the father was in the same room as her and the rest of the recently murdered family members. She was sitting on her bed with a bullet in her head just saying in the most monotone voice, "I've been shot, my family is dead, my dad has a gun." Just in so much shock that she couldn't express an emotion. You could hear long pauses of silence as the dispatcher tried to get an idea of the situation and how the daughter and dad were just staring each other down for 5 minutes at a time with nothing but breathing to be heard and the daughter answering the dispatcher's questions. About 30 minutes go by of dispatcher going, "Are you alright? He's still there? He still have the gun? Etc." And just monotone responses. You can hear the sound of sirens in the background and the father leaves the room followed by a gunshot. The dad shot himself and died right as we were pulling up. She ended up living, but had lost every single member of her family that week. I shadowed a 911 operator. We got a call from an 8-year-old who said his big brother was in the bathroom and hasn't been out for an hour and there was no sound. He broke the door open somehow while he was on the phone with us, and his brother was dead from suicide, hanging. This was small town, and a year prior that same older brother had called in when the mom had committed suicide herself on pills. My Tinder date turned out to be my childhood nemesis. I've never really told anyone, but the very first person I've ever hated was a girl from my childhood who stole my precious balloon. I was about 9 at the time and was an inpatient for private reasons. The hospital was pretty far from home so my parents couldn't see me often, but on one particular day, my mom left me a balloon with a "get well soon" on it. I was fixated on it because it made me feel close to my parents, so I would take it with me wherever I was taken. And then, that evening, curious me went out of my ward and ended up getting lost because tons of people were all over the place. The balloon ended up slipping away and I went after it, only for this one girl about my age to grab it. Velp, when I asked for my balloon back, she refused and ran off to her mom. I was a very reserved kid and was scared of confronting her, especially with her mom, so I let her take it away. I was pretty sad cause the balloon was special to me, but I eventually let it go even though the grudge has always remained till today. Now, I matched with this a girl on Tinder and things have been going very well. On our most recent date, we discussed our past regrets and all that. And then she tells me about the time she stole a balloon at a hospital from a boy years ago but has since regretted it. She says she would apologize to the boy given the chance. I was shocked, like legitimately shocked. At first I wasn't sure cause I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, so I led her on for more information. And she revealed many more details that made me 100% sure she was that same girl. I couldn't stop laughing out loud and she'd been trying to figure out why. I said I just found it really funny but didn't tell her that boy is literally me. She explained that she really liked the balloon and she told her mom the boy gifted it to her and now it makes sense why the mother waved at me back then. Like, I genuinely cannot believe the same person who stole my balloon years ago, my one truest antagonist, my villain origin story, has been staring at me right in the face. The worst part is, I don't know how to deal with the grudge now and it's just so funny to me that this is happening. I'm just waiting for the perfect chance to tell her and see the look on her face. Why Oppenheimer is a bad movie. I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan's films. I love long-form movies, I'm deeply interested in science, and I love film. The movie was horrible because of the insane amounts of dry exposition. Some of it was creatively weaved in, but the majority felt very pace-breaking and unnatural. This is a common trope in Nolan movies, but this is by far the worst hyperbolic version of it. It completely breaks the characters, pacing, and immersion of the reality he is trying to establish. It felt quite lazy and uncreative a lot of the time. The pacing itself was terrible too. Besides the main hooks in the movie, Ludwig and the editing team made some amazing sequences, but for the most part, it's largely quite boring. However, the hooks of the movie keep you grounded in your seat long enough not to fall asleep when trying to trench through the shallow characters and exposition avalanche, until you come to another hook in the movie which ties you back down in your seat for another avalanche of uncreative exposition. A lot of the dramatization of the characters and perspective felt very pretentious at times. Yes, it is profound to harness the strong force, and make a film about it, but there is a subtle self-importance to the film. It's the feeling of an artist knowing they create profound art, and the self-awareness seeps into the art and you can feel it. It's hard to explain, but I feel it's tangible in this film. I do enjoy that it teaches newer generations about history and the dangers of humanity with such technology, but it felt self-indulgent at times. The CGI dust on the screen completely ruins the continuity of the film and image. This is obviously something only some people will notice, but it's just absolutely wild that post-production thought it was a good idea to have floating particles cover up the beautiful scape of Los Alamos. Cheap, uncreative, and unnecessary CGI atmosphere. Usually these visual effects can blend quite well in majority CGI films, but something so grounded with such high dynamic range, shot on film with this ridiculous atmospheric effect added just breaks the aesthetic of film entirely. As for the actors, Florence Pugh's character was very shallow and was used uncreatively as a narrative tool. We're used to this with many Nolan films, shallow characters used to drive the main character's motivations in an obvious way. You can use your characters more creatively and mask the plot tools that they truly are, have them feel more authentic as characters and not just shallow storytelling tools. Jack Quaid's cameo was an awkward choice of casting. He says a few lines and plays bongos in the background of a few scenes, and whenever I saw him on screen, it felt so wrong. Maybe there was potential to have him fit in another way, but there's something about his acting and presence that is super unconvincing and unfitting. There's just something tangibly wrong with him being in this film. Lamau. Don't forget the part where they woke it up by inserting black scientists on the Manhattan Project and black female students in his 1930s quantum physics classes, disrespecting Einstein and John von Neumann's involvement. They dropped 2 nukes on Japan, inconceivable amounts of Japanese died. Considering it's a perspective on the trauma only Oppenheimer felt, and not to mention the way they disrespect Einstein and leave out any involvement from John von Neumann on the Manhattan Project, the over-dramatization, implying Oppenheimer is the most important man in the world and the only one that could have discovered how to harness the strong force, the last act of the movie being all about Oppenheimer's security clearance and how we should feel for him morally, for the egotistical scientist that quotes "Now I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds." The entire perspective of the movie is pretentious. Though, there were some innovations that were great in the movie. The way Nolan portrays psychological distress. Nolan did a great job portraying psychological distress. He used creative editing and physical shaking of the environment and avoided those typical cheesy visual effects representing trauma in your average movie or TV drama. It was very creative and arguably innovative. The hooks in the movie had incredible pacing and synchronicity to Ludwig's score and ironically great exposition. In one example, Nolan literally tells the audience when the climax is coming and subverts your expectations of the climax with creative cinematography, editing and sound. The acting was excellent as well. Cillian Murphy was particularly good as J. Robert Oppenheimer, and of course the rest of the cast excluding Jack Quaid cameo. Overall, I think Oppenheimer is effective in the hooks and even innovative with its stylistic mechanics in filmmaking, but a terrible movie in between. The movie is boring for the most part, and the exposition is lazy and uncreative.
I'm 18. My boyfriend has been lying about his age for 2 years. We started dating when I was 16 and he was 19. Turns out he just looks really young and is actually 36. By this point, it's too late for things to have become intimate and I've already become really invested. Firstly, I am really mad that he lied. That's an obvious problem. And because of that, I don't know how to trust him, nor if I should believe he isn't lying about anything else. He lied right away, the first night I actually hung out with him in person after talking for a really long time over messages. I asked him right off the bat how old he was because he was hesitant to tell me when we were messaging prior. He told me 19. I was a little surprised. He looked in his 20s, not 19. But I decided in the moment it wasn't a huge deal and you would not lie about something so big. As a teenager, I was taken advantage of 2 different times by 2 different adult men, so the trauma of that is also kind of playing a role in this current situation. 2 years later, and I'm just barely finding out that he lied to my face that first night and has been the entire time. So I feel pretty betrayed and angry for the lying itself. Secondly, I don't know if I feel violated or not. Every intimate encounter, I definitely gave the green light. But I'm not entirely sure if I would have if I had known the truth beforehand. And that's where I feel super confused and weird about it. When he explained why he lied, he literally just said he knew he would not date me if I knew his real age and he took his young looks to his advantage. I kept bringing the point up, regardless of the reasoning. Did he know for sure if I would have been okay with it if I had known? No, he didn't. And he still lied and moved forward with an intimate relationship with me. And now that I do know, I don't like that that choice was taken away from me. Especially because I don't even know now if I'm okay with the age gap. Thirdly, I'm already pretty acquainted with his parents and he with my mother. I had a very long discussion with him about all of it yesterday, and since then, I've decided I just need time to figure this all out. I don't entirely know if I want to continue this relationship or if I even should. I definitely did invest a lot emotionally into this. And I still really care. Maybe that's why this is so conflicting, I don't know. But I also feel like I don't know him.
My girlfriend told me that she thought I was really ugly when we first met. We met through a mutual friend and quickly connected. It took me almost a year to build up the courage to ask her out, but when I did, she didn't even hesitate to say yes. I know I'm not attractive at all, I'm very pale, I have a big nose, I'm underweight and my 2 front teeth are gapped. We were laying in bed about 1 week ago and watching a movie. Somehow a conversion of people's faces came up and she told me how some faces have to grow on her. Unprovoked, she said these exact words, "I thought you were really ugly when we first met." I just laughed it off like it didn't hurt, but it felt like an effing knife had just been stabbed through my heart. It's not surprising to know. She calls me handsome all the time though, and I had trouble believing that anyone could ever actually find me attractive, but damn, it felt good. After hearing those words though, I don't think I'll ever feel that same satisfaction. My whole life I've been put down for how I look, by my family and my peers. I'm the guy that was an automatic EU in school and I really had shit self-esteem because of it. When my family first met her, they made a lot of jokes regarding the fact that she was out of my league by saying things like, "How'd someone like you get a girl like that?" And these comments hurt, but I'm used to them. I was fully secure with her before, but now I find myself doing old things that I let go of after being around her so long, like pulling my shirt up above my mouth, struggling to make eye contact, and just overall obsessing over how I look. Almost everyone in my life has had something negative to say about my looks. I guess it just felt really great to have that one person that has never said anything about it and just loved my ugly ass for me, lol. I can let go of mean comments, but this one stung like no other. I abandoned my girlfriend because I thought she was unfaithful to me. 4 years later she married my best friend and I discovered something horrifying. I was 21 when my girlfriend of 8 years got pregnant with another man and left me for him. I fell into depression and was fired from my job because I began to decline at work. My best friend Robert helped me get up and get a new job. When I turned 23 I met Sienna. She was a new friend of my cousin. We met and I quickly asked her out. She accepted and over time we became a couple. I was quite toxic towards her. I wanted to know where she was all the time and with whom. Sienna refused to indulge this type of behavior because she said that if she agreed to this over time I would get worse, that I should trust her. In all other aspects our relationship was quite good. I began to heal and the relationship and bond became stronger. We started living together, we lasted 6 years together and they were the best years of my love life. Sienna and Robert eventually became good friends. One Friday night I had to stay to work overtime to do some reports for the end of the quarter at that time. Sienna, Robert and other friends went out drinking. I got home around 12:30 and Sienna still wasn't there. I started calling her and her cell phone was off. Robert sent me a message asking if I was already home and I answered yes. He sent me a photo of Sienna and a man unclothed in a bed sleeping. He texted I was looking for Sienna to bring home and I found her like this. After crying uncontrollably I took several of my things and went to my sister's apartment. I texted Sienna that she was a beach and had to get out of my apartment by Sunday and proceeded to block her. When I got to my apartment on Sunday, her things were gone. In the first few weeks she never tried to approach me to talk or apologize. It got so bad because she helped me so much to overcome the previous infidelity and she herself was unfaithful to me. I walked away and avoided anyone who talked about Sienna. My best friend supported me and said that she wasn't worth it, that it was better to realize it now and not in the future when we were married. About 3 months passed and I decided to go to another state. I got a job and a small place to stay where I could adapt. I met several women but the relationships never lasted long. I never had social networks. I had communication with Robert but over time it became non-existent. 6 months ago I decided to download Facebook. I found my sister and checking her friends list I found Robert. In marital status he said married. Checked the photos of him and he married Sienna a year ago. I asked my sister about them and she said that they didn't know anything about Robert's life since I left. They have seen him at most 10 times in these 4 years but they never started a real conversation. I wrote to one of my friends on Facebook at that time, and he did have contact with Robert. I asked him about it and he told me that Robert and Sienna became very close because Robert supported Sienna after her altercation. He also called me an idiot for abandoning Sienna in her state even though she always supported me. I asked him what she was referring to, as I didn't know what she was talking about. He asked for my number and called me a few minutes later. Apparently that night they started drinking a lot, several of them left Sienna alone. After a while Roberto sent me the image, they woke up Sienna and she didn't remember anything. The guy that was next to Sienna ended up roping her. She was very bad, especially after I kicked her out of the house. She never contacted me because she was really in a bad way. She went to therapy and when she wanted to look for me she found out that she was pregnant. Robert supported her all the time. She ended up losing the baby. They started dating later, got married and apparently now she is pregnant. I told my friend that I didn't know anything about that. I always believed that she was unfaithful to me and that Robert never tried to correct me in that regard. I really feel terrible, mentally worn out with so much crap because I still love Sienna. Should I contact Robert or Sienna?
My friend used me as bait for a guy and I feel violated. When I was about a year out of high school, I started working at a restaurant in a much wealthier community than the working class one I had grown up in. I started as a hostess, then got promoted to wait staff. After a while I started to bond with this girl, Gretchen, who was a hostess. She relied on me to vent to and to share all of her troubles with. Her parents were not nice, only caring about money and social status. I also started hearing about how she was having trouble with infighting and backstabbing among this friend group, many of whom also worked at this restaurant. The restaurant was a place where a lot of young people from the area hung out. I felt bad for her, but I also enjoyed her sense of humor and intellect, and we shared a lot of similar tastes in music and style, so she and I became good friends. At one point she introduced me to this guy, Chris, that she knew. He and I instantly had chemistry and I could tell he was very into me. He started coming around the restaurant a lot, sitting in my section, and one day when Gretchen wasn't there he asked for my number. It felt like the friends I had always wanted were finally coming together, like my life was about to launch. All of these people lived in their parents' giant opulent mansions in this very upscale town, driving luxury cars their parents gave them, while I would slink back to my broken-down Honda that I'd park in a hidden spot and drive to my family's tiny house in the working-class town with its broken-down pickup trucks on cement blocks in people's yards, feeling like an alien in both worlds. I was slightly older than some of my new friends, being a year out of high school while most of them had just graduated, but felt worlds less sophisticated than they appeared to be. Anyway, I didn't really understand why she was so eager to introduce us. Why didn't she want him for herself? He was very cute. It was only later in retrospect that I looked back on the way she introduced us and realized she was using me to bait him to come around the restaurant. So he and I started to hook up. I didn't get why he wanted to be so secret about it at first, but I'll admit that he was about 10 times hotter than any guy I ever dated, and I let myself get swept up into a mostly physical relationship. He asked me not to tell Gretchen because he could tell she was into him, and although I thought that was silly as she had introduced us so obviously, if she had ever had any romantic feelings for him she was over it, but I reluctantly agreed. Not my proudest moment. Gretchen and I began to hang out more and more and became BFFs. We began to spend every free moment together. My secret hooking up with Chris felt more and more deceitful and I cooled it down with him a little. But I was young and didn't know how to handle this situation, and I'm sure I did everything wrong. I thought that I was beginning to fall in love with Chris, but didn't like being a secret hookup, so just sort of let it continue half-assed and in secret. I'll admit this wasn't smart or good. After a while I got a job in another restaurant, as there was too much drama at that restaurant, and I could make more money at this new place and wanted to go to college. But I continued to hang out with the people I met through the first restaurant. Gretchen and I went Christmas shopping together one day at the mall, and took a break to eat lunch. That's when I accidentally got a glimpse of her Christmas present shopping list as she checked it off. She had high dollar values listed next to the names of all of these high status, wealthy, good-looking, and cool people that I suddenly realized she was desperately trying to become good friends with. $100 here, $200 there, and then there was my name, supposedly her best friend, with $5 listed next to it. It instantly made my heart sink. I don't care about expensive gifts, but it made me realize how little she valued me, with an actual dollar sign to prove it. Nobody owes me anything, but I had already spent over $50 for her Christmas gift and I felt like a schmuck, realizing that we weren't actually best friends and she saw me as someone to spend time with until better people came along. Among the names of her high-value people that she was desperate to become friends with, that she was willing to spend all of her parents' money to try to win over, was Chris, the guy that she introduced me to that I was now seeing. She had $200 next to his name. I began to feel sick to my stomach. I didn't say anything to her as I probably shouldn't have looked over at her list as it wasn't meant for my eyes. But then something happened that really made my blood boil. She began to tell me how much she was in love with Chris, that she was sure he was her soul mate, that she thought about him every day all day. If she had said even a fraction of this to me when she introduced him to me, there's no way I would have hooked up with him. I suddenly felt all kinds of emotions swirling around at once. Why had she withheld this information from me? And why was she telling me this now? I began to realize she had been using me to keep him around. Then she started going on and on about how she spent all night on the phone with him the night before, which I knew was a lie because he was with me. I sat there seething and beginning to hate her and finally interrupted her to say none of that is true. He wasn't on the phone with you last night. She got this look on her face that I will never forget, instant knowing and aware that I not only caught her in her fantasyland delusional lie, but also knowing why I knew what he did the night before. She just sat there looking into my face and me looking back at her. I relished the look of hate and betrayal that had come over her face. I gave it right back to her. You could tell that she never expected little, stupid, trashy me to betray her in this way. I was just supposed to be her lapdog, always there for her but with no needs or wants of my own. Friendship over. She told everyone from the restaurant about what an evil backstabbing bitch and a man-stealing whore I was, and all of my friends from that job stopped contacting me. But you know what? F her and F them.
What caused you to develop your greatest fear? I fear grief, more than I could fear death. 3 deaths of immediate family members have reluctantly acquainted me with all the detrimental grieving processes, the self-imposed obscuring distractions, and the obligation of the living called tolerance of pain. I've acquired a peculiar fortitude that at its most fundamental is just apathy for the world around me. But it's as intrinsic as this additional weight of grief to me now. I feel so encumbered. It's the first time in my life I've questioned the presence of a soul. The absolute density of grief, it's something that the brain alone can't endure. The desolation felt is physical, it's tangible, and I exude it in my demeanor for all to see. But the point of origin? My soul is lamenting the loss of my loved ones in a way I never even anticipated. Grief has a corporeal form. We don't need to wear black to appease death. Just stand next to someone who's grieving and you'll feel the emotion reverberate like sound waves through you. It puts things into perspective too. The true fortunate people in life are not the rich or the famous with extravagant homes or flamboyant cars. It's the people who've never beheld the uninhabited body of a loved one as a cold remnant of who they once were. Knowing that their last breaths have been taken and you still have the privilege of breathing the air they once shared with you. This is why I don't fear death but fear grief instead, because it's so flagrantly humiliating within the first few moments of perceived loss. It knows no mercy. You can be the most rational or intelligent person in the world with a preeminent scientific education, but it will render you a helpless child within the space of one absent heartbeat. What is the best thing that has ever happened to you for being nice? We were living in Amman, in Jordan, where my husband Bob was a senior diplomat. It was Ramadan and it was hot. In Ramadan, Muslims do not eat or drink while there is light, and in summer it was light for a long time. The Jordanian government supplied a guard with a machine gun. I was spooked at first, but we got used to walking past a man and his gun and often chatted to the guards. On the first day of Ramadan, the guard of the moment tapped on the window between the open garage and the kitchen and asked our lovely Filipina helper if she could open his can of tuna to break his fast. He was holding a half bottle of lukewarm water. I was in the kitchen at the time. That tuna was cheap and terrible, grayish flakes drifting in salt water. I would not have fed it to a cat. We organized a very fast tray, dates and apricot nectar to break the fast, a bowl of chopped salad, a bowl of yogurt, local white cheese, nuts and sweets, and an assortment of pastries like baklava. We handed it out, with his tuna and hot tea, as the call to prayer sounded the moment when he could eat. He was stammering in gratitude, but it took us only 5 minutes. I added items to our regular shopping list. Each day we prepared a big tray and included a hot vegetarian dish. I was concerned that the guards might not eat meat from a non-Muslim household in fear of pork. The numbers grew. There were 2 guards on the second night, 4 after 3 days. By the end of the week there were 17, from every ambassador's house in the area. Some left their post and walked several blocks. We just put out big serving bowls and fistfuls of cutlery and they shared. They came every night for a month. We did that every year for 4 years. At the end of our posting, my husband, Bob, called to say farewell to King Hussein. The king called in Queen Noor, and together they thanked us for feeding our guards through Ramadan. When Bob recovered from the shock, he asked how they knew. On the second night of your first Ramadan, the head of the elite guard asked how to manage a problem. The guard for another ambassador wished to leave his post to go to the Australians as they were giving food and drinks. He was asking permission to leave his post, and I am the only one who can grant that permission. I told him that if the Australians are willing and generous to the guards and others are not, then guards from other embassies can leave their posts to eat. That was a delightful thing to hear.
My husband has been secretly posting my body online, and I had to find out from a friend who stumbled upon the videos. Last Friday I, 34 female, spent my evening with Kate, 24 female, a young friend from work, as she wanted to discuss something personal with me. I didn't think anything of it, as we do have a very personal relationship outside of work as well. As soon as I arrived to her place, the tension in the air was thick. She explained that she wanted to discuss a serious matter with me but that she didn't know how to go about it. I told her to just rip the band-aid off and tell me. She told me that she had found 2 recordings of a woman she believed to be me on an adult website. I told her that wouldn't be possible, but she was adamant that I was the woman in the recording. And she was right. I've never recorded myself exposed or doing anything intimate with my husband, but there I was in 2 recordings of 7 minutes and 4 minutes, both of them recorded in our old bedroom. As I rewatched every second of it, it starts to dawn on me that this was my husband's doing. But I pushed that deep down because there must be a reasonable explanation for this. Honestly, I left her place with my mind in a complete meltdown. I could barely hear what she was saying, but she did follow up with a text saying she's been in contact with a website about getting it taken down, and that she'll help me go through this. She also said she's scouring the internet in case there are more out there. I came home and pretty much ransacked my house looking for evidence, and I found it. My husband was using hidden spy cameras to spy on me and record me in my most intimate moments. I then just spent hours vomiting, crying, projectile vomiting some more, and begging God to just let this be a nightmare. I am a deeply religious and a fully veiled Muslim woman, and I've never been with anyone but my husband, and all this time he has been sharing my most intimate moments with the world. I don't know what to think or what to do. I can't look at him or speak to him. I've locked myself in our bedroom pretending I have COVID. All I do is look up how other people have dealt with getting things removed, and it seems like once it's on the internet it really is forever, even if I remove it from this one website. I've been crying non-stop. He truly must be something demonic, as he is right now talking about ordering in some of my favorites to see if I have an appetite since I haven't been eating well. I am so unbelievably hurt. I don't know how to share this with my family, or how to ask for help. I am crippled with shame, anger and pain. Update: I left him as I said I would. He went to work. The movers arrived, we packed my stuff and we left. The entire time I was crying to the point that even the movers were worried for me, but I couldn't stop myself from crying. I went home, sat my parents and siblings down, and explained the situation. My parents were and still are confused. They are elderly and fragile. They don't understand the internet. They just keep saying, okay, let's talk to the people and it will be gone. But my siblings understand. They are angry. They are sad and heartbroken on my behalf. My siblings and brother-in-laws took me home. We waited for him and well, we had a conversation with him. He denied it at first. So my brothers were firm with him and he started to be more truthful. He said he did it because he was depressed because he had an adult film addiction, love-making addiction, and because he didn't think anyone would see it. He said he posted only a few. When we asked him to be specific, he said he posted anything from 5 to 8. We had him take it down, but who knows how many times it has been downloaded or shared. In that moment I also found out he had a secret phone. He was also cheating on me with random women and adult pleasure workers. All this time I was thinking he's working hard, but nope, he was out disgracing himself and betraying our marriage. At some point he convinced us he needed to use the bathroom and he somehow managed to call his mother, who arrived at our home with his brother and cousins. There was a commotion as they were angry at the treatment of their family member. Then things calmed down enough to explain to them what he had done. His mother fainted. His mother is elderly and not in the greatest health condition. We called for an ambulance. My neighbor had also called the police and I was arrested by the time the ambulance arrived to take care of my mother-in-law. I spent the evening locked up. I didn't exactly have a polite conversation with him. So yes, I was arrested for hurting him, specifically slapping him, and he refused to press charges. Got released the next morning and went home to my parents. Cried some more because my parents kept crying. Then a few days later I spoke to some lawyers my sister had contacted as they had experience with non-consensual material being posted online. They had been handling things with the police as I did press charges and they are dealing with the websites. I also have started the process of divorce. I went to the clinic and got tested and luckily he didn't give me anything so far, but I have another test scheduled just to make sure. I have spoken to his mother and she apologized to me even though it's not her fault. She told me that she understood why I want him punished. She asked that I let it stay in the hands of the law rather than I hurt him or have him hurt. He's in hiding but he still calls and texts me from random numbers. He still lies and tries to manipulate me. I've just been documenting everything he says and texts to me. Oh, at this point everyone knows. I mean everyone, even little kids. And I feel more humiliated now than I did at first. Final updates: my husband has been secretly posting my body online, and I had to find out from a friend who stumbled upon the videos. This man has destroyed everything I have worked for and has completely destroyed the very little sense of stability and safety I had left. I had to resign from my job. A job that I loved. Jobs don't come easy for me with the way that I look. I can't work there anymore because I am a potential danger to the children and staff. Since perv men have started to harass me at work. I work with vulnerable children and mothers who have heard about me have started to refuse me working with their children. Some don't want me to be involved with their child because their husbands can't stop being weird. Fathers have leered at me or made lewd comments toward me, one of them even offered me money to do you know what with him. Men have catcalled me with greater frequency than ever before. Men stare at me. A man followed me from my dentist office and groped me on the street. Random men call my phone, my family home and office to verbally abuse me because my husband has posted my address, my personal and work email, phone numbers, workplace address and every other bit of information online. It is as if the eyes and judgment of the entire world is on me. Yes, the great majority of people are sympathetic, kind and in support of me. Many people have reached out in support of me, from old classmates to former colleagues, neighbors, members of my religious community, family friends, his family and many more have expressed solidarity and kindness, but the crazies and pervs who believe him and are like him, are bolder, louder and much more noticeable. Then I find out from my lawyers and their investigators that he was giving me substances and SA-ing me as I slept. I suffer from migraines and insomnia and take medication for it. He saw my medication as an opportunity to make me unconscious with my own prescriptions. He shared, was actually bragging, on a forum where other perverts congregate how he was so clever for drugging me with my own medication and they were encouraging him to do more things to me. Soon-to-be ex-husband has also decided to spread rumors that I was aware of the cameras and pressured him into posting online, and there are people who believe him. He also changed his mind about not pressing charges. I went to court. The judge and prosecutors were sympathetic and dismissed the case. It was a combination of my lawyers explaining the circumstances that led to me slapping him and his subsequent actions, threatening me, attacking me, doxing me and blackmailing me by saying he didn't care about the slap, and that he would drop everything if I forgave him. My lawyers used his own words against him since he wrote it in text, and on a recorded call he admitted to me not having slapped him that hard and that he only pressed charges to cause me harm. But his crimes against me are still being investigated by the prosecutors. New update: I wish I could say I was feeling better or doing better, but I feel awful, and I am still struggling with everything. It is still his life's mission to be as cruel as he can be and to stand in the way of every step I make. He is still refusing to work with my divorce lawyer. He continues to be difficult every step of the way and has run off his own lawyers. He is now in his third lawyer, and we are again starting from scratch in the divorce negotiations. He has been granted an extension by the courts due to his last lawyer just dropping him a few days before our hearing. As for posting non-consensual material, a trial date was scheduled and he recently asked for an extension, and he'll probably be granted it as his criminal lawyer dropped him too. So in the last month he has been dropped by his divorce lawyer and his criminal lawyer. The man is on a roll. When it rains it sure pours. My father passed a little over a month ago and my mother is now in hospice care as she is soon to go back to God. I'm sad but not shocked about this, as I've had a long time to prepare for it. My father had been battling cancer for almost 3 years and so was as prepared as a person can be, and my mother's health had been declining significantly for years due to her dementia. My soon-to-be ex-husband decided it was a great idea to corner me at the venue we held the after-funeral meal at. He decided to wait for me to be alone. He approached me as I was cleaning up the venue. I was on my own, and at that time I was kind of exhausted and could not muster up the rage to chase him off as I had done many times before. So I just let him talk. He seemed almost decent as he was giving his million excuses on why things were the way they were. He cried about how awful he feels for hurting me. Then he started telling me about how he always felt I was better than him in everything, as I made more money, was better educated, had been better traveled than him, and that he felt jealous of my confidence, and how in the beginning these were things that he was most attracted to, but as our relationship and marriage progressed these were the things he started to dislike about me. He also said that he was angry that I refused to consider being a stay-at-home wife and mother, even though he knew from the beginning that I wasn't the stay-at-home type. He said that he tried to be a good husband, but that my refusal to bend or let him have the last say in things was the catalyst for his anger and need to humiliate me. He talked about how he had always had addiction issues, but he thought that if he was married he would be cured of his depression, his adult video and love-making addiction, and he felt like if I ever found out I would have never married him and or would divorce him, and then it angered him and pushed him to want to punish me for thinking I was better than him. He was jealous and angry about so many things. But when I said to him, "So you hurt me because you felt jealous and inadequate in comparison," he lost his mind and started to shout and say that he knew I would react that way. I decided to refrain from commenting further and just let him spill his guts uninterrupted. For 3 hours he made excuse after excuse for why he did what he did. But it all comes down to him feeling inferior to me, him being jealous and angry that I dared have a mind and life of my own. He said right before our wedding he joined a men's group online that were helping him deal with his adult video and love-making addiction, and one tip given was to make your own videos and watch that instead, but he knew I'd never agree to it, so it was my fault he needed to spy on me and that he never intended to share it with others, but one day I had angered him so much and as payback he posted it and he felt good. And so every time I emasculated him by having my own mind or upset him in some way or another he would post more. Eventually he gained a following and had so many men asking him to post more he started to like the fact that other men looked up to him for his intimate prowess, and at the same time his addiction started to come back and he fell back into his habit of picking up women, and when he couldn't get it for free, he'd hire a worker. Then I guess it spiraled out of control for him. The more he spent on his addictions, the more lies he told, the more he felt like a failure for me covering our expenses, the more he resented me, and he got stuck in a cycle of self-destruction, which in turn only fueled his anger with me. He also says he joined a support group for addicts and started going to an addiction rehabilitation clinic as an outpatient to deal with his issues, and that I should give him credit for that. He feels that I should be proud of him for doing that and that I should take him back since he's putting in so much work. He also feels I should appreciate him not stalking me since my dad died, and he is sincere in feelings this way. He genuinely doesn't understand why I'm not seeing how hard he's been trying the past few months. In his deluded mind he thinks that his honesty in our conversation should count for something and that I am just being a heartless jerk for having been stoic and unmoved by his tears and his show of vulnerability. Even though he gave a great performance of being human during our conversation, I remained unmoved by it because there was nothing to be moved about. I just continued to pack things up from the venue and got in my car and went home. I'm still not working, I still have crazy men calling my phone at all hours of the day, and I still feel humiliated and embarrassed. The only good thing that has happened is that several of the sites have taken down the recordings and banned him from using their platforms. Update: finally I have some good news. So a while back I was granted a restraining and protective order, and my now officially ex-husband did continue to stalk and harass me. After the umpteenth time of calling the police and going to court, he was finally imprisoned, and he has been in prison for a little over a month. I was also granted my divorce. I initially wanted a quick divorce and wanted to just give him everything he asked for, but he kept finding ways to delay or asking for more and more, and I just snapped, so I told my lawyers to do their worst and they did. My lawyers hated him and I got everything I wanted and way more. Not to gloat, but it was really satisfying seeing him cry. This has been the most peaceful month I've had in a long time. This entire time has been such a trying time, and it has affected my mental and physical health. I've lost 12 kilograms and I've lost a ton of hair due to the stress he was causing me. But I can honestly say that him wailing in court was the chicken soup my soul needed. I've moved from my city and now live on the other side of the country, and I've gotten myself a decent enough job. I am slowly mending my confidence. I am in therapy and I can't say it's working right now, but I know if I stick with it, it will. The non-consensual material he posted has been removed from the more reputable websites he posted on, and my lawyers were able to get me monetarily compensated. These companies didn't want to go to court over it. I mean, money doesn't really change things that much, and I'm still hurt, but it's something. I'm also not so delusional as to think that it isn't still out there in some way or another, and I know there really isn't much I could ever do about that, so I'm just trying to make peace with it. My ex-husband will be serving time in prison for what he did, and my lawyers are working with the courts, and that should be sorted soon enough. I think the reality of the consequences are becoming very clear to him, as I have heard through the grapevine that he attempted to off himself and is now in protective custody until his trial date. He is facing up to 30 years and corporal punishment, and I absolutely look forward to it.
Frequent flyers of Reddit. What are your airport life hacks? Pilot here, so that kinda counts. Here's some insider tips. There are two kinds of bags, those that get destroyed in cargo bins, and those that destroy other bags in cargo bins. Get the second kind of bag, buy an aluminum frame luggage work stealth bag, or a Travel Pro. It's what all crew members use for a reason. The flight attendants have heard every single attempt from passengers to lie and cajole their way into first class, so if you want better treatment and maybe an upgrade, bring a box full of truffles or chocolates, treat them like people, and be very nice to them. If you lose or forget your phone charger, go to the airport lost and found. If they have any extras lying around, they'll just give them to you if they've been there long enough, usually 90 days. Airport chapels are a great place to get some sleep.
My entitled best friend keeps telling people she dated my fiancé first even though they were together for 5 seconds. So I uninvited her from my wedding because I couldn't take a joke. Izzy and I have been friends since we were born, since we were practically raised together. We were always attached at the hip, doing the same activities together and going to the same places. We were closer in college since we had more freedom to do whatever we wanted. We traveled a lot over breaks and stayed out late drinking. But after we graduated, we started drifting apart a little. Our bond was still strong though, up until recently. After college, Izzy went on a few dates with a guy who would later become my fiancé. She told him she wasn't interested in anything serious, which he did, so they immediately stopped talking and hanging out. Even though I was her best friend, I didn't really know him because she used to get asked out a lot, but only a few turned serious. This obviously was nothing serious, so she never really brought it up. A year later, I moved in with Izzy and so we got close again. Since she was right across the hall from me, we were able to hang out whenever we wanted with no obstacle, and we spent many nights just talking. It was after this that I met my fiancé at a random bar. He bumped into me and spilled my drink, so he bought me another one. Immediately, I thought he was cute and kind, and he reciprocated this because we got to talking right there. We were both with friends. Izzy had a family emergency and couldn't come, and our groups sort of combined that night. When the night was over, he asked for my number and said he had a really great time talking to me. I was really happy and was so excited to tell Izzy about him. I talked about him to Izzy a lot, but since his name was so generic, she didn't think it was the same person. It wasn't until I showed her his picture that she recognized him and told me about her dates with him. I instantly asked her if it was okay to date him because even though I liked him a lot, I didn't want to lose Izzy over a guy. She said she had no problem with it, and joked about it ever turning into a relationship, which didn't bother me a lot. My fiancé and I became serious really quickly though, and I could say with full confidence that he is my soulmate. By then though, Izzy and I lost touch a bit since I moved in with my fiancé, and work became more of a priority. Right until I got engaged, she used to still joke to both me and my fiancé that she didn't think we would be this into each other, and at that time I saw it as funny because Jake is the opposite of me. I thought it was cute either way because of the whole opposites attract thing. And then, she became very weird after I got engaged. She was very shocked, and would not believe it. She used to tell me I'm too young to be married and if I'm sure, but I saw this as just concern. She was pretty excited to be my maid of honor, which is why I didn't take her jokes to heart. But things got bad when I posted about our engagement on social media. People were reposting it and congratulating us, but Izzy commented, "You better mention me in your vows because he was into me first, haha." That was very odd to me because this was all in the past. She never even bothered to tell me she had gone out with him. Mind you, she rejected him, so she clearly didn't want anything serious with him. I don't know why she was taking this joke as far as she did because it wasn't even funny and it made both my fiancé and me very uncomfortable. I tried defending her, saying she just jokes around a lot, but even I knew that wasn't right. I validated his feelings and told him I'd speak to Izzy about making these jokes. I let her know that it was a bit uncomfortable and she said that she was just joking. I still asked her to stop and she told me to stop being sensitive. I didn't speak to her for a while because I didn't like how she was reacting to me, expressing concerns over this. But when my fiancé and I hosted a dinner party after Christmas, it didn't feel right to not invite her after all we've been through. I would regret this decision really quickly. Izzy kept telling all the friends and family gathered that my fiancé dated her first. She let me have him, and I never would have met him if it weren't for her, which wasn't even true. No one even knew those two were involved at all, and my fiancé tried to change the topic whenever it was brought up, which was a lot. She would tell that to anyone who would listen. Even after telling her it was not okay, she still joked around. Later, I told her that she was crossing my boundaries and that it was not okay, to which she said I was overreacting. I asked her why she was saying these things in the first place, but she never gave an answer, just told me to take a joke. In the end I told her to not attend my wedding at all, which she looked really hurt about. I feel like she brought this on herself though, but at the same time, I'm worried I'm ruining a lifelong friendship when I'm not even right. She's not even being supportive or positive about my wedding. She's not involved in the planning process at all and frankly, doesn't deserve to be my maid of honor. I think uninviting her was the right thing to do because she was making my fiancé uncomfortable as well and I really value his feelings above anyone else's. Hotel harasser and attempted window breaker. I have the worst luck, and a good bit of traumatic experiences I've dealt with throughout my life. 2022 was no different, and the year started out awful when the heat lamp for my pet frog caught on fire and started a nasty fire in my bedroom. Due to the smoke damage throughout the house, and me having nowhere to sleep, my parents and I were put into a 2-bedroom suite at a residence inn in the next town over, a quiet mid-sized town with little to no crime while the house was gutted and renovated. We lived in this hotel from January 5 late October. It's actually a town known for being a more wealthy, stuck-up type. The hotel was nice, but I am used to living in a pretty woodsy and rural neighborhood where I don't hear too much going on. I'm not used to apartment living, but having access to a pool, hot tub, fire pit, and nice propane outdoor kitchen that people rarely used was very nice. About a month after the fire, I ended up getting a part-time job 5 minutes away from the hotel and started dating my coworker. The story starts with my boyfriend and I getting out of work around 12 a.m., and then hanging out with our friend until we decided to all head home at around 12:50. My mom texts me asking where I am, which I didn't reply because I would be there in less than 5 minutes and was driving, and she would probably see me before I could even enter the hotel through the door near our room because most nights she would stand out there on the phone with a friend, or on Facebook, drinking a Truly and chain smoking. She mainly did this because she's a night owl, like me, and the walls inside the hotel room were like paper. My dad had to get up every morning at 5 a.m. for work and we would both give her crap for talking on the phone late at night with friends or watching videos as no matter what volume she talked at, we could hear her. When I pulled into the parking spot, I walked up to my mom and she started telling me off for not replying to her quickly enough because something was going on. I asked her what happened, because of course we already had witnessed some weird behavior at the hotel before. Basically, when she had gotten home, due to most of the parking spaces up against the building being taken, she parked in the overflow lot for the hotel in a car that was sitting there peeled off as soon as she went in park, with their lights off. She went inside, dropped off her purse and other items, and went outside to smoke and noticed the same car was again parked next to her idling. She told me she had been standing there, drinking her drink, leaning up against the wall, watching TikTok on her phone when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and there was a man there who was staring at her, and she stared back. He ended up walking a little bit down the walkway, and then raised his fist up at a first-floor window and smacked it, possibly attempting to break it. My mom, who unfortunately is not afraid of anything but spiders, yelled, "Hey! What the flip are you doing?" And he said something about trying to open a beer bottle. He had no bottle in his hand, and alarm bells were going off for my mom, so she just yelled, "Okay, I'm calling the cops." And he started sprinting down the side of the building away from her and around the corner. My mom started to follow him once he rounded the corner of the building, and when she got to the corner he was gone. There was an older couple, probably late 50s or early 60s, who would frequently sit on the curb by that door that he rounded the corner on drinking, and the woman asks my mom what she thinks is up with that guy, and my mom was like, "I have no clue, did you see him doing anything?" And the lady then told my mom that he had sat down with them for like an hour basically being like, "Oh, I have nowhere to stay tonight, I have nowhere to go, I have no money," and was trying to convince them to let him stay in their hotel room tonight. She basically said he was acting cracked out of his mind. Only like 30 seconds has passed, when my mom hears his car start and he peels out of the overflow lot again, this time lights on. She walks back over to the door closest to our room, and continues smoking. Not even 3 minutes later, he pulls into the overflow lot again, and starts walking down the walkway, and passes my mom, staring at her. My mom said something like, "This is getting flipping ridiculous. I'm going to call the cops on you." And he just said okay? And kept walking past her. This is at the point where I had pulled into my parking spot and my mom was telling me all of this. I hear footsteps in the parking lot, and I see a tall man in khaki shorts and a hoodie walking into the overflow lot and my mom is telling me that's him. That's him. So I take a video of him in case I need evidence or something. He had apparently been walking around the building again, then got in his car and left again. My mom had called the non-emergency number because we were on the ground floor and she didn't want him trying to come back and break one of our windows for our room. The police department is actually across the street from the hotel and they said they would come by and take a look, yet no one has come. Due to the fire, I have a hard time sleeping and at the time wasn't on medication yet, so I used weed to help me get tired and a bit less anxious for bed. PTSD from the fire. Fire started while I was sleeping. It sucks. I decided to go to the door on the other side of the building, which was a bit more sheltered, and also because I didn't want my mom to see me smoking marijuana, even if she knew I was doing it. It felt weird to be doing it in front of her. I sit down on the curb of the walkway and light up, texting my boyfriend about all of this when I hear the car door close behind me. I look out into the lot and don't see any headlights or anything, but I'm not too worried because, again, it's a hotel, lots of people get dropped off and come by late at night. I start scrolling through Twitter and hear a loud roar from a man. I get up, already shaking, and look around. And I see his Volkswagen Golf parked about 10 feet away from me. The lights in the car are on, and there's a bunch of smoke in the car. He's rooting through crap in his backseat, making sounds like a flipping animal and just talking gibberish. I immediately call my mom and start walking down to the other end of the building where she is, and she's looking at me head on and tells me to run through the phone and don't look back. Apparently at that point he was walking behind me, quickly. By the time I get to her, I turn around and he's already walking back. I'm so shaken my mom said F this and called 911 this time, because it's now been around 35 minutes and no officer has come from just calling the police department. An officer comes 10 minutes later, which I recorded on my phone, and tells us that she actually had responded to the first call, and at that point he had gone to an ATM, gotten cash, and bought a room for the night at our hotel. She said she personally talked to him herself. She has a bit of an attitude with my mom. I'm now listing this completely based off of the recording, who after my mom had said, "Do you not see the odd behavior?" And the cop literally when it's not illegal to have odd behavior, ma'am. He is a guest here. And my mom says he's acting like he's on drugs. And the cop said he may be. It's not illegal to be on drugs, it's only illegal to possess them. I can't if he's high, it's only if he's possessing them that I can take criminal action. To which my mom replies, well clearly if he's high he's most likely got drugs in his possession, don't you think? The cop then basically said she understood my mom's concerns, and while his behavior is a little bizarre, the attempted window smashing is a he said she said, and because he is now a paying guest she cannot go against the matter any further and leaves. My mom and I are inside for the night in our room, and in my bedroom I kept the window cracked because the AC wasn't the best and I heard him walk around the building time and time again until I eventually fell asleep. When I woke up around 7 a.m., he was gone. I have so many other creepy stories staying at this place, and it really is shocking if you knew what town it was. I would witness drug deals going down at 3 a.m. when we first started staying there and I lived on the 3rd floor, people engaging in affairs, etc. One night I had gone over to my aunt's house, which was about 35 minutes away, and on the way home had a friend on the phone to keep me company. I pulled into a parking spot right at the door, and it was around 9:30 p.m. I was just sitting there for about 5 minutes when I saw a man's silhouette walking down the walkway slowly, coming closer to my car. I didn't think much of it because people walk their dogs a lot at night, or go out to smoke. But then he slowed way down as he got to my car and stood directly in front of the hood, staring at me through the windshield. I stared back but I couldn't see anything besides the black silhouette and the end of the cigarette lit and just said to my friend, there's a guy just standing. Like right outside my car staring at me. And she yelled, text your dad. Text your dad right now. I'm assuming he had heard my friend, because he then swiftly walked around the corner and disappeared. My dad came running down the stairs, bless him because at that point we were on the 3rd floor, and by the time he had come running out the man was gone. At that point, my parents wouldn't even let me out at the pool and hot tub area by myself anymore because they noticed that the hotel was being used for human trafficking/intimacy work with pimps and so on. They wanted me to text them as soon as I arrived at the hotel and not dilly-dally in the parking lot, just get inside and keep a close eye on my surroundings. Again, really surprising for that area. I'm thankful I'm back in my house, where the only sounds I hear at night are bears or raccoons trying to root through my trash, and I hope I never have to live in a hotel ever again. What 100% fact is the hardest to believe? 1. You know when you get up too fast and feel dizzy? Squeezing your butt cheeks together stops the dizziness. 2. George Washington passed away in 1799. Dinosaurs were discovered in 1824. George Washington didn't know that dinosaurs existed or what a dinosaur was. 3. We land on the moon before someone thought to add wheels to suitcases. 4. All of the Botox in the entire world down to the last gram is produced in a single factory in Westport, County Mayo, Ireland. 5. There are more castles in Germany than there are McDonald's in the United States. 6. A graveyard is connected to a church while a cemetery is not. 7. A single tablespoon of oil can calm about half an acre worth of water. It spreads out to form a single molecule thick layer on top of the water. This is why oil spills are so harmful and destructive. The largest one, the BP oil spill, was about 61.5 million tablespoons, or about 68,000 miles of damage. 8. The Sahara Desert, you can still find seashells in the sand there. 9. If you put every animal on Earth in a bag and then picked one out randomly, you would have a 1 out of 5 chance in picking a beetle. 10. Billion people from both China and India didn't exist, they would still be number 1 and 2 most populated nations in the world. 11. There is enough water in Lake Superior to cover North and South America and water 1 foot deep. 12. Every human could fit into a cubic mile. 13. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. Roughly by a factor of 10, 14, a moose can dive underwater down to nearly 20 feet in search of food. 15. Clouds weigh hundreds of thousands of pounds full of water and effortlessly float above our heads. With no support, no structure, just weight floating around above us and we're like, yep, totally believable because they're clouds duh. 16. Lightning bolts can reach temperatures 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. 17. If you laid out all of your arteries, veins and capillaries, they would measure more than 60,000 miles long. 18. A man named Michael Lotito ate an entire airplane, it took him 2 years. 19. If 2 pieces of the same type of metal touch in space, they will bond and be permanently cold welded together. 20. This will definitely wind up on a TikTok video with Subway surfers in the background.